The soul that humans possess can be named Addeya, which is their purest and clearest essence. At a certain point, humans began to become aware of their Addeya souls and became able to manifest their own. A man says that when he manifested his, a huge sword appeared, and another man is surprised, asking him to show it. Addeya began to be used as words or part of a sentence, as demonstrated by the man when he summoned his sword. Humans were able to manifest Addeya as a psychic object at any moment. The man asks his colleague what his ability would be, and his friend, however, responds that he has the power to make earth bricks. Humanity, again, when this happened, began to create a ranking system. An E-ranking was a reason for mockery, and souls that were used to be equal were now classified in a hierarchy. That man warns that he cannot be friends with someone of rank E, and in the end, people were all labeled. After that, degenerate students became tools used to improve the country's status, being placed on the front lines of war. This is one of the schools, the Special Training School of Honda. In the middle of the schoolyard, a boy runs while others try to catch him. However, this is a very skilled boy who can easily defend himself and summons a giant iron axe. The man mocks, asking if this is all that the class 10 people can do, jumping on top of one of the students and telling them to try harder. The red-haired boy, in turn, before being hit, summons his Addeya, which are light iron sticks. He narrowly manages to defend against the attack, but continues to be pressured by the other student. The boy with the axe is very skilled and does not give anyone a chance to help the redhead, putting him in a very difficult situation. He gets angry and turns his head, calling for Park Jin-sung, and telling the student not to stand still. He then asks the man to do something. But the mentioned one awkwardly says that even if he says that, he doubts his help will change anything, leaving the man very irritated for his groupmate being a big useless. At this moment, while the fight is in full swing, the redhead informs in a threatening tone that they will have a chat after the fight is over. In the classroom, the protagonist takes a kick in his belly, making him groan in pain. The redhead asks if he will continue playing, and a student with glasses says they lost because of him. That redhead laments having joined this useless person and says they are very unlucky. Moreover, the one with glasses says it was expected from the last in the school's ranking. Without getting upset, our protagonist laughs while apologizing and agrees with the redhead's statement, depreciating himself for being the last in the ranking. Witnessing the man's audacity, the redhead prepares to attack him more violently than ever. He sends that useless person to hell, and when he tries to hit his face, the protagonist barely dodges. After escaping the mess, the student asks if asking to die wasn't a bit too much and if he couldn't just give up. The redhead tells the rank F that since they are tired, they will hit him 10 times for each injured team member. Our hero, in turn, thinks it doesn't make sense for a tired person to want to hit others, and that if he lets himself be beaten, it will cause the aggressor to be punished. Understanding that at this rate he will be beaten until the break without anyone to help him, wisely the protagonist runs with his arms up asking for help. During the escape, the redhead questions the man's audacity to run from him and orders his minions to catch that bastard, while the students in the classroom laugh, watching everything. However, at a certain point, our hero finds himself in a tight spot surrounded by bullies. The one with glasses says they will control themselves and only hit to the point where he won't need to complain to the teacher. Moreover, they prohibit the use of Addeya. They kick the protagonist, and when he falls to the ground, a cowardly act begins with students laughing at him and several joining around to kick him. One of the men says he is ashamed to be in the same room as this trash, and another sarcastically asks why a failed rank F still comes to school. Our hero starts trying to recover, but the pain prevents him from speaking. After gathering some strength, he apologizes for his team losing because of him. The redhead gets very angry at the audacity to respond, and the one with glasses says that rank F is already getting on his nerves. Suddenly, the teacher enters the room, ordering all students to sit and informing them he has good news for everyone. The bullies notice the teacher's presence and are disappointed because they hadn't finished being the protagonist. Changing their personality completely, they start sucking up to the teacher, asking the reason for his happiness and if he is finally going to get married. And after the students start laughing, the teacher tells them to shut up. Our protagonist doesn't know what's happening and says he feels uncomfortable. The teacher informs them that their school has finally been chosen by the government as a capable school. With feet on the desk, a student draws the attention of the classroom coordinator and says that seeing how the man is speaking, he receives some strange proposal somewhere again. This is Byam Gyeong, a typical bully with average skills. The teacher, in turn, approaches the student saying that the break is over, so he should sit properly. In this case, Byam asks him to simply stop doing things like that, but the teacher says he is the one who decides, so the student should get used to it. Moreover, he informs that everything is thanks to the performance that their seniors, the third-year students, showed. From now on, this school will become a pilot test field for a military system. This means that all students will receive a military ranking based on their skills, which leaves them confused and anxious. All students are now companions and should be aware of this. The teachers of each class received ranks from second lieutenant to platoon commander, and they will now follow him as the commander of the 10th platoon. Byam questions what the teacher will do with the students there, wondering if they are the 10th platoon because they are from class 10. However, the teacher tells the student to stop complaining because this is a government initiative, so just make sure to do your best. During training, they will also practice saluting like the military, and there are probably several people there trying to recruit students from their school. In this case, as he stands up, the teacher informs them that this means all students are now soldiers. Realizing that things will now be done in military style, the rank F student asks the teacher what will happen if they don't want to follow this way. The teacher is curious about the student's question and thinks about how to respond. In this case, he informs them that they will not force anyone, and if they don't want to participate, they can request a transfer to another school from the government. In light of this, our hero Jin-sung doesn't understand the placement, and the instructor then asks the student to think carefully about the opportunity because he already knows the reason. Jin apologizes for not understanding everything being put forth, and one of the students asks why they are becoming a military school so suddenly, making another agree because at least the reason should be given. The educator explains again that everything is due to the third-year students who are a truly special group, and they helped this school become a military school because they all received the rank of sergeant. After throwing a box on the desk with all the third-year student certifications, the students are very surprised to see this. The teacher is very proud of those students' work, saying they are the bright future of Korea and informing them they were recognized by the government. Only the top-ranked second-year students receive the rank of corporal, but most of the second-year students will now be corporals. The ranking evaluation can be done by the platoon commander of each class, who can come to the teacher anytime as he will be available. While their ranking insignia is not yet attached to their uniform, they should be kept properly, and later they will receive a notebook. The notebook will be responsible for sending insignia, but Jin, however, raises his hand, informing he hasn't received it yet. The teacher, as far as he is concerned, informs that among all the school students, including the first-year students, there is only one student who was unable to receive a ranking. This student is Jin-sung, who should start training to become a soldier, and this information leaves our hero shocked. In the teacher's room, the teacher receives a visit from Jin-sung, who questions the reason for being called there. The teacher says it's nothing serious but believes they should discuss Jin's future. Going straight to the point, he asks what he thinks about transferring to another school, and this unexpectedly leaves our hero uncomfortable and surprised by the proposal. That teacher explains that the school is already difficult for him, and when they transition to the military academy, Jin won't be able to withstand it for long. Our protagonist tries to argue, saying the teacher should consider his hidden potential, asking what he would do if he suddenly performed well. Such a statement leaves the teacher surprised because it's something he never thought of. He then laughs, mocking Jin and affirming that he has a great sense of humor. In this situation, Jin gets irritated because it was the first time his teacher looked at our protagonist, and it was only to laugh at his face. The educator warns that the student ranking system will be formed and Jin's life will become even more difficult because he won't be able to take care of all the students. As predicted by our hero, the teacher already knows he suffers bullying but simply doesn't want a useless rank F student in his class. Out of curiosity, Jin asks the teacher if he thinks there is any ranking for souls. And the teacher starts laughing, thinking it's a joke, but obviously he is closing his hand and changing the atmosphere. Jin says he understands but doesn't believe he has any. After everything is resolved, the bell rings and everyone returns to the classroom. While writing on the board, the teacher says that since they transition to squads, the sergeants will call the roll. Then a woman begins to count that the first squad of the 10th platoon has 10 present and 0 missing. The redhead informs that the second squad has 11 present and 0 missing. This makes our hero uncomfortable because they are pretending to be army. After a few seconds of silence, the class teacher asks about the third squad's reports, but Bayan questions if he has the right to do this, and the teacher responds that the student is the sergeant of the third squad, so stop stalling and do it quickly. The student then reports that there are 10 present and 2 missing, but one is in the bathroom, and the other he wishes would disappear. In this case, Bayan claims there are 8 present in total, and all the students start laughing. However, Bayan's squad has 9 people, confirming that the student left Jin out when calling the roll. Around him, students mockingly laugh at Jin, asking the educator if they should include trainees in the count. But the teacher ignores it and just concludes the roll call. On the blackboard, it is informed that instead of having a class today, they will have a field experience. At the moment, there are government scouts hidden among them who will evaluate how students react to the environment. Then a student raises her hand, asking the teacher to get to the most important part of everything. And after getting irritated with the students' lack of manners, he informs them that the students will form battle squads, including the first, second, and third years. Moreover, the teams have already been chosen by the scouts. In this case, one of the students complains that the third-year students will fight each other and won't care about them, but the educator asks everyone to calm down. Jin, upon hearing all that, thinks he will be able to spend a good time just watching. The teacher asks BM Deong to confirm if his ADDICTIVE is rank C. Embarrassed, he asks why the teacher wants to know. The teacher questions the ranking of his compatibility, and Bayan asks why this interrogation is happening. Understanding the message, the educator then informs that Bayan's first squad will fight against the first squad of the third year, which leaves the student desperate for what he brought upon himself. That teacher now sends everyone except the third squad to the field and asks the third squad to prepare for the battle as they have 20 minutes. As they leave the room, the students wish good luck to the third squad, with some saying they feel sorry for them. After everyone leaves, the students in the group panic, saying they are doomed, and on top of that, they still have a rank F in the team. The tension among colleagues begins to rise, with them fighting among themselves because of Jin. But our hero continues lying on his desk, thinking he just wanted to rest a bit, and now discovered they will have to fight the third-year students. Approaching the protagonist's desk, the squad sergeant calls his attention, calling him a pile of shit. Jin, with a smile, asks if the sergeant called him, and very angry, Bayan slaps the hero's head, judging him as trash. He pulls the protagonist's hair, saying that the way the student talks makes him angry, and asks if Jin wants to get beaten up even before they start the battle. As he throws him away, Bayan says that the monstrous senior An Sung-go is in the first squad of the third year. It would be difficult even with all the jokers in his class together, but since the protagonist is taking up an important spot, the outcome is already obvious. Jin, for his part, says that since they will lose anyway, it doesn't matter if he's there or not. And the squad sergeant, pulling him by the tie, asks aggressively if eating a pile of shit and losing seem the same to Jin, asking also if the rank F will take responsibility if his ranking drops. But daringly, Jin says that Bayan's ranking is not high enough for him to worry about anyway. This makes the blonde even angrier, but our hero realizes the monster he's created and tries to apologize, withdrawing his statement. In this case, the blonde calms down a bit because since Jin will appear outside, he can't beat him up yet. Then our protagonist asks with trepidation if being beaten by soldiers or high-ranking third-year students wouldn't be the same. And this gives Bayan the idea to cede the function of sergeant of the third squad to Jin, who will thus receive all the attention. He asks if our hero can handle it, and the same has no choice but to agree to do everything imposed on him. This way, the two are already settled on what they will do in the match. And from now on, Jin will act as the personal shield of the real sergeant of the third squad. After some time, the battle between the first-year and third-year students finally begins. In the school year, the teacher tests the microphone to start speaking over the speaker. All students are gathered for the event that will begin soon. The third squad with its first platoon is presented along with its leader, and the second squad of the 10th platoon, also with Bayan having prominence. After the formalities, the teacher asks if both along with their squads are ready. The teacher is very respectful with the third-year squad leader, calling him leader differently from the other students. He then directs his gaze to two people on the balcony of the building, asking An to show his abilities as much as possible because the scouts are watching. And An then says he will do his best while cooperating with the squad, leaving the teacher satisfied because he knows his student's capability. At this moment, all group members are sent to their positions, which makes them a bit uncomfortable, but rules are rules. The real start of the competition is given that each leader receives a bracelet. Bayan pulls Jin by the jacket, calling him trash and scaring our hero. That teacher continues informing that the bracelet uses the power of ADDICTIVE to protect the user from the shock but breaks after a certain amount of damage. However, once the bracelet breaks, the person is out, and Jin asks the squad leader why he is being pulled like a puppy. Complimenting, the teacher warns that this time, considering the difference in experience between the third and second classes, the methods will be different, and Bayan tells Jin to stay quiet. Class 2 to 10 has an additional requirement that they need to hold out for 5 minutes to count as a victory. In this case, the second-year students start losing hope. Setting a timer of 5 minutes on his watch, our hero wonders if the teacher will reconsider his transfer if he wins the match. Putting both sides in salute and with an encouraging smile, the teacher states that the practical part of the contest will begin. After the start of the contest is given, Bayan quickly pulls our hero by the jacket and starts running. Jin doesn't understand what's happening and asks the group leader to wait, but he warns that he had already told the student to stay quiet earlier. He is running because in his mind, the most coherent strategy is just to wait for the 5 minutes to end. Guillaume's group students ask their leader to instruct them on their formations, saying that the Sunmis are coming. But they are surrounded by third-year students, getting no response. Bayan, in turn, tells everyone to stay silent and asks the third squad to simply protect him because they will win if they stay there for 5 minutes. The fight was happening humiliatingly for the younger students because the superiority of their seniors is simply surreal. One of Bayan's group students is put on the ground, immobilized, and has his bracelet removed. Meanwhile, another third-year student passes over the students, leaving everyone in shock. The woman stares at Guillaume, who trembles with fear for making eye contact with her. Faced with this, she prepares for a charge against the two. Bayan tries to use Jin as a shield to protect himself, asking him to block, but our protagonist doesn't understand how he is supposed to do that. At the same time, as the woman is almost reaching them, the blonde curses the hero, calling him a piece of shit and shouting to block however he can. In this case, Jin asks if they shouldn't at least run in another direction. But amid all that, looking at his teacher, he is smiling, implying that he will take care of the protagonist's transfer. In this case, Jin gets deeply irritated, moving away from Bayan and becoming the target of the third-year student who thinks an internal conflict is happening. But when she gets very close to the hero, he grabs her wrist, almost tearing the bracelet from her hand. This makes the girl confused because it doesn't make sense for a mere rank F to be able to make an offensive against her. Deciding to stop underestimating him, the woman activates her ADDICTIVE, which is armor. Armored at, except for her head, covers her entire body, increasing her defense. Witnessing his senior's ADDICTIVE, Jin not only praises its beauty but also its functions. But the girl tells the protagonist not to play dumb and asks if he reacted to her speed. However, more important than her question is that the squad leader is managing to escape. But checking the timer on the watch, only 3 minutes and 5 seconds had passed, so the hero still couldn't rest. Thinking he will have to stop her however he can clumsily, he asks if he can call his senior Nuna, and that he is not flirting or anything. Moreover, he apologizes if he made her angry, saying that from this moment he will call her just Samba. The woman in turn says that if this is an attempt to buy time, it will be useless, and tells our hero to show his ADDICTIVE. Jin says that destiny brought them together, so they should at least introduce themselves, but the woman threatens, saying that if he refuses, she will fight as she is, saying to wait a bit. That girl gives him one more chance, commenting that at least his seems more valuable than his colleagues. But Jin asks why the rush and that she should know that keeping calm is an important quality. Already very irritated with the situation and walking towards the hero, the protagonist continues saying that his father used to tell his mother that when she was angry. Realizing that the situation would get ugly for him, our hero finally decides to show his ADDICTIVE. With a smile, he stops and warns that he will release it now. A blue light begins to form in Jin's hand, making the girl anxious about what awaits her. However, the hero summons a mere rank F dagger with low attack power and no special abilities. That girl is disappointed and starts to recognize the protagonist's identity. Jin questions his Sunbae about why she suddenly has this expression like she's in pain and says she should go to the infirmary. Remembering the rumors, the girl asks if Jin is the infamous rank F student, and he confirms, disappointing her again. The hero explains that he considers this dagger an S rank outside the standard daggers. But his Sunbae leaves him talking alone to go away, saying she thought he was more valuable because of his reaction, but she believes is just luck. Asking the girl not to go, the hero says she asked to see, so she doesn't have the right to be so disappointed. In this case, the hero states that if she continues walking, he will attack her from behind, threatening that this is his last warning. But she says there is no reason to waste time with rank F in a battle where time is limited. At this moment, Jin incredibly fulfills his promise and prepares to attack her from behind. Because he already knew that due to his Sunbae's sincerity, she would ignore him. An attack with his dagger quickly approaches the woman's face, but she manages to defend with her armor, though she remains surprised. After having his attack thwarted, Jin, a bit embarrassed, comments that piercing that armor is as difficult as it seems. Seeing Jin's pathetic strike, the students in the stands start laughing because this was already expected from a rank F. Even after being attacked, that woman can't see our hero as an opponent and just gets bored. She says that even with good reflexes, every ADDICTIVE is like this, and there is no way to bypass luck. So, as confirmed by her, the attack didn't work, and now she no longer wants to give any attention to Jin. Our protagonist, however, thinks he at least managed to buy some time with his attempt to fight. But after looking at the clock, the timer reveals there are still 2 minutes and 7 seconds left. In light of this, Bayan curses all his group members for not being able to withstand a mere 5 minutes. That girl, in turn, scolds him, asking if that is something a person who only runs away should say. Desperate, Bayan bluffs that he was taking it easy with his Sunbae, so he advises her to stop while she can. However, this only makes her laugh and state that it is not necessary to take it easy with her. In this case, she now wants to see a demonstration of merit from the blonde, saying he will need more proof if he wants to be better than An Sungho. Bayan thinks he is very unlucky, but visualizes a rock a few meters away from him. So he is happy that something went right and that he found a large stone, thanking the woman for having scattered them all around. The Sunbae questions when the blonde will prove his merit, and he says that if that's what she wants, he will show her, placing his hands on the ground and causing an earthquake. Byam Jiang is rank C. In this case, he must have been hiding his true strength. In an attempt to warn, Jin informs the armored Sunbae that this is dangerous. Byam places his hands on the ground and activates Extract, which begins to form a rock, revealing it as a huge rock that will be used for his offensive. Now he uses Shake. These are the blonde's abilities, Extract and Shake, classified as rank B, which can use a stuck object as a weapon and ignore its weight. Seeing this, the students think she's a third year, but even so, they are unsure if she will be okay due to the rock's size. She then realizes that the blonde was not just running away, but was waiting for a rock he could use with his ADDICTIVE. Having his plan uncovered, Lion starts laughing, praising his Sunbae, and lifting the huge rock with his hands. Now several meters off the ground and throwing that huge rock in the girl's direction, the blonde just tells the third-year student to receive his enormous power, and thus become a stepping stone for him to use to show his merit. Proud of his power, Bayan asks if she thinks being in the third year makes her better than him and affirms that he will be the winner, but someone appears behind him, asking for permission. Realizing whose voice it was already too late, as An, the squad leader, had already buried Bayan's body in the ground with a punch. The blonde complains about a third-year student attacking someone this way from behind. In contrast, that girl struggles to block Bayan's attack, saying it is stronger than expected. But she believes that with her ADDICTIVE, she can definitely endure. However, the squad leader intervenes, saving her from a potential accident. This irritated her deeply because it was a good opportunity to show all her merit. An, for his part, informs that the attack was a bit dangerous, and he has the duty to protect his squad members. In this case, the woman asks if what her leader is trying to say is that she is not capable of dealing with that. And An says he believes Jai can definitely resist the rock alone. But the blonde would not have allowed her to defend herself peacefully, as right now, Bayan tries to attack An with a baseball bat. However, the squad leader activates his ability, I will definitely catch you, easily subduing the leader of the younger students. This ability has an overall rating of B- and overall combat skill of a +, capable of catching anyone he wants to hit within a fixed distance. And our protagonist begins to consider the end of the battle because his squad leader was deceived. So after finishing Bayan, An looks at Jin in a way that scares him from head to toe. Faced with this, Jin tries to surrender, and An comments on the hero warning Jai even before the student activated his ADDICTIVE, questioning the reason. And saying that the squad leader can be a bit wild, Jin explains that he made the decision because he didn't know what he would do. In this case, the third-year student says our hero is a terrible liar, and the protagonist reiterates his surrender. But An doesn't care about that and activates his ability, I will definitely catch you, grabbing him and causing the hero's dagger to fly, leaving him in a difficult situation. But the dagger ends up returning to his hand, making his offensive possible again. With one arm free from the grab, Jin prepares to attack, but hits An just to free himself without hitting him with the blade, saying he should listen when he is talking. The two separated, with An starting to notice something in the hero, because escaping his ability like that is not normal. With a serious look, the third-year student questions our protagonist about his identity, and activates his spirit aura, demonstrating all the immense power he has. Jin informs him that he is from the 3rd squad in the 10th platoon, the rank F student Park Jin-sung. A bit disappointed, the veteran understands, and desperate, Park Jin notices that there is still 1 minute left for the match to end. An asks where the 2nd-year student is looking, and Jin says his attention is a bit alarming, Trying to buy more time, the hero points to the crowd, saying everyone seems excited to see how screwed he is and also says it is horrible. The third-year student in turn realizes this failed attempt to buy time and says he hates people who do things like this. Scared, Jin asks what his senior believes he can do alone, and An asks why the hero isn't even trying to win. Park Jin responds that he is just a rank F, and in the end, none of this matters, but the veteran explains that he is not giving a warning but rather advice. Continuing, it is said that in this big competition, scouts will choose any student with good performance, and those who don't have skills will be transferred. In this case, our hero decides to change his posture, warning his sunbae. He questions the reason for being called to attention, so Jin warns that he doesn't want to be transferred. In this case, An advises the hero to follow his advice, and with a different demeanor than usual, the hero comments that since he will have to fight seriously with the veteran, he's not sure if the same will be well after the fight. Suddenly, the veins on Jin's face start pumping blood at a much higher rate than normal, dilating and making the blood vessels in his eyes apparent. A red aura of blood and pain surrounds our hero, and he already looks like a completely different person. At this moment, the Idea dagger undergoes a crucial transformation to increase Jin's strength. His physical abilities increase 3 times compared to his original physical skills, and now it becomes possible to identify the vital points of his opponent. Moreover, it is possible to see the most effective route to destroy the opponent with the hero's current skills. But it can only be deactivated if he is able to completely destroy the Idea or take his life, being thus consumed by the desire to kill. This is the Idea of the Absolute Assassin, a unique hidden ability of rank S. With a murderous aura and hands covering his face, our hero undergoes a terrifying transformation due to releasing the power of his Idea. An watches, trying to understand what is happening, and comes to a conclusion. He says he understands that, in this case, the rank F dagger is not the full extent of his Idea. Activating again the ability "You won't escape from me," the veteran makes his combat pose, preparing for a fiercer battle. The ability's description appears, and Jin comments that it is rank B-, laughing and mocking that it is worse than he thought. After being analyzed by a mere freshman, the veteran freezes because he doesn't understand the true extent of his opponent's power. An asks if the hero has the power to see other people's Idea abilities, and Jin starts laughing. While laughing, the protagonist apologizes because he can no longer hold back and questions, brandishing his dagger if he will be able to stop him. At this moment, the veteran realizes the gravity of the situation and begins to understand Jin's power extent. The bloodlust emanating from him was too much for anyone to bear, so An tries to counter with a provocation, but our hero remains unfazed. Spinning his dagger, Jin tells his veteran to try not to get too hurt. A blonde student asks why everyone is standing still, and another says that maybe Sambo Sunbae thinks his opponent is not worthy. The redhead, in turn, gets irritated, questioning why his veteran is standing still and says he is there just to see him finish Jin-san. However, An is extremely cautious because at this moment only he knows the real potential of his opponent. At first glance, Jin may seem to have a relaxed posture, but there is no opening for an attack. The girl from before perceives the hero's aura and gets intimidated, realizing that it is completely different from when she talked to him earlier, and that with this change of atmosphere, it would not be good to leave him alone there, because visualizing that man in combat with his colleague, something doesn't seem right. Trembling and informing everyone that they have a change of plans. Now the third-year students go as a group to Jin in an attempt to stop him. A historic conflict is about to begin between 3 great powers of the school. A dense dust cloud rises, and after it settles, it is revealed that Jin was immobilized by the students. On the ground, he laughs, asking why his sunbaes are so aggressive and comments that it hurts his back. An, for his part, asks Jai the meaning of all this. Immobilizing our hero, Jai affirms that just as he has the duty to protect his squad, she also has the duty to protect hers. With everyone in front of him, An, frustrated, says she didn't need to do that. However, she asks if he is sure, because in that short period of time when they attacked Jin, a fierce battle happened. And for a certain period of time, the hero even had the advantage, reversing at a speed that most people would not be able to react to. An says that to tell the truth, he is not so sure, but he opens a wide smile and starts thinking about something. Jai didn't understand the reason for the laughs, so her colleagues said that if he were her, he would deactivate her Idea before it broke even more. Finally, the woman notices what happened to her body after the battle. That attack from our hero caused enough damage to cause significant harm to her ability. Suddenly, the third-year students notice that their bracelets are broken and talk among themselves about the reason. One of them questions if someone accidentally deactivated the protective Idea, but some veterans understand the real meaning behind it. In front of the immobilized younger student, An calls Park Jin-sun's attention. Embarrassed, Jin praises the good teamwork of the opposing group while suffering from back pain. The veteran is pensive, so Park cuts the tension, trying to start a conversation with him. Thus, the third-year student questions if our hero has already returned to normal. Jin is surprised that 5 minutes have already passed, so he asks if there is any possibility of them getting off him. An says they will finish this duel another time without external interferences, but the protagonist declines this invitation for an eventual rematch, saying that the fight they had just now was enough. However, his veteran is determined, not accepting no as an answer, advising the hero to prepare for when they finish the duel. In an attempt to deny once again, the protagonist shouts for his sunbae, saying he doesn't want to continue the fight. However, everyone leaves without paying attention to the younger student's wishes. In this case, he lies on the ground, commenting on how hard life is. And the class teacher, incredulous, announces that from the 10th platoon of the second year, the third squad of Team Young are the winners. In the principal's office, someone says they can't believe that the counselor is in a mediocre place like this. In this case, the counselor laughs, explaining that actually, no one knows he comes here. Dispensing with the small talk, he asks if the files he requested are ready, and the other man promptly hands over the files, confirming they are finished. After flipping through a bit, the famous student An Sumgo catches the superintendent's attention. That other man comments that An is really an above-average student even compared to other students worldwide, making him a pride for Hyundai. But flipping through more, the counselor notices someone without great achievements recorded in elementary school, but who hasn't lost a single battle since entering high school. His colleague says that if the student's ADDICTIVE ranking were higher, he could be someone, but the counselor counters, saying it's because of his ADDICTIVE that he has come so far. Then a note in the files catches his attention, informing it as a recruit, which makes him very surprised. The man in the brown suit explains that this student has a worse ranking than the first-year students, and that they place him in the combat class even after complaints. That counselor thinks he asked about someone else's rank, but this one is much more interesting. He then asks if they put the student's past on the back of the page and is confirmed by the other teacher, but he comments that it's not something important. In the special notes, it is explained that the student lost his parents at 8 years old and suffered many abuses. Moreover, his house was invaded by bandits. All this combined to awaken his ADDICTIVE, but normally people awaken ADDICTIVE at 8 years old. However, the bandits invaded the student's house when he was 10 years old, and as a result, he awakened that same day. An ADDICTIVE awakened late due to an urgent situation is intriguing, but being rank F is not very pleasing. The counselor, for his part, asks if his general compatibility was also classified as rank F when he was 10 years old. And the man in the brown suit informs he doesn't know for sure, but he can certainly guarantee that when the student entered the school, he was rank F. Thinking about this, the counselor believes that the general compatibility being classified as rank F may be something intentional to camouflage the real potential of the ADDICTIVE. In this case, he asks for a personal meeting with Park Jin-sung, which leaves his colleague very confused. The teacher tries to warn that this student will soon be transferred to another school because he is rank F. In light of this, the principal asks his colleague for a minute of attention. Gathering courage, he asks why his superior transformed their school into a military academy. Apparently, the counselor gets irritated, making the principal start thinking about several things he might have done wrong at that moment. After sweating cold, he apologizes, saying it was a mistake to ask such a question. But contrary to expectations, that counselor responds calmly that they are just preparing for northern threats. But with this system, he believes that some students can change completely from how they were in the past to something better. At this moment, our protagonist's morning routine is as follows. He wakes up at 6 in the morning with the sun shining on his face, starts getting ready for school, and finally finishes. He looks at himself in the mirror, telling himself that he will do his best once again. And then he leaves home around 6:30 a.m. After leaving home, he says goodbye. Passing between buildings and trees, it is said that our hero usually goes to school very early. But that's because he is responsible for all kinds of cleaning and other tasks throughout the school recently. On the way to school, a long-haired blonde notices that our hero is a second-year student. She says she doesn't think they need to enforce the dress code, and another notices that this man is the only intern in the entire school. Jin gets embarrassed, asking if he is that famous and saying he feels a bit flattered. However, one of the students comments that the man is more idiotic than he thought, and the blonde believes that the first squad members really let their guard down. One of them recalls that Jin's ADDICTIVE is a simple dagger, thinking it is something useless. In the end, they don't understand why he managed to resist An Sumho. After some time has passed, the protagonist beats the erasers outside the window to clean them. However, he notices that the chalk isn't coming off and comments that it is unfortunate that a school supported even by the government suffers from such poor conditions. Later, Jin starts mopping the floor. Incredibly, he always does an excellent job, leaving everything shining. The student of the classes believes that the redhead really managed to do his part by running away, and the mentioned one asks why his friend didn't do that with them first. Placing his hands on Jin's shoulders, the one with glasses says he is very impressed, and praises him, saying that he really is an S-rank when it comes to being unpredictable. However, he mocks, saying that our hero was probably unlucky. After the battle squad fight against the third-year students, Park's image in the school began to improve. On a typical day, while sleeping on his desk, Bayan aggressively wakes him up by slamming his hand on the desk. Our hero wakes up a bit disoriented and asks if someone called for him, but in his mind, he already expects the worst, knowing that he will probably get beaten. However, the blonde just says he couldn't get the math homework last time. In this case, he asks Jin to get it for him to copy the answers. At this moment, our hero is confused by his routine treatment changing so suddenly. Thanks to this, the bullies stop bothering him, but more and more, the number of requests the protagonist received increased. Thus, many students started handing him all kinds of assignments, leaving him naturally exhausted. Already in the classroom, a student celebrates that, thank God, the class is over, and the teacher tells everyone to be quiet. The teacher asks if the students know that today is the last day to join a club, so the students confirm they know. Jin knows that choosing a club is mandatory for all second-year students. In this case, those who haven't joined one yet have until the end of the day to choose. This creates confusion in the hero's mind, who doesn't know which club to join. Moreover, there is still the possibility that they won't let him join any. The teacher, for his part, warns that they will have a private conversation with those who don't join a club, making it clear that Park may be included. In light of this, most students start laughing, speculating that no club will accept a rank F because he won't even pass the entrance test. Our hero, however, remains resilient about humiliations, thinking that his colleagues can laugh as much as they want. But when checking the choices he has, he encounters a varied list of combat clubs and guerrilla techniques. All the clubs are related to military use and the use of ADDICTIVE. While Jin reads, the students talk among themselves about which club they will join, with one of them saying they will go to the battle squad. because the club's evaluation is pretty decent, which excites the others who follow together to sign up for the same group. Jin, however, stays alone in the classroom, mulling over the received information. He doesn't know what to do and really hopes someone will remove the rank F ADDICTIVE condition for entry. After crossing out some options, noticing they are not clubs, but rather people with connections, our hero finds one that doesn't involve the use of ADDICTIVE, being exclusively for physical development purposes. Finally, his work is done because this club doesn't have the limitation that affects him, and since it seems like a simple physical training club, there shouldn't be many applicants. Although it was a bit strange that a single club was using the popular gym on its own. Upon arriving at the place, some people are having disagreements, and Jin hopes not to have any problems because it was stated that no ADDICTIVE usage would be involved. In the popular gym, our hero finds it strange the number of people who are there to sign up, making him question if he is really in the right place while taking the last spot in line. Looking again at the paper, Jin is sure that the physical development club is indeed in the gym. At this moment, the students, with some disgust, notice that the rank F veteran is also there. One of them says that even though he is a veteran, he is technically an intern, so maybe the correct thing is to talk informally. The hero doesn't understand why the first-year students are there because it's not mandatory for them to join a club yet. But then the real reason comes to light with the students getting excited about the club president's arrival, making our protagonist curious. The moment he realizes the leader's identity, Jin drops his application paper, thinking he needs to get out of there as quickly as possible. But On notices his old opponent's presence and goes towards Park Jin-sung. All the students start getting excited due to their idol's arrival, but our hero remains intimidated. A bit clumsy, the protagonist questions if On is really the club president. And the third-year student explains that he didn't expect him to come there, so he is very impressed with his junior. He asks if the junior didn't come there because he thought there would be few people, and Jin confirms, but still there are many applicants. On explains that this is not a club where anyone can join, but Park, sneaking out, says he is below the denomination of anyone. Seeing that just talking wasn't enough, the third-year student pulls our hero by the collar of his jacket to bring him inside the gym. He says he will distribute the entrance test and ask the protagonist to get the test with the rest of the applicants, all against his junior's will. Inside the club, On asks if all the applicants are there and realizes that this year they have many, so they will start now. The veteran informs them that the students should just follow his commands and that by doing the exercises until the end they pass, with these exercises being 30 burpees and 30 push-ups, followed by 30 burpees and 30 squats, closing the set. The first-year students hear that their leader will do the exercises with them, making them excited but remembering it as a set, getting into a serious state. It is said that if they manage to do the 10 sets without breaks, the pass is guaranteed, but this was too much for our hero. After a few minutes or hours of exercise, number 2 is eliminated for being too slow. Moreover, numbers 5 and 6 are also eliminated due to the terrible posture presented. On states that the exercise must be done at the same speed as him. Most students then throw themselves to the ground because they can't take it anymore. And Jin realizes that the group leader is doing all these exercises for just one set. However, he is doing it so easily without even changing his facial expression. Unlike the other students, this is one who can definitely be called a monster. Some students start to give up, and then the entire first group is eliminated. In this case, the second group's test starts right now. A girl in the group doesn't know what to do and believes she won't make it, while another gets scared but thinks that despite being scary is also cool. That girl pushes Jin, saying he should go first because he is her sunbae, and our hero tries to refuse. However, the boy in the group finishes pushing him with a kick, putting him in the test area. Facing his veteran, our protagonist is visibly anxious. To break the ice, he comments that his sunbae doesn't seem tired, and it's incredible that the two are almost the same age. However, this was not something pertinent to be commented on at the moment. Jin tries to appeal somehow, but ignorantly, the veteran declares the start of the second group's test. After some time and a lot of sweat dripping on the ground, Park, panting, comments that he can't do this, even having trained alone to withstand the mistreatment he received. So he thought he would do well in this kind of thing, but this is not something a normal human can do. Finally, the circuit ends, leaving the students completely drained of energy. On, for his part, praises the group for doing well and considers increasing the speed. But our hero shouts desperately that he can't do that. Later, those students from Group 2 are impressed that their rank F sunbae hasn't failed yet because they themselves have already failed. At this point, Jin's stamina can be judged as one of the best in the rank. In this case, his attack power being rank F is not logical. While doing the circuit, our protagonist comments that he trained a lot at home. But On tells him to stay quiet because now is the time to stay focused. In the stands, watching, the students believe their veterans are already on the 7th set. This was already expected from On Sung-ho, but the rank F sunbae was also doing well. The third-year student praises his performance, but Jin is already very tired, thinking that this is too much work. On comments that he already knew the hero's reaction speed was above normal due to their last encounter. So the veteran starts going even faster, leaving the students in the stands completely surprised. Seeing this, Jin could only try to keep up and be scared of the monster he was dealing with. One of the students says the end is near for the second-year student, but the girl points to the circuit, informing that he is managing. The rank F is keeping up with the national rank 1. Faced with this, the students change their posture and start supporting Jin. With only a few more movements left to complete the test, Park Jin is encouraged and tries to endure as much as possible. Finally, the circuits come to an end with On congratulating him for completing the admission test. At this moment, our hero falls to his knees but knowing his work is done. He was the only one of all the people to pass, but obviously he didn't fail to feel the effects of extreme exhaustion. The first-year students are impressed and praise Park Jin for his hard work. In this case, our hero, already lying on the ground, believes that it wasn't all bad because at least he was applauded. Approaching and extending his hand to the protagonist, An welcomes him to the HT club. Our hero thanks him but says he is leaving. However, the veteran doesn't let him go, saying that gym will start the next day. A bit irritated, Park Jin asks if his sunbae didn't hear what he said. Then An explains that the effects of the exercises are doubled when done together and has always been waiting for someone who could keep up with him. The protagonist denies having similar capacity to his veteran, saying he couldn't do even one more set. Moreover, he believed that the third-year student hated people like him, but An just ignores, laughing and saying it took a whole year to add one more member. Realizing the mess he got into, Jin recalls that he just wanted to join a club discreetly, but now he is completely screwed. Already in the classroom, our hero says he doesn't want to go to the club, and crouches beside a chair, starting to complain that he only had to go there, but suddenly all the attention turned to him. This is a scary club with only An Sung-ho as a member. Maybe it was a curse because he is chosen all the time, being the target of questions and envy day after day. Jin doesn't want to attend, but if he doesn't go, An will probably follow him again. In this case, our protagonist considers if he should just break his own arm. But he understands that this is not a good idea because his sunbae would only take him to the infirmary, and after being healed, he would end up being dragged. Suddenly, a woman appears, calling the attention of our hero and consequently scaring him. He looks to the side but seems not to recognize the woman. She asks if the student studies in that class, and Jin tries to remember if they really had such a beautiful girl in the class. To clarify things, Park Jin affirms it's him and asks what she wants from him. In this case, she presents a card saying she thinks they told him to use it to present himself here. It's the identification badge, leaving our hero a bit confused. The woman asks if our hero doesn't have a rank and he is embarrassed to respond. In a military act, she demands the rank and name of Jin, who identifies himself as such, affirming to be from the 2nd platoon and 10th member of the 3rd squad, but in training. After his reverence, our hero stands still, waiting for the girl's reaction, who doesn't understand the meaning of the mention in training, as perceived by Jin. Putting that aside, she extends her hand, saying it's a pleasure to meet him, and introduces herself as Kim Sayan. However, the protagonist is still in doubt. As explained by our hero, who is part of the 10th platoon, the woman informs that she will be part of the 2nd squad starting the next day. Understanding that she is a transfer student, Jin just asks her to take good care of him from now on. Saying she still has some work to do, the protagonist tries to leave the room. However, as always, he is pulled from behind and placed back inside the classroom, being pushed inside with even some aggression that makes him uncomfortable. After that, Kim Se-on puts Jin against the wall and rests her hands above the protagonist's shoulders. Jin tries to talk to the corporal, explaining that he needs to go somewhere now, but the girl doesn't care and says she needs a guide. The situation starts to get stressful for the hero, who only thinks that if his sunbae finds him there, things might get complicated. So in an attempt to have a voice in the conversation, our hero asks for a minute. He informs her that he's in a hurry right now and asks if Kim can ask someone else, but she refuses, saying she feels comfortable with him. It's questioned since when she feels this way, and with a scary look, the girl affirms that since now. With no choice, Jin accepts to guide the woman and asks where she wants to go, to which she responds wanting to reach where Surgeon An Sung-ho is. Finally excited, the protagonist comments that she should have said it earlier, because this is exactly where he is going now, but at the same time as he talks to the girl, An appears outside with a serious expression. Jin gets very scared by the 3rd-year student's sudden presence and screams in fright. An, for his part, asks if his junior plans to skip training, and our hero responds in salute that never. Kim, in front of the man, asks if he is the famous 3rd-year surgeon. Questioning if the woman is in class 2, he says she should show respect to her superior, but the girl says she heard that ranks are based on strength. So Kim asks if he shouldn't be stronger than her to be the superior, because it seems in her mind that the two are at the same level. An then adjusts his tie and asks if she wants him to confirm this for her. In light of this, a tension starts between the two, and Jin, for his part, says that they will crush him in the middle of this. Kim questions Surgeon Sung-ho if there is anyone he is dating, but he responds that there isn't, as already expected by our protagonist, because his veteran only works all day. In this case, the girl with some aggression says she hates rigid people like him, so An responds that it's okay because he also doesn't like her. Putting that aside, the corporal says it doesn't matter if it's a girlfriend or fiancé, but if he doesn't want to be bothered, he should do something outside the formality. An doesn't understand what she means, so Kim explains that her family is a bit noisy and that they are conservative, but she's only saying this for the surgeon's interest, in which case she advises him not to ignore it. After losing interest in the veteran, the girl asks if the recruit would like to go out with her. The same gets embarrassed by receiving such an intimate invitation so suddenly. However, she starts saying several things they have in common, and that she likes men who are at the same eye level as her. Jin then gets very embarrassed and starts trembling his voice to respond. The corporal is surprised but finds him cute for the current reaction. Thus, she asks the recruit what his ADDICTIVE is and his combat rank, being surprised that both are rank F. As always, our hero disappoints people when he decides to talk about himself. She says it's impossible for someone in the world to have rank F in everything. but he affirms that it is because he is right in front of her. Even in front of the truth, the corporal still can't believe it, so An interrupts, informing that they are going to train now. And with all the politeness in the world, he wishes the woman to leave. Already in the gym, our hero in his physical training starts doing pull-ups. In fact, not just simple pull-ups, but muscle-ups, already being on the last repetition. Kim says that initially she thought it was just an excuse to leave, but the hero is really training seriously. In this case, she sees him differently now. Jin, for his part, and very tired, just can't understand why the corporal followed them. She asks if the protagonist is okay, and he asks to be saved since she is already there. However, she refuses, affirming not having ties with Jin, who is disappointed because she previously said she had them to make him a guide. Our hero recoils on the ground, and Kim asks the sergeant why he is training someone like him. Because he is just a simple recruit, which hits the protagonist in his soul. An says that aside from the difference in levels, having an exercise partner is more than enough. In this case, the same approaches out of curiosity and says she doesn't care how far he goes with it, but asks what potential he saw in Jin. Faced with this question, Jin thinks about whether he should speak, and Kim insists because she really wants to know the secrets the boy has. In her mind, the veteran had already seen what the junior was capable of, so she also wanted to know. However, An says he has no idea what she is talking about and that she must have created wrong expectations about Park Jin. Kim approaches, questioning if the real reason will not be said. In this case, she decides to go ask the recruit himself, personally questioning him about the conversation with the veteran. However, the hero confirms that there is nothing special about him and that he is just a rank F student with the ability to be useless. Faced with this explanation, the two are very disappointed with the way the student describes himself. Then An pulls him by the back of the shirt, leaving our hero scared. No longer wanting to hear any nonsense, the next training is said to be about to start. While being dragged, Jin asks for help from Miss Kim Se-in, but gets no response. Already in the classroom, a teacher announces that today they have a transfer student, saying she can come in. It is revealed to us that this student is Kim Se-in, the problematic girl from earlier. The redhead comments on her being a transfer student in the middle of the year, and another praises her beauty. The girl asks the teacher where her seat is, and he says there is a spot at the end of Squad 1, but before that, she should introduce herself. Ignoring the teacher, she says she likes Squad 3. She asks the teacher to place her in Squad 3 while walking to the spot she wants to sit. However, Squad 3 has no vacancies now, and again ignoring the teacher, Kim says she wants to sit next to the protagonist, thus asking the student sitting next to Jin to leave and go somewhere else. The student tries to explain that despite everything, that spot belongs to him, but this girl is scary and slams the table, threatening to do something to the student if he doesn't move right away. In this case, the student changes his mind and becomes gentle with Kim, giving up the spot for her to sit. In light of this, someone calls the attention of the transfer student. This is Bayan, who questions who she thinks she is to act like this, identifying himself as the squad leader and demanding she state her rank and name. A bit convinced of herself, Kim asks if his military rank is higher than hers. Moreover, she knows that the highest rank of the second year is corporal, and she is also one. So she ignores the squad leader, just informing the teacher where she will sit. The class coordinator realized that this transfer student was a bizarre girl, but ended up letting her do what she wanted because she had already even sat down. Our protagonist puts his hands on his face, trying to relieve the stress of the moment. Then Kim looks at him sideways and asks the recruit if he doesn't like her and the reason for being so indifferent. With a scary aura, she says she came there because she thought they had made up and questions if she needs to do something about it because it seems like the two are not friends. Jin doesn't understand how he passed the idea that they are friends, but tries to handle the situation, saying it's not like he doesn't like her. Then the instructor calls the girl's attention, letting our hero rest a bit. The teacher asks if Kim shouldn't at least introduce herself to the class. However, the girl shows no desire, saying she's already seated. But in the end, she complies with the request, standing up and preparing for the introduction. And Bayan again implies with her, saying that the basic of education is to stand in front of the class to introduce herself. But the girl doesn't listen because from there, everyone can hear. After the scene, she addresses her classmates, saying it is a pleasure to meet everyone and introducing herself as Kim Se-in, the transfer student who will be part of Class 10. Moreover, she is a corporal and her Adea is the White Jade Goblin, which sparks the student's interest. She says that even though her family helped with the transfer, she hopes they can improve together, so she will be in their care. With the introduction finished, the students go wild. The White Jade Goblin from the Kim family is in front of them. It seemed like a joke. Trying to put order in the class, the teacher tells everyone to be quiet, but the students keep talking that she is incredible. The White Jade Goblin is the only hereditary Adea because generally they can't be inherited. Since the beginning of time, there has never been an identical Adea. This is because what is etched into his soul cannot be copied. But there were people who wanted to pass their ideas to their hairs to make them stronger, to become more sophisticated and sharp. Then one day, a family lineage succeeded in doing that. The Kim family lineage from Gimhae, the descendants of King Ruro. The Kims who rejected their own family and focused on endless education and combat for generations. To protect their lineage, they only had consanguineous marriages, all their children had fair skin, and thus succeeding in obtaining an irregular Adea. The White Jade Goblin is a world ranking, with the user's body being able to manifest it. However, it only manifested in one child per generation. In this case, their family population drastically fell. They almost ceased to exist, but the child born in the last generation was a goblin wielding a sword. That child possessed physical abilities and still dormant ones that surpassed those of men, being the last goblin capable of reaching the highest level of swordsmanship. Kim Se-in is elite since birth, recognized by the family and the heavens, a true prodigy. After all that commotion, Kim asks the teacher if she can sit down, and the educator, after discovering the student's identity, confirms a bit anxious. In this case, it is decided that from now on, Corporal Kim Se-yeon will be the vice leader of Squad 3. Baeyeon then intervenes, very angry, asking how a transfer student can be the vice leader. But the teacher tells the student to shut up, which leaves the blonde very resentful. Addressing the girl, our hero comments on being impressed by her fame. And without a hint of humility, the girl explains that it is because she is someone very incredible. In a failed attempt to return the compliment, Kim says the protagonist is also unique since the title of Rank F recruit is not very common. Jin feels attacked and asks the girl to stop with these humiliations, but the corporal doesn't want to stop because she's having fun. Although others have already accepted her, Baeyeon keeps his anguish inside, because this mere transfer student appeared out of nowhere and dared to steal his position. Somewhere in the school, a student comments that it is necessary to replace the squad leader with Squad 3. Because Kim Se-yeon is much better than Baeyeon in all aspects, both in IDEA classification and general combat ability. But one of the classes continues, recalling that the blonde kept giving strange orders during the squad battles, and a female student mocks the fact that Baeyeon still wants to be the star. At this moment, the two pass by Baeyeon talking about Kim and that they thought she was full of herself at first, but in the end she's really smart and good at commanding. Moreover, the female student admires her charisma during the battle, saying she fell completely in love with her. They laugh, saying it would be great if Kim Se-yeon were the squad leader, and speculate that she probably will be soon anyway. In light of this, Baeyeon crushes his cup with rage, nurturing a tremendous hatred for the transfer student. When it's time for a snack, Kim calls her classmate and invites him to have lunch together. However, our hero refuses, informing that he needs to clean the school. Kim, for her part, doesn't accept the excuses because she says she has no one to have lunch with, which is a lie since she is now the most popular girl in the entire school. In this case, the girl retorts, saying that they are a bunch of fakes who keep looking from afar, but never come to talk to her. Even so, Jin affirms being busy, contradicting the girl's desire. He says he needs to clean the board eraser, and sweep and mop the classroom floor. Moreover, he needs to seek help for the next class. In light of this, Kim says it seems like a lot for one person to do, and bets that not even the squad leader can do it all alone. Our hero, trying not to make eye contact, confirms, completely changing Kim's expression in the face of the situation. She realizes that the protagonist is not only doing the tasks of the other squad leaders, but also the tasks of the entire class. Embarrassed, Jin says he does it because he is already doing other things, and asks if it wouldn't be more complicated if many people did, trying to ease the situation. However, Kim knows exactly what this kind of thing means and doesn't accept silly excuses like these. In an attempt to change things, the girl pulls the protagonist by the jacket, ordering him to follow her and leaving him confused about the place. Kim obviously says she is taking him to visit the jerks who keep giving him tasks they should be doing. And while being dragged through the classroom, Jin tries to say that everything is fine, but he has no control over the situation anymore. In another room, Kim approaches the redhead, saying she wants to ask him something. The redhead and a girl beside him are curious to know what she wants from them. The corporal explains that the man is usually responsible for cleaning the classroom of Squad 4, so she questions why he is forcing the recruit to do it. In this case, he affirms it's because he is a rank F. At this moment, the girl forcibly covers the student's mouth, stating that she doesn't want to hear excuses. And from now on, they will do everything they are assigned to do. Moreover, she finds it shameful for a strong man to take advantage of someone weaker, so she threatens, saying she doesn't want to be unpleasant. And with this shock treatment, the redhead starts to realize that his actions can now have serious consequences. The girl also told him to apologize directly to his classmate. After that, they even made the other classmates apologize to him. The only thing left was to talk to the teacher. He said he didn't know what was happening with Jinsum and would leave the class organization to Sion. While the boy lamented, she was actually quite pleased with this new assignment. Now she needed to teach her entire squad how the cleaning routines worked, assigning some classmates to clean the board and the classroom floor. They were not interested in these tasks at all. They said the rank F guy would do it, but the girl forced the mop onto their heads. She wanted to know if there was any objection to the orders she had given. Obediently, after this slight coercion, they agreed to cooperate. The blonde boy also wanted to talk to the vice captain. She thought he had come there to help too, but the boy asked to be called captain by her, and he said he didn't need a reason to come talk to a subordinate. That tone of voice and petulance made her a bit more serious. Indeed, he was right about the hierarchy. She was even eager to become the true captain. That comment made the blonde boy quite irritated. If he had nothing else to say to her, she informed the captain that she wanted to return to the classroom. The boy told her to meet him on the rooftop after class, as they needed to talk about the squad. Inside the classroom, the nerd was listening to that conversation. Class had ended, and the girl was heading to the school's rooftop. Her steps were being followed. It was the nerd who wanted to find out what the conversation was about. He knew the two were going to meet on the rooftop, so he needed to approach stealthily to avoid being discovered. Knowing about this meeting, he started having a bad feeling about it. Their captain must have had a very busy day. Behind the door, he managed to hear what they were saying. The blonde boy said the girl was acting as if she didn't know anything. There were other guys with him. He said it wasn't possible that at this point she still didn't understand what was happening. The girl acknowledged that the captain was really quite popular among the men. There were several of them at the top of the rooftop. Since she was a member of his squad, if the conversation went well, he wouldn't lay a finger on her. The girl was impressed that he only had the courage to talk when surrounded by men. She never imagined he was such a timid captain. That comment made him irritated. Bringing his hand to his face, he started laughing in a strange way. Unaware that someone was listening behind the door, he said it was time to teach this girl a lesson. She was actually interested in this part about receiving a lesson. She couldn't believe he had really suggested that. Very outraged, he said she still had a lot to learn and that he would make her regret it. But the girl wasn't intimidated. She thought he was really a fool. The second in command should obey the captain's orders. After hearing those words, she could no longer hide her smile. To obey him, the boy should at least be stronger or smarter than her. The school hierarchy was based on talent. He should be smarter, stronger, or make better decisions than her. If he wanted to use his leadership position as an advantage, he should have at least 2 of these qualities. This only made the blonde boy even more irritated. His lackeys were already prepared to start a big fight. The girl began analyzing her potential opponents. Most of them had short-range combat weapons. Clearly, they were still undeveloped. The blonde boy said that to someone like her, his ideas might seem crazy. She disagreed. It was they who had chosen to believe in that. Even so, the blonde boy suggested they stop talking. The weapons were immediately drawn. Her ideas could cause problems for the school, and since she was from a higher ranking, she would certainly be punished for it. Those guys were so weak that if they used their abilities, no one would even notice. The blonde boy said he could gather 15 of those people there. He knew the girl was stronger when she had a sword in her hand, and at the moment, she didn't have one. Since she wouldn't be able to use her full potential, even those mediocre guys would have the advantage. It was a fight she could never win. Believing he had the upper hand, he would make sure she deeply regretted it. Even in the face of that, the girl did not tremble. She mourned that Sergeant Sumno is a very famous person at school. Knowing this, she wanted to know what they would think when they met this person. But the blonde boy did not understand what the girl was saying. He already knew her ranking, so the girl had another question to ask. She wanted to know if he knew what her combat ranking was. Seeing that the girl had stepped closer, the extras began to tremble with fear. The blonde boy said it was all just an act, she was unarmed, and they shouldn't succumb to fear. The girl also heard that and was having trouble believing how stupid they were. She warned that he should have done this with the squad during the match. This only made him even more irritated. It seemed like he forgot everything presented in the classroom. She was an A-rank fighter. After saying that, a horn emerged from her head. Revealing her power, she said she could take down 100 lower-rank people without difficulty. This was the White Jade Goblin, with an A-rank combat ability. It manifested in the user's body. People of her level were classified separately because of their power. To be at her level, one had to be capable of fighting multiple people. Now the extras were starting to soil their underwear. Since she could take down 100 people at once, she asked how many were there on that rooftop. The boy kept trying to push the idea that without a sword, she was useless. Full of rage, he ordered them all to attack. But some of the extras were already completely frozen because something that shouldn't have been there was leaking from their underwear. Thinking that since she had no weapon, she would be at a disadvantage, one of the boys decided to attack first, striking at her with his bat. She even complimented his courage but said he was attacking far too recklessly. The bat stopped inches from the girl's face, while the extra began to panic even more. He couldn't believe he had been stopped with just one of the woman's hands. What happened was so fast that he didn't understand, nor did the one narrating. But the extra's body struck his colleagues like a bowling pin. Some of them were piled up at the foot of the railing, while the girl said she had pulled off a perfect strike. She began moving at an incredibly fast speed. Wherever she passed, she left a memory of pain on the jerks, hitting and knocking down everyone who was there, even stepping on the bodies of those who refused to move out of her way. After that session of beatings, there weren't many left in fighting condition. The boy realized that even without a sword, she was still very strong. As expected of someone at A rank, they had no chance of fighting back. She told the boy that those who give up easily would never reach her level. Revealing himself as an ambassador of the land of the pitiful, he said she didn't know that because she was born blessed, as if he hadn't been trying his hardest. She looked at the boy with an expression of disdain. Besides being born with potential, she had been blessed with enormous power. She didn't know what it was like to be born without talent. She understood why the boy thought that way, but revealed that her combat ability used to be D rank. This time, the boy was caught completely off guard. While the blonde boy was sure that it had to be a lie, everyone in that country knew her family. If she were going to lie to them, she should at least put some effort into it. No one would believe she was born without talent. She agreed but reaffirmed that she didn't fight well at all. She didn't even like swords. It was her talent that forced her to wield blades, so she accepted her fate. The boys, after being beaten, believed she had to be lying. She was sure they wouldn't believe how much she had to struggle. But now, that no longer mattered. The calluses on her hands bore witness to all the hard work she had to put in. Even after the revealing speech, there were still extras willing to get beaten up. After yet another round of beatings, the girl said that even unarmed, she was far too much of a challenge for them. After the brief beating session, the only one left was the captain, and she had left him for last on purpose. Seeing that his subordinates had been beaten, the boy said they were all trash, and it didn't matter. All that was left for her was to finish the captain once and for all. The boy acknowledged that he had no other option. He was going to end this once and for all. His confidence was so great that the girl began to suspect. He must be hiding something. But it doesn't matter what plan he has. She just has to destroy his plan, and as she stepped closer to him, she told him to hold his breath. Her first strike was aimed at the boy's stomach. He was pleased because she had fallen into his trap. She hadn't aimed at his face. If it were obvious that she had beaten him, it would cause problems. Knowing this, he would make sure she hit his face. In the middle of the movement, she realized what was happening. That was an unexpected move and his chance to make the school punish her. Maybe she could even be expelled. Even if he got seriously hurt, if he managed to get his revenge, it would be worth it. But before contact could happen, a mysterious hand stopped the strike. The boy said that was really dangerous. It was the one they treated as trash. Looking at the captain, he said his beautiful nose had almost been crushed. In his hands was a completely broken object. The captain wanted to know how that trash of a student had managed to do that. Pretending to be distracted, he made sure to step on the jerk's hand. In a friendly manner, he asked if he was okay. The captain believed the girl had brought the trash along with her, but she got no reason to do that. She must have been followed by him. The boy feigned sorrow, saying it was so sad that no one was ever happy to see him. Despite changing the subject, something bizarre had happened. He came out from behind the door and got to them way too fast. He had to open the door and run out. And as if that wasn't enough, he had to stop her strike before it hit the captain's face. That strike had been loaded with kinetic energy. It wouldn't have been weak. The boy was definitely hiding something. She wanted to know who Jinsung really was. Since she had closed her hand, she felt something inside it. There were small pieces of plastic. Since it was already getting late, he suggested they go home soon. But the captain was trying to make their lives even more miserable. He warned them that they were both finished because he would report the incident to the teacher. The trash said he hadn't done anything. He had only protected the captain from having his nose destroyed. The girl confirmed that the recruit had protected his hideous face. Regardless of what he had planned, everything had failed. But he insisted that his plan wasn't over, because he had recorded everything as a precaution. He would use that video as evidence. The recruit asked if he was talking about that camera, showing a completely destroyed object. He hadn't imagined that it was there to record something, and now he knew what the captain had wanted to do to her. To protect himself from the girl's strike, he had grabbed that object from the wall. He hadn't known it belonged to the captain. Indeed, his plan had failed completely, and the girl wanted to know how the recruit had been able to stop her punch. He asked to be let go, saying that all he had done was help her. The others couldn't believe that someone of F rank had destroyed their camera, while another thought that having a high rank also brought luck. This made the girl stop pestering the recruit, but she went over to the other boys while dragging her colleague, who kept insisting on being let go. They didn't know what she was going to say to them. She recommended that they stop complaining and use the recruit as an example, as he was still working very hard. It wasn't too late for them, and they should seriously think about it. The boys were thoughtful after that scolding. With no more matters to settle there, she left, asking the recruit to follow her. They slammed the rooftop door, leaving behind several jerks. Everyone was lamenting after being beaten so vigorously. Someone had memories of a blood-stained knife. Cries for help echoed through the house. The person was begging that the monster not come any closer. That person was definitely a monster, but their lives had not been spared at all. That person had taken the lives of their own family members. He observed the bodies while thinking they were people of similar character. He had done nothing wrong in his own eyes. The alarm was ringing and the boy managed to wake up. The clock showed that the morning had only just begun. That nightmare he had was quite disturbing. It was not pleasant at all to wake up with those kinds of memories, and it was a recurring dream. The girl was very interested in the recruit's hidden abilities, but she asked why he seemed sad that day. She imagined something might have happened. He simply said he was very tired, wanting to know if she knew where they were going. Only the squad captains know the destination, so she doesn't know either. Moreover, today's class will be with the medical students. They just don't understand why it will be held outside the school. As soon as they approached the building, the captain told them to stop. Being received by other people, they were asked if they were from Hyundai. Because if they were, this was the first time they had seen students from that school. Besides, they were late. The blonde boy became quite irritated with that comment, since he had no idea who these people could be. The boy said he had no business with him, but wanted to see Sayan because he had heard that, besides being a genius, she was very beautiful. Since she was second in command of their squad, if there was something to be said to her, it could be said to him as well. They started commenting that it was funny how they had a militarized system and behaved like soldiers. The blonde boy said he was the captain of Squad 3 of Platoon 10 in Company 2. He wouldn't repeat himself and wanted to know who those students were. The girl asked the soldier to at least try to guess. Irritated, he said they were just trash, until one boy warned that they shouldn't annoy kids from other schools. He apologized, saying they were just a little anxious about being outside. That student immediately captured everyone's attention because he was very well drawn. Extending his hand, he said they were from Seojong School, and that it was a pleasure to meet these new people. The blonde boy slapped his hand away, telling him to shut up and explain what was going on. The other said he was very rude, but the well-drawn boy tried to calm everyone down. Finally, the blonde girl introduced herself. The captain's bad behavior would end up costing them points. The same could be said for their arrogant friend. The well-drawn boy was surprised to finally meet Kim. Extending his hand to her, he said his name was Lee. She looked at his hand with vigilance. Her colleagues were there for the joint class with the medical students. She didn't know why the Sejong students were there as well. Because of that, she wanted some explanations. The well-drawn boy said that everyone was in the right place because they were freshmen in the medical class, and it was a pleasure to meet all of them. They also didn't know why that was the meeting place, but they knew there would be a joint class. It was possible that it was related to the bank, which wouldn't mind receiving that publicity. Everything seemed to have been planned as there were no customers at that hour, only a well-dressed man. He approached the students, assuming they were the ones who had come for the training session. Those men seemed to be security guards, as they were all really huge. Entering the building, the girl introduced herself to them. She was Kim, and the vice captain of her squad. They were impressed with her courage despite being so young. If there was any task for them that day, she wanted to know immediately. Liking her personality, they said they would love for her to work at the bank when she got older, but the girl politely declined the offer. They were being treated like babies. Students like them didn't have much to do in a bank. Even so, Kim wanted to be well evaluated. She called the well-drawn boy to talk. The boy said she didn't need to be so formal when referring to him. He suggested they divide the groups into 4 teams and mix the students. She wasn't sure if the teachers would be there. Meanwhile, one of the bank employees offered snacks to the boys. Apparently, everyone was acting like children. No one was taking this training seriously, saying he was was going to grab some coffee, the employee asked if the students wanted to join him. The coffee machine also made other beverages. That was enough to make Kim distracted by the possibilities. Very interested in the drinks, she left her sword leaning against the wall. The recruit noticed that everyone was far too relaxed in that situation. Maybe nothing would happen and they just needed to kill time. But then they were surprised by their well-drawn colleague. That proximity made him uncomfortable, while Lee knew that this boy had been talking to Kim. The recruit couldn't understand why he would care that he was talking to Kim, until he reached a rather obvious conclusion. He thought the boy wanted his help to get closer to the girl. Sweating nervously, Lee tried to say that wasn't what it was about. If he had come to ask him to buy something there, the recruit said he had no money. Finally, he revealed that he was interested in something. His true interest was in the shy boy with glasses standing right in front of him. He invited the boy to have a drink with him. He said there was a vending machine on that floor. The boy was a little suspicious after receiving that offer. As he observed, he noticed that all of his classmates seemed quite relaxed. At the vending machine, he grabbed his soda. He started drinking from the can. It was really refreshing. Lee noticed that the boy seemed quite confident. He assumed that he might be the hidden trump card of his school. Immediately, the boy spat out his drink. He said he wasn't that talented, while Lee thought that this boy didn't get along well with his classmates. The recruit said he was just going with the flow of life. Showing interest, Lee wanted to know what his combat rating was. With great pride, the boy said he was an F rank. He had to be joking. His ability was also F rank, a double champion in mediocrity. After hearing that, Lee started thinking it might be a joke, but the recruit reinforced that it was true. That only made his identity even more suspicious because he was so confident. The recruit asked what he wanted to talk about while tossing the empty can away. Lee watched the trajectory of the object, which landed perfectly in the trash bin. He thought that was pretty cool and wanted to know how his new colleague managed to do that. It was just an empty can. Even so, Lee was quite impressed. He decided to try doing the same thing, but his can missed the target completely. It was harder than it looked. The recruit said it required hand-eye coordination. Since he wasn't good at combat, Lee focused on medical skills. He wanted to know how an F rank managed to survive in the combat class. It was all thanks to his luck and Kim's help. Now he wanted to know what Lee's ability was. Moving his fingers, he summoned a massive blade. Knife Hands was a C rank ability. His general combat ability was also ranked C. The recruit pointed out that it was an ability full of potential with room for development. That was what the boy had heard his whole life, but he had never been able to improve that ability. The recruit realized that this boy wanted to transfer to the combat class, which was why he had come to talk to him. Unable to hide it, that was Lee's true goal. For a brief moment, the protagonist was lost in thought. He said it was better to belong to the medical care division. That way he could save real lives, which was much better than entering dangerous combat. Hearing those words, the twink was quite flattered. The protagonist continued his praise session. He told the boy to take as much time as he needed to think about it. The truth was that he invited this person because he wished he could use his ability to save lives. Ending the conversation, he said they should head back soon. The professor arrived late. Outside, some men were saying that the students were already inside. It was time to start evaluating the students' performance. Worried, the professor said they hadn't done anything yet, but that didn't matter. They couldn't be evaluated just based on their routine, nor was it possible to train inside a bank. This was all just a formality. The professor agreed with him. The evaluator was also pleased that the professor was being reasonable. So he continued his evaluation, inviting the professor for a coffee. He knew a really good place nearby. The students were already tired of standing guard by that door, convinced that nothing was going to happen. He suggested to the girl that they play a game. The loser would have to get a drink for the other. While they were having fun, some men entered the place. One of the students noticed them because they were dressed differently. It looked like they were heading to an anime event. One of the bank employees also noticed them. Worried, he immediately started running. He was very concerned about the students' safety. He ordered them to get out of the way immediately. It didn't take long for a blade to appear in front of him. The man managed to protect the students from the strike. Those reinforced tonfas gave him B-rank compatibility. In the middle of the fight, he coordinated for the students to escape through the back door. Many of them were already panicked, not knowing if this was some kind of training. The attacker said that running away would be useless. Seeing that their weapons were being destroyed, he once again told the students to flee, until he was sliced apart right in front of them. His body fell to the floor as those armed men entered the bank. The burned-faced man was advancing inside the bank. Knowing he was hostile, the security guards began to act. With his sword resting on his shoulders, he said that those two would be more fun to cut down. From his accent, they realized that he was from the other Korea. But he claimed he wasn't a spy. He was only there in that bank for the money. And if they didn't want to receive a free plastic surgery on their faces, they'd better fill the bag with cash. One of the security guards was very frightened. Even so, the order was for all of them to be prepared. They would not allow the money to be taken so easily. The criminal repeated, these comrades should fill the bag with money, as he continued to refer to them as comrades. But they wouldn't obey so easily. Apparently, these people were incapable of understanding what he was saying. He warned them that they weren't even strong and didn't have the advantage of numbers. They should know their place. Kim knew they were no match for that person. His energy was beyond normal. The security guards tried to summon a barrier to prevent him from using his sword. This was a life-or-death situation. Kim tried to help those people, but the criminal had already attacked, ordering them to stay out of his way. The scene the girl saw was truly horrifying. There were body parts scattered across the floor. Her classmates took a while to believe that those people were no longer alive. The shield that had been destroyed by him was B rank and had been torn apart like a piece of paper. This was turning out to be easier than he had expected. Living in a peaceful city had weakened all of them. He couldn't believe that guards could be so weak in that city. This was a serious problem for its citizens. Knowing that his abilities were likely A rank, Kim told everyone to listen to what she had to say. The students needed to take cover immediately. Even though they were scared, they would trust her. They should take shelter under the tables. Watching the people running, the intruder asked if everyone in that country was a banker. Kim ordered them to use their abilities. It was time for the captains to coordinate their squads. Entering a room, the intruder wanted to know if he could take the money now. Many of the students were absolutely terrified. Kim told them they had to hold their ground until the police or the teachers arrived. The man said they shared the same culture and language, so they should cooperate as well. She was very worried and didn't know what to do because she was certain he posed a great risk. The people behind him also seemed ready to fight. Since they didn't have many pockets, they wanted the money to go into the backpack. He finally asked what the girl's name was and she told him. Taking advantage of her politeness, he wanted to know what it would take to get the money. She would try to buy some time. She realized that they didn't seem like spies, they were probably a criminal organization from the other Korea. Maybe he wasn't there just for the money. Seeing their curiosity, he decided to reveal his group's identity. Kim hadn't expected a criminal to actually say who he was. Maybe she hadn't heard of them yet, but they were called the New Great Plague. That was a name that inspired fear. No one knew how they had emerged, what they wanted, or what they governed. They used the planet as a stage for their actions. Nothing remained alive after their attacks. They were notoriously known for their excessive cruelty. People had known that the plague was operating inside Korea. That wasn't what the man had said. They were the New Great Plague. He said people were becoming too influenced by Western nations, and that it was time for someone to fill the backpack with money. Everyone inside the bank was now terrified and had decided to cooperate. That was when Kim's hair began to glow intensely, something that left the criminal surprised because along with her hair, a horn also appeared. Kim told everyone to remain calm inside the building. No one had ever promised that they would remain alive even if they handed over the money. Because of her hair and horn, he immediately recognized the girl. If he had heard of her family, then things had just gotten easier because they were going to fight. She couldn't risk the lives of the others. She needed to fight the leader immediately. The man acknowledged her intelligence but wasn't willing to fall for her tricks. Even though she was challenging him to a fight, he didn't believe the criminal would attack her with his subordinates around. She was truly fearless. She was a goblin from that family, so naturally, she was completely insane. Seeing that he was stalling, the girl wanted to know if they were going to fight or not. He said it was an interesting challenge, and he struck his sword against the ground, declaring that he would accept her challenge. Pointing his blade at the girl, he told her to try and attack him. Faced with this great opportunity, Kim said the man was too confident, while she thought she was lucky that he had accepted the challenge. Maybe he wouldn't go back on his word in front of his subordinates. If he were defeated, they might survive. She needs to win for them to get through this, realizing that she doesn't have her sword. Without her blade, the girl is in serious trouble, finally remembering where she had left her weapon. While she was distracted, the criminal began attacking her. If she wasn't going to take the initiative that had been given to her, this man wouldn't wait for long. The slash was devastating and managed to destroy the object behind her. With a single movement, there was already destruction in that room. She was sure that if she was hit even once, it would be the end for her. But that gave her an opportunity, because she could use the debris as battle tools. The criminal realized that his head was about to be crushed by a large rock. A surprise attack was certainly brave, but it was completely ineffective. The girl needed to create distance and rethink her strategy. He noticed that she was very fast. She didn't even seem like a goblin. She looked more like a fleeing squirrel. But dodging all these attacks was making the girl sweat heavily. Her classmates were amazed at her skill, watching her hold her own in the fight. They immediately started cheering for her. The recruit knew he couldn't just stand there doing nothing, but he was also hesitant to act. Lee confirmed that there had to be a reason for her fame. She was just as good as that criminal. The boy warned his friend that the situation was not in their favor at all, and that they needed to get out of there immediately, as fast as possible. They should go up a few floors, hide in the bathroom, or under the tables, so they wouldn't be easy to find. Meanwhile, the girl kept dodging attacks. They needed to buy time in that place. After moving around a lot, she was finally hit by a strike. She was sent flying. That impact was enough to make her fall to the ground. The leader of the criminals believed he was about to finish this fight. The girl was badly injured, and her classmates no longer knew what to do. Looking at her, the criminal wanted to know if she still had anything left to show. She told him to test her if he was curious. The criminal revealed a large, sinister smile. Just as he was about to finish her off, someone shouted from that floor, telling everyone to scatter. There was a recruit heading toward the upper floors. In that moment of distraction, the rest of their classmates also started to flee. They were certain that if they were caught, they would die a painful death. The leader recognized that this companion of theirs was quick-witted. His subordinates revealed that they were just waiting for orders, and he commanded them to capture everyone. Receiving the order, they wished a long and prosperous life to the Supreme Commander. Even so, some still did not move and remained frozen in place, and those who ran would soon be dragged back to that floor. The girl started to think that it wasn't their intention to kill the students. If that was the case, it was worth trying to buy more time. The leader said that she was very strong and he liked that. She would be more useful than she imagined. He suggested that she join his side as well, but she immediately refused. Thinking himself very handsome despite that horrible scar covering half his face, he said that many women would love to be his wives. But the girl wasn't going to believe a criminal who was robbing a bank. Only then did he realize that he hadn't introduced himself yet. His name was Kim Il-jong. That name sounded familiar. That man was next in line for succession in the other Korea, the supreme leader of the Workers' Party. This person was right there before her. robbing a bank. He was also the best fighter in his country. He had been trained from an early age and needed a wife who could support him the way he needed. The girl couldn't understand what would bring the next successor to that bank. Seeing that she had backed away, he said that was exactly why he didn't introduce himself to people. Trying to provoke him, the girl said that maybe she'd receive a reward for capturing him since he was wanted by several nations. With the money, she would buy plenty of snacks for her friends. After hearing that, the man laughed uncontrollably. He hadn't wanted to come there personally, but he realized that perhaps this girl was the reason he had been sent. They knew the students would be there, so they could eliminate the seeds before they sprouted, and it was great that he had come. He announced that the fight was over. She should make the right decision while she still could. She was also surprised that the fight was over. She said that while moving toward her sword. This had been her plan all along, and she had nearly paid with her life to get there. She also pointed out that she was still very young, and that to be able to use the full potential of her ability, she needed to have a sword in her hands. Meanwhile, on the other floors, the students were being chased. One of them was grabbed by the invaders, and the girls struggled to break free, but several of them had already been captured and placed in a room. Meanwhile, others were hiding inside the bathroom. In the same stall were the recruit and his colleague, who looked at him with admiring eyes. That bathroom was really well sanitized. Maybe it was because they were in a bank. Lee believed they should go up more floors, but the recruit told him to calm down because everything was fine. The first thing they needed to do in that situation was to catch their breath. Lee looked at him with great concern, unsure if his friend was feeling okay. Sitting on the toilet, he seemed unaware of the source of that concern. If they were caught, they might meet the same fate as those guards. Even so, the recruit didn't seem worried at all. Given that, Lee decided not to ask any questions. But he believed that if they stayed in that bathroom, they would soon be captured. He suggested that it would be better to keep running, trying to convince the recruit that it was wiser to keep climbing the stairs. He was thinking about his colleague Kim, believing that she would be okay. He told the boy that running would be useless. What they needed to do in this situation was fight. Lee became even more worried. It was as if his friend hadn't seen what had happened to the guards. Their rank wouldn't stand a chance against the invaders. That was when the protagonist asked the boy if he believed that his soul had a rank. Not understanding, he continued explaining that he had heard some things recently. That girl's combat ability had been D rank, and after a lot of effort, she had managed to progress. People couldn't be judged solely by the abilities they possessed. The ranking system was just a reference. Outside, the invaders were beginning to step out of the elevator. Not understanding the purpose of that conversation, he was growing more frightened because they could hear footsteps outside the bathroom. He was sure it was the invaders and now didn't know what to do. The protagonist said that his friend's idea was very good and that he would achieve his dreams. But the boy wasn't even paying attention to him because of his panic, begging his friend to speak more quietly. That was when the protagonist grabbed him by the shoulder, telling him to pay attention. He stared at him, still terrified, and the protagonist told him to do exactly as he was told. The invader was already aware that people were hiding in that bathroom. He said that the Supreme Commander did not tolerate lazy people. The protagonist said he liked his accent and would love to learn how to speak like that. Revealing his sadistic nature, the invader ordered them to come with him, stating that the Supreme Commander wouldn't care if the boy was missing a piece. He was impressed that the invader had a personality because next to his leader he hadn't said a single word. After irritating him, he summoned his dagger, pointing the weapon in the direction of the invader, who started laughing, not believing that this was the boy's ability. He ordered him to drop that pathetic object unless he wanted to regret it, charging at him in the blink of an eye. Those legs allowed him to accelerate instantly to an enormous speed, a B-rank talent. The protagonist once again told his friend to run immediately, but the invader declared that both of them would be coming back with him. At that moment, the protagonist's eyes began to glow menacingly. It was the killer's desire, a superior ranked ability. All the energy around his body had transformed. His body was being enhanced, his power tripled. He was so sharpened that the invader's movements seemed to be in slow motion. It was far too easy to dodge, and the invader realized that the ones in danger in that bathroom weren't the students, but rather his underwear. The first slash touched his vest, and several others followed immediately after. As he played with the invader's body, the protagonist kept apologizing. Defeated and overpowered, the invader was certain that this student was crazy. He must have been high on fentanyl. The boy smiled as he tried to stab him with the dagger. The invader did everything possible to avoid having his chest pierced. Having witnessed the boy's ability, he admitted that it must be very fun to accelerate like that. The invader didn't realize that his ability had already been read by the young man. Distracted, he had his chest pierced, and the student wanted to know what would happen if he cut the tendons in his legs or if he destroyed the body parts that activated that person's ability and what ranking his injured body would have. There were many ways to end this man's life. His colleague had yet to flee the bathroom. Unfortunately, he was too terrified to leave. He was staring at the murderous expression on his friend's face. That made his legs start to wobble, and now the protagonist had shifted his focus. He wanted to know what had happened to the boy who was supposed to be running from the wall, but his legs were too shaky. He tried to tell the protagonist that they should run and flee the scene, but the situation had changed. They were not the ones who should be running from that bathroom. Lifting the invader's body, he asked his colleague who should be fleeing. He was too scared to answer. To snap out of this state, the protagonist had to finish his target or destroy his enemy's ability. His gaze was unrecognizable. He looked like a different person. Finally, the boy returned to himself, but his thoughts were still too scrambled. Because of that, the invader managed to react. The protagonist's glasses fell to the floor. He gripped the invader's throat once more. He was ready to end his life once and for all. But before doing that, he told his colleague to leave the bathroom immediately. Before that, he had some information to give. He explained that with his ability, his body became an unbreakable blade. He was capable of making that happen. His friend started thinking deeply, and he took his first steps toward the exit. He apologized and said he needed to get out of there urgently. But that was exactly what the protagonist had wanted. The invader realized that the boy had serious issues in his head. Looking at him with a menacing glare, the protagonist warned that the invader was going to have a problem. He hadn't expected one of the students to be hiding his true potential. He needed to inform the Supreme Commander about this, but that wouldn't be possible because the dead couldn't talk. Meanwhile, the girl was overjoyed to be reunited with her sword once again. The invader said that the blade was as beautiful as the girl's face, but he was about to change his mind once he was struck by it. He was intrigued that the girl actually thought she had a chance to defeat him in battle, taking the opportunity to strike. But this time, the girl was able to defend herself using her sword, something that even made the Supreme Leader himself pause for thought. She said yes, she believed she could defeat him. He was excited to see that she was strong enough to block an attack. Maybe her sword had special powers too. From his question, she realized that his strength came from his equipment and not his own body. The force he had used should have been enough to cut through both her and her sword. He admitted that her blade was very interesting because he had felt his own sword weaken from that contact. People always tried to attack her family just to get their hands on that sword. A blade designed to fight against powerful enemies, the slayer of evil. The constellations on that sword were said to hold the energy of the stars. Depending on the user's strength and skill, it could cut things that shouldn't be cut. Once again, she made it clear that with a sword in her hand, she could fight with ease. This time, she was going to show him the goblin sword technique, capable of creating clones. On the verge of receiving a horrifying beating, he still tried to bring up the marriage proposal. Even if her family was utterly desperate, she would never marry him. The leader believed it was a waste to finish her off in that place. Her potential was immense. He was convinced that she didn't have the strength to withstand his attacks. This time, even though she blocked the strike, she was forced backward. The battle was growing more and more dangerous. He noticed that the girl was getting nervous, and their blades clashed once more. The leader was sure he would win this battle, but the girl wasn't going to give up easily. Using her duplication techniques again, she decided to attack her opponent from multiple directions. Her strikes were heavy, but she would use the clones as distractions. While they blocked incoming attacks, she would try to land a hit. But the sheer force of his attacks proved to be a major problem. He had already anticipated what she was going to do. The girl was frustrated. Her strategy had been too predictable. The man said she should know when to stop fighting. She was just using this as a way to buy time. He continued insisting that she should join his side. The girl knew she needed more time, but her hands were already exhausted. On the other floor, the invaders were still chasing and capturing the students. The leader noticed that his subordinates were already returning. He figured that with all this commotion, the building was probably completely surrounded. But then he noticed that some of those people were outside. His men said they had split into two teams. One of them forced the hostages to jump out of the windows while the other waited below. Those who had returned yet were searching for more hostages on the upper floors. The girl was shocked to realize that there were invaders outside. The military and police still hadn't shown up. There was no way they hadn't noticed what was happening. Something was wrong, and the leader noticed her distress just by looking at her face. She must have been wondering why no one had come to help yet. One of his subordinates was using his ability to isolate the area. Knowing that made the girl desperate. The entire attack had been meticulously planned. From the outside, it looked like just another normal day. No one could see what was happening inside the bank. No one would ever find out what they had done, and her strategy of buying time was meaningless. She thought about running outside to call for help, but that would put the hostages' lives at risk. And she knew she couldn't keep fighting forever. She had no idea what to do anymore. Seeing her discouragement, the invader asked where the girl's courage had gone. Among the hostages, a man was analyzing the environment, carefully watching his captors. He decided that this was the moment to act and do something. He needed to do something about this situation. His plan was to press the emergency button. Walking toward the phone, he started calling for help, reporting that the bank had been taken over and that there were several criminals inside. But he realized there was no signal on the phone. He couldn't understand why the device wasn't working. One of the invaders threw an empty backpack at him. He was utterly terrified by the situation. The leader wanted to know if he hadn't heard a word of what had been said earlier. That man recognized the invader's identity, who explained that one of them had the ability to isolate the area. All communications had been cut off. The students checked their phones and confirmed it was true. Panicked, the employee wanted to know why someone like him was in a small bank. The invader said the employee should be proud of his work. Every profession had its role in society. That was the foundation of communism. The man said that once the military arrived, they'd all be doomed. Mocking, the leader asked if he was talking about that old man, because he remembered him very well. After saying that, he started laughing like a maniac, until he pointed his sword at the employee's face. He said he would understand soon because it was time to make some examples out of people, asking only that he not take it personally. Before he could strike, a voice cursed them all as bastards. The leader took the insult personally, but upon seeing that it was the girl, he lost interest. She told them to keep fighting and make her an example if she lost, asking them to release the hostage. After giving her his name, he asked if the girl knew what it meant. But that was the wrong question to ask. He said that as he took the employee's life, seeing it happen right in front of her, the girl was completely horrified. If she knew his story, she would never have insulted him that way. Since he had only cut off one of the employee's legs, he decided to take his head so he would stop talking. A massive cloud of blood spread through the room while the girl remained frozen in fear. She knew she was no match for him, and to make things worse, she had to worry about the other hostages. Faced with so many difficulties, she truly didn't know what to do. The man reminded her that she had suggested becoming an example for the hostages. He said he would remove her limbs and carry her in a bag so she could walk with him. She should feel honored to meet such an end. As they spoke, they heard the creaking sound of a door opening. Everyone turned to the source of the sound. It was Lee, who had just walked in, apologizing for interrupting. The leader didn't know who this young man was. One of his subordinates offered to restrain him, but the leader told him to be patient. The boy walked forward with his hands up. The situation was truly complicated. He saw that there were many terrified hostages, and some people were no longer alive. The protagonist said that the first floor must already be in chaos. He told Lee to go there and announce his presence. Lee didn't understand what his friend meant, but the boy insisted that he trust him. After receiving those orders, that was exactly what he was doing now. The leader wanted to know the young man's name, and he responded immediately. He also warned that the money they were looking for should be on the 5th floor. The leader wanted to know how the boy knew that, revealing that it was his friend who had hidden the money on that floor. That statement made the leader furious, realizing that the team that was supposed to go to the upper floors still hadn't returned. He wanted to know what his subordinates were doing up there, as they were being inefficient. One of them immediately knelt down. He said he would go to the 5th floor to check the information. He wished to receive a chance to redeem himself in the eyes of the leader. The man slowly approached the subordinate. Since he couldn't handle everything alone, he would give that man one more chance. He should return with the money, and with that boy. Unaware of the hell that awaited him, the lackey was extremely grateful for the opportunity. He ordered the rest of his men to go with him, making it clear that he wouldn't tolerate another mistake. Now he turned his attention back to the young man who had just appeared. He was very interested in how he had made it there. He ordered the boy to come to him, as the supreme leader didn't go to anyone. Knowing the man had an inflated ego, the boy decided to go out of pity. Surely he was trying to compensate for something. The leader praised the boy, saying he was indeed clever. While his team retrieved the last student, he suggested they have some fun. He asked if they could see the girl with the sword. Whoever managed to cut off one of her arms or legs would be allowed to live. Kim began to worry about the hostages, hoping none of them were stupid enough to take the offer. All the hostages were completely terrified. The girl couldn't imagine that anyone would actually turn on her, and the leader was waiting to see what would happen, as he was a very sadistic man. A woman declared that he was insane. No one would ever harm the only person who was fighting for their lives. The problem was, they all knew who had already won this battle, and someone mentioned that it was worth doing anything to get out alive. One of them, shaking with fear, began wondering whether or not he should be that stupid. Despite the cheap coercion, because the leader clearly looked like he would kill everyone, some of them were tempted to commit a huge mistake. Kim regretted not being able to defeat that enemy. While she was distracted, the boy managed to get close to her. Even so, she decided to ignore him, as she was emotionally shaken. The boy told her to hold on just a little longer, and that she shouldn't worry. But she couldn't understand his calm words. She started wondering how he had gotten there without being caught, and why he wasn't hiding. She told him he should have stayed on the upper floors. He had just made things more complicated, but he had come to help. The problem was that he hadn't just arrived. Kim ignored his words and asked if she should sacrifice an arm to save him. Taking advantage of the moment, he said he had something to tell her. From that day forward, he was going to be Jin-sung's best friend, and she might as well get used to it. Frustrated by the hostages' indecisiveness, the fragile, egotistical leader started destroying the place. If they hesitated too much, he would end up attacking all of them, because he wanted to see something happen among the survivors. Several hostages revealed that they were idiots, saying they had no choice. The leader wanted to know if that handsome boy, whose phone number he wanted, was going to side with the goblin. Scratching his face, the boy said he preferred to side with whoever survived. That was actually a very interesting way to view life. The leader decided to raise the stakes. The arms and legs of the other hostages would also be worth a prize. That way, at least 10 of them could make it out alive. At this point, everything had turned into complete madness, and he was eager to see how the girl would protect herself. Kim called out to the egotistical leader once more. She wanted to know what would happen if she killed all the hostages herself. Would he then let her and the handsome guy leave? At first, he didn't understand, but she explained that he needed to make the game fair and give them a chance too. He loved the girl's arrogance. He started grinning like a true degenerate. If she killed everyone, he wouldn't turn her into a human backpack. That was exactly what she needed to hear. The girl decided to point her sword at those who had considered cutting off her limbs. One of her classmates begged her to think carefully. Since Kim wasn't a grudge holder, she remembered that this same girl had said she had no choice. Now she was deeply regretting that mistake. The leader told her to decide quickly, or she was going to die. The problem was that the girl knew she had no chance. She told Kim that she needed to choose the option where the most lives would be saved. She shouldn't be selfish and think only about her own life. Truly, this woman might be the dumbest character to ever exist on the face of the earth. Knowing that she was incredibly stupid, Kim began using her sword techniques, sending her clones toward the girl. All she had to defend herself were her enhanced punches, but they were nothing compared to what that girl was capable of. The edge of her sword was about to become intimately acquainted with the girl's face. Desperate, she had to avoid being hit. The two women started exchanging furious blows until the clones began disappearing. The girl hadn't expected that to be possible, only to be suddenly caught off guard by a knee to the stomach. Now that they were close, Kim demanded that the fool listen carefully to what she had to say. She had spent all this time crafting a plan, and now one of the dumbest people in the room was finally aware of her strategy. Her body was launched backward, flying toward the hostages. Her classmates, worried, rushed to her side, still very shaken. Since Kim's clone had vanished, they assumed that the girl might be weakened. Even though someone was on her side, there might be a chance for them to do something. She could no longer hide how exhausted she was. Even so, she told the handsome guy to stay behind her, where he would be safe. After seeing that, the leader was thrilled. Since he was a megalomaniac compensating for certain things his anatomy lacked, he was having the time of his life. Amidst his sadism, the hostages were terrified, but he was hoping that the people in the room would start fighting. As he encouraged them to start the violence, someone threw a can at his head. He looked down at the object on the ground, wanting to know who the fool was that had dared to do that. Looking back, he saw the door wide open. Standing inside the doorway was the protagonist, his clothes stained with tomato juice, and on his face a twisted smile. The leader walked over to the can, picking it up with his hands. He demanded to know what it meant. The handsome guy knew that if the can had arrived, then the bougie man had too. Full of rage, the leader hurled the can at the door, demanding to know what the hell was going on. Seeing the boy's shadow, he assumed that he must be the only one left. He said he would start by cutting off his arm, but was suddenly bombarded with several objects. He raised his hand to shield his face from the attack. That only served to piss him off even more. The leader would never be intimidated by some random objects. The problem was, he still didn't know what they were. Finally, he noticed they were his subordinate's glasses. Growing concerned, he heard the boy's footsteps climbing the stairs. That only fueled his rage once more. He hated being underestimated by anyone. That's why he carried that massive sword, gripping its thick handle with both hands. Burning with fury, he unleashed a powerful strike. That attack also put the hostages in danger. A chunk of the ceiling was destroyed by him, causing part of the structure to collapse onto the floor. Kim had to act quickly to save the lives of some of her classmates. The sound of the wreckage was deafening, but the girl's strength was truly impressive. She was able to hold that massive block of concrete as if it were a beach chair. Praising her incredible strength, he told her to stay put because he needed to find the other student. That only made Kim even more furious. He declared that anyone who tried to escape would be eliminated. He had men stationed outside as well. The hostages' hope of escaping was completely shattered. Before leaving, he reminded them that this was the perfect opportunity to claim a leg or an arm from the girl. They should seriously consider it. But she wasn't going to just stand there doing nothing. The man refused to believe it. If she was truly capable of doing anything, she would have dropped that useless weight already. Taking advantage of the hole in the ceiling, he began searching for the loudmouth student. That huge block of concrete was being held up by her and her clones. She warned that she wouldn't be able to hold it for much longer, and if anyone wanted to stay hidden under it, they'd better get out now. The handsome guy shouted that everyone needed to get out immediately. But once again, some of them were tempted by the absurd idea of grabbing a leg, whether from the girl or the others. The boy couldn't believe that someone had actually said that. Another student muttered that the goblin was going to kill them anyway. But that made no sense. She had fought desperately to save their lives. They needed to rethink their choices. The boy believes that Kim, upon leaving, will start a massacre. Finally, the other girl makes her golden appearance. They had talked about something during the fight. Completely transformed, the protagonist is happy that the old man came to him. The leader wants to know if the boy was responsible for that mess. He said yes, they came alone, which made the situation more entertaining. If they had all come together, it would have ended quickly. The leader was impressed by this person. The boy updates the blade of his dagger. He wants to know if he enjoys taking people's lives because he should work for him. He even said that the boy has time to think about it. Coming to a conclusion, he said that Route 9 would be perfect for that person. Immediately, his feet start to move. The boy was moving quickly in that room, but the leader was prepared to defend himself. With the fight in progress, the boy cannot hide his happiness, and the leader knows that he is out of reach of his sword. He needs to give him an opening for an attack. Then he began to raise his sword, striking a blow against the ground. Realizing that the boy was already behind him, he imagined that his strategy had worked. He was already prepared to surprise him. If he does not know the power of his blade, he is due to be cut by it. That sword cannot be blocked once activated. Just by moving it, even the ground was being cut. And now he is about to strike the boy. He said that the name of this ability is too long to be read. At first, he did not understand what the boy had said. He managed to divert the sword's path using his dagger, leaving the leader completely impressed. He wants to know why the name of this ability is so long. Without understanding what had happened, he cannot accept that the boy dodged his attack. Even worse, he does not know how he knows its name. The boy said that this ability is really very good. The shape of the sword varies according to the user. It cannot be stopped until it reaches the end of its movement. His plan had failed miserably, and he could have lost his life in the process. They want to know the boy's name. With a smile on his face, he said his name is Jin Sung. He praised the color of his eyes and tried once again to convince him to join his movement. The boy said that he is the strongest person he has encountered so far, which left the leader confused. Then the boy stated that he only sees 9 paths. The leader assumed that there are 9 paths to end his life. He was impressed that he could see this kind of thing. This is truly a very useful ability. The boy said that 1 path is more than enough, and the leader regretted that the negotiation had ended. If he could take his body back to his superiors, they could use his eyes. Both leap, ready to attack. Their blades are about to practice violence. Meanwhile, someone was watching through the cameras. He destroyed the elevator door. This will make it harder for them to approach. They are in the center of a big city. When the news spreads, they will be pursued by the police and the military. If he leaves too quickly, he will become a target as well. So he needs to spend some time in that room. The protagonist is having a great time with that quality moment, dodging all of the sword's attacks. The leader, on the other hand, was already getting quite irritated, because all of his attacks seemed to be read easily, and the boy managed to support himself on his blade, making his irritation grow even more. He complained that all the boy does is run away until he was surprised by that sudden approach. His face is not pretty, and it is about to get even worse. He managed to move a little, yet he still ended up being injured. injured. The cut, which should have been on his face, was received on his shoulder, but he has no time to recover. The protagonist was already on his trail again, managing to wound him once more. That situation was already becoming concerning. The leader could do nothing but be cut. Realizing that all this time the boy was just playing with him, this was deeply hurting his inflated ego. However, the protagonist was irritated by his enemy's passivity. He wanted to go back to dodging some attacks. Feeling provoked, the leader decided to end it. If he does not use his trump card now, he will end up dying in a cruel way. His hand was enveloped by a dark energy. That terrifying hand almost reached the protagonist's face, but he managed to dodge in time. Looking at his enemy, he has no idea what that could be. He wants to know how the leader managed to do that. That was the left hand of the beast, and he cannot evaluate this ability. So far, none of his tricks have been useful. The protagonist was curious because he wanted to know what kind of ability this was. But the leader was not going to answer those questions, and if things continued at this pace, he would end up dying. The boy realized that his enemy had become stronger with that change in his arm. Finally, the fight became interesting, and the leader revealed that using that significantly reduces his life expectancy. The boy thought he would run away. Being seen as a coward is something he would never do. For the protagonist, perhaps his enemy will not be able to endure it. He wants to know how he can help with that. But the leader said he would find a way to keep fighting, and that he would also continue remembering his enemy because he likes young people with well-defined faces. Concentrating his power, he struck with his blade. It was so powerful that it destroyed the ceiling of that building. A great explosion had caused that crater, while the intense energy was exhaled through the sword. The destruction in the building was absurd. The blonde boy, looking outside, realized that soon this building would collapse. He does not know which of his colleagues is responsible for this, but one thing is certain. He needed to get out of there. Seeing that his victim was fleeing, the protagonist realized that he would soon lose him from his reach. So it was time to speed things up a little. The leader does not believe this is possible. The boy is insane. Already beside him, the protagonist stated that he was taking this fight very seriously. Knowing that his enemy is truly insane, he needs to be extremely careful. That was when the blonde boy recognized the leader of the other Korea. This is an opportunity he will not miss, heading straight to the rooftop of the building. The blonde boy also does not know what the school trash was doing there. Since he looked a little different, he ended up being distracted by that clown. But a voice in his consciousness prevented the worst from happening. His body passed by the completely out-of-control boy, hitting and dragging him across the ground. His colleague understood nothing of what was happening. Finally, the protagonist tried to get up, and the blonde boy went to see what had happened to him. The leader did not know they knew each other, but he was grateful because he was only alive now thanks to the blonde boy. He asked if the leader was not fighting Kim on the first floor, but the leader did not answer anything at all. Turning his attention to the trash, wanting answers, he does not believe this guy is truly dangerous. And from what the leader had said earlier, things were complicated. Once again, he ordered the boy to explain what was happening, noticing that the energy around him was transforming. The leader said that it was thanks to the boy that he managed to shake off that terrifying creature. Understanding absolutely nothing, the only thing he wanted was an explanation. The protagonist's eyes started to glow in a threatening manner once again. The leader said that he never forgets those who save his life, even if they do not know what they have truly done. That only made the blonde boy even more apprehensive. He gave him a piece of advice. If he wants to survive, it's best that he goes to the first floor. But the poor boy understood absolutely nothing of what had happened, and he would never listen to someone as detestable as that. Looking back, the leader hopes his companion is still alive. Now the blonde boy can focus on the transformation taking place in his colleague's personality. Despite everything, the leader was glad he came there because he ended up finding something very interesting. That degenerate who enjoys violence. He simply cannot believe that one of the most wanted people was running away in front of him. And what makes no sense at all is that he was running from this person who is just a piece of trash from his class, because he is sure that this is just a worthless piece of garbage with no potential. The protagonist is approaching the boy, calling him captain. He said he lost his trail because of that fool, and someone will have to pay for it. He can tell that the boy is different. His eyes had changed. Even if he does not want to admit it, one thing is certain, this was becoming quite dangerous. He also does not know what happened on the first floor. He needed to go there to check on his companions. He also knows that the trash is not in the best of his mental faculties. It is better to run away. The protagonist watches the boy flee, deciding not to chase him, but he was very tempted to go down the hole as well, until he decided to crouch down to gain momentum. Using the broken walls as support, he managed to get closer to his colleague. The blonde boy was completely terrified and tried to repel that strange figure, but his threatening eyes were focused. All he could see were countless possibilities. He was very tempted to find out what would happen if he tried. He managed to grab the boy with his own hands. As he tightened his grip around his neck, the blonde boy begged to be released immediately. He invited the boy to play some fun games, separated legs or falling arms he could choose. Not knowing what was happening, he assumed that his colleague was out of his mind. He told him to go play alone with those weird things, but he was determined to keep bothering the extra. He said that the captain needs to take care of his squad. He moved closer to the boy again. Since he was constantly being pushed back, it was difficult to get close to him, and he asked him not to move now. As they were in free fall, the captain started to panic. He warned that if they fell that way, they would both end up dead. But the protagonist does not believe he will die, though he cannot say the same about his colleague. Even in the dangerous situation, he heard another person's voice. It was not the time to keep worrying about his reputation. He did not care how he was going to die. He just did not want it to be at the hands of this deranged person. He managed to make him let go. The protagonist warned that this attack was too slow. Only then did he realize that a sword was coming toward him, but that posed no danger to him at all. He deflected the blade with great ease. The blonde boy was impressed with the agility of the trash, who deflected that attack as if it were nothing. Now he could go back to worrying about the free fall. The more time passed, the closer they got to the ground. And now he was ready to do something completely absurd as he was holding a large block of concrete. He threw the block with all his strength toward the ground. That was enough to cancel his inertia and slow down his fall. Simply phenomenal. The protagonist did not need to do that. He simply fell to the ground with the force of the plot, still very interested in continuing to play with his captain, until he noticed the blade embedded beside him. The person he likes the most in the whole world is also going to play with him. On the first floor, they are asking how long she will hold on. Kim warned that the captain should leave immediately. Even though she looks confident, she is already at her limit holding that weight. She will not last more than a few minutes. As he approached the girl, she prepared one of her powerful punches. She was giving orders to her squad since she was the leader. Some of them started getting very worried. Even the well-drawn boy thought the worst was about to happen, trying to say that Kim did everything possible to save them, putting himself between them to prevent the worst. One of the extras recommended that the boy leave so he would not get beaten up. Lee warned that the others should be ashamed of doing this to someone who tried to save them. They said they have families and that morality does not apply in this kind of circumstance, as they have no choice. The girl was already reaching her physical and emotional limit, while some students realized they were about to be crushed. The other woman knew that Kim did not have much energy left. Knowing that time was short, she asked the boy to move out of her way, but he refused her orders. That was where she realized there was no other choice. She asked him not to let anyone pass him. The girl ordered her squad to save the people who were under the concrete block. She also commanded her squad to protect Kim. Several of them were confused by this order, not fully understanding what was happening. The well-drawn boy also did not understand how things had ended up that way. But, obeying the captain, they formed a large protective barrier. Kim made sure to say that she needed help, as that boulder was already too heavy. Her colleagues, who had succumbed to cheap blackmail, were growing increasingly worried. The boy tried to convince the captain that they should get rid of those people, but she invited him not to get close to her because otherwise he might go through a forced orthodontic procedure. If he got any closer, she would have to use her strength. She knows who the clowns are. If they approach, they will get beaten. Knowing that he would be obliterated by her in every possible way, the boy decided to stay back. The students managed to evacuate those who were under the concrete block, and now they were moving on to the next stage of the plan. That enormous concrete block was being destroyed. Finally, after saving all those extras, Kim was free once again. It was a relief for her to be able to take a few steps, while feeling that her shoulders and arms were really exhausted from that effort. The well-drawn boy did not know when it happened and went to ask her. The girl was grateful that her colleague had understood everything between the lines, but the well-drawn boy did not know what they were talking about. She had told the girl to pretend she was very scared. That was what she had said to her before throwing her among the other hostages. And indeed, the girl was so frightened by the situation that she had forgotten what she had learned at school. The organization they were facing there was not known for leaving survivors. She let herself be controlled by fear, and as a result, made terrible choices. Looking back, everything seems very obvious. Even if they gave in to psychological pressure, there was no guarantee they would leave that place alive. It was her friend who had kept her composure. That way, she was able to lead her squad. Kim had asked the girl to act scared and complained that she had put in the effort to look cool instead. While they were talking, a loud crash was heard. Worried, they began to imagine what it could have been, as this could be the work of that malicious person. The well-drawn boy was thinking about Jinsum's well-being, which made the girl curious. He said that the leader had gone up the stairs to go after him. The girl did not know this yet. Finally, he told her that the person on the stairs was Jinsung himself. She told him not to joke about serious matters, as their colleague was just an F rank and would not stand a chance against the enemy. But there was no one else in that place who fit those conditions. Only Jinsung was not there. There was also the blonde boy, but he definitely would not be that person. The problem was that nothing made sense. Very concerned, the well-drawn boy left as he knew he needed to help his friend. Now the girl was confused because it did not seem like the well-drawn boy was joking. The more she tried to think about it, the less sense it made that her friend was capable of anything. Immediately, she imagined the worst. Her friend must be in mortal danger, and she could not let that happen under any circumstances. Before leaving, she spoke with the other captain because she needed a favor from her urgently. She could not fight in the conditions she was in now. That could be very reckless. If the worst was happening, she would do whatever she could to help the others. Behind that door must be her colleague. There was no turning back now. Before opening the door, she asked the well-drawn boy if he was ready. Thus, the two of them entered that room. Beyond the immense destruction, they noticed that there were several bodies scattered across the floor. An unexpected scene to witness. The boy, who was supposed to be a medic, started to feel sick. It was hard to believe that the protagonist had been responsible for all of that. There were also marks from the sword that the leader used. From the signs, he must have executed more than 30 strikes. She did not know how the protagonist had managed to resist for so long or why they were not there. She followed the trail of the wreckage to the hole in the ceiling. Now there was a massive tunnel leading to the rooftop, much larger than the one on the first floor. She never imagined that little dictator wannabe would be so powerful. The well-drawn boy also had no idea how that hole appeared. It was possible that they had gone up. While she was thinking, she saw something falling. She gripped her sword, imagining that it could be dangerous. At that distance, she could not tell if it was a friend or an enemy. In free fall, the blonde boy was fighting with the protagonist, but she still did not recognize him due to his facial expression. Upon realizing that it was indeed him, she confirmed that something was very different. She ordered the well-drawn boy to move away from there. It was obvious that the blonde boy was being attacked. She needed to find a way to intervene and prevent them from getting hurt, throwing her sword toward the boys. She hoped her strategy would be executed well. But before observing the result, she grabbed the well-drawn boy by the hand. They needed to get out of there immediately. It did not take long for that piece of concrete to hit the ground. The blonde boy was thrown far away after defying the laws of gravity. He was fine, despite being very confused. Immediately, the girl went to him to find out what had happened. She did not know why the blonde boy was being attacked by Jin-sun. Before hearing the answer, she heard the protagonist's voice, who was behind them with a disturbing smile, wishing that they could all play together. He approached his colleagues, but he was completely transformed. His eyes glowed and his smile was strange. The well-drawn boy thought they should not be there, while the girl could not recognize her friend. He uttered a few disconnected, meaningless words, asking them to play with him. The girl doubted whether this could really be her friend. He said it would be fun to play with her, but she had already been hurt enough. She still did not understand what he was proposing, but it was really unfortunate that she was injured. A bit more emphatically, Kim asked the recruit to answer quickly. The blonde boy warned that this piece of trash before her was not the colleague she knew. Not understanding what he had said, the boy confirmed that this trash had been fighting against the dictator. He would only give her one piece of advice since she had helped him in the past. It is better to run away from him when he is in this form. He had learned the hard way and recommended that she run if she wanted to keep living. Before she could ask more questions, the boy disappeared down the stairs. The well-drawn boy recognized that his friend had gotten much worse compared to when they were together in the same bathroom stall. Kim had not imagined that the well-drawn boy knew about this transformation. He said that earlier, the protagonist could control himself. But looking at him now, it was difficult to say. All he was thinking about now were ways to end the girl's life, until he said that he could no longer control himself. Kim said that her friend was too impatient. She could not marry someone like that and did not even know if he could still apply. Showing that he had the knife in his hands, he asked if he could eliminate the competition and take her down too since he was out of control. The girl realized that the situation was extremely dangerous. She would buy some time so the well-drawn boy could escape safely. Besides not having any energy left, she was without her sword. Maybe she could last a few minutes. The protagonist warned that she was his favorite person. The two of them started fighting. He almost cut off her head. She noticed that he was very strong but could not control himself, the same difficulty she had with her ability. In fact, his life was even more painful, and the girl asked the protagonist a question. He seemed to be paying attention. She said she knew how hard it had been for him, acknowledging that he had been trying his best. For a brief moment, the boy trembled. He said that she also did an excellent job. Delivering a precise cut with the blade to her hand, the girl's body fell, while the protagonist had a wide, sick smile on his face. He was having memories of the day his parents received a one-way ticket to find out if God existed. Someone had invaded his home and ended up attacking them. The event was so violent that identifying the bodies proved to be too difficult. After that, he had nowhere to go. He ended up being adopted by his uncle and his uncle's wife. They were marginalized in society because they did not have good abilities. Both had always proven to be great child abusers. Being insulted and beaten was basically what made up his daily routine, until he became a reclusive and deeply tormented child. A classmate once asked why he wore winter clothes even in the heat. His classmates were calling him to come and play, but the girl wanted to find out his reasons. She said they were going to the cafeteria and invited him to come along. He said he would not go, and she left the invitation open for another time. His classmates commented that he had no money at all, which was why he wore old clothes and always smelled bad. Before arriving home, his body was softened with kicks. Some children wanted to see what talent he possessed. The boy insisted that he had none. They knew that, which was why they beat him whenever they could to see if he would develop one. He should be grateful for those constant beatings. One fine day, he took longer to return home because if he arrived early, he would start getting beaten early too. On the way back, something happened. He came across a strange creature. That tiny animal seemed to be abandoned, but was very cute. The boy started playing with the puppy he had found. The two were very similar. Both were abandoned and smelled bad. He started playing with the dog in the middle of the street, and they became friends. Every day he stayed in the square until late at night so he could play with the dog. One day, his uncle went looking for him because the neighbors were asking too many questions. The boy knew he would be beaten when he got home. Seeing the adult's rudeness, the dog lunged at him. His uncle discovered the reason why he was always late. The neighbors already found it very strange how that child was treated. Then the adult said that the boy could take the dog home. In his innocence, he thought this was a gift. The two were playing under the blankets, until his uncle started yelling, asking why he had not gone to sleep yet. The boy quickly turned off the lights. In his notebook, there were drawings of a happy life with the poor stray dog. The next day, he asked his uncle if he could play outside, but the man did not care. Even so, the boy was very grateful, and he took the dog with him to keep him company. Finally, he had a friend to play with. His life had become much more interesting, because now he had a friend who did not care about his clothes or his body odor. A friend whom he made very happy. He realized he was late returning home. Surely, his uncle would be very angry. To avoid bigger problems, he hurried back. His uncle was upset about the delay. The boy did not care about respecting him, but even so, he apologized for the mistake. The man said that he had been trying to treat him well in recent days, but the boy was not cooperating. He always had to be aware of what the neighbors were saying about them, all because of the boy. But in the midst of that scolding, the little dog was filled with rage, barking uncontrollably at the boy's uncle and aunt. That deeply irritated the man as he did not tolerate being disrespected by an animal. The boy said he would train his puppy, but he was pushed aside by his uncle, making the dog even angrier. He said that the boy was very rude and needed to learn a few things. His aunt said they had been going easy on him lately, but that beating session would be for his own good. On the other side of the room, the battle between the stray dog and the habitual drunkard was about to begin. His first move was to command the dog to shut up. The second was a fatal kick that sent the dog to the animal paradise. but the blow was not effective enough. The poor little animal was agonizing with its spine broken. At least now, it did not have the strength to keep barking. The boy was very worried, but he was also enduring his own punishment session. For the first time in his life, his face took on a terrifying expression. But his uncle did not like that one bit, and decided that beating him was the best method to teach the boy how to behave. After taking a brutal beating, he looked just like the dog, writhing in pain. The man said that his arrogance and weakness must have come from his parents. After those words, he started to smile maliciously, revealing to the boy that he was the one responsible for executing his parents. Even his wife thought revealing that was excessive, but no one would believe him anyway. The boy had always believed that his parents had been attacked by a burglar. He told him that he was beating his parents because they refused to lend him money until a burglar entered through the window. This led to an innocent person taking the blame for his actions. He would never forget the expression on that unlucky man's face. The boy finally understood who was responsible for his miserable life. They did not realize that the demon was taking over his body. The dogs still tried to warn them. The poor creature lunged at the man as if trying to tell him to run away, but he thought that bite was an attack filled with hatred. The poor boy tried to tell the stray dog to flee from that completely ruined home. Unfortunately, his uncle decided to end the dog's life. After a harsh beating, the puppy could no longer move. The child thought all of it was his fault because every living being he loved ended up dead. He was certain that if the puppy had never met him, it would still be alive, starving on the streets, until he felt a gentle lick on his face. It was the little dog happily in front of him. But it was nothing more than memories and hallucinations caused by post-traumatic stress. The woman said they could still beat the dog even after it was dead, but the uncle preferred to throw it away. He could no longer endure that miserable life filled with despicable suffering. A knife had appeared in one of his hands, and the ropes that had bound him were destroyed. After receiving that kind of love from his uncles, the boy finally bloomed. His uncle did not know where the boy had gotten that dagger from. He soon realized that it was the boy's ability. If it was a small dagger like that, then he must be weak and pathetic, just like they were. F-rank parents who gave birth to an F-rank child. It's almost poetic, but they didn't realize that along with the dagger, the spirit of Satan also came. The man was about to sing more insults, but the boy executed a clean cut. Finally, despair began to set in that house as the woman's arm was also severed. That was a great relief for the boy. They tried to beg for forgiveness, but it was time for the boy to shine. Looking at the obliterated body, he asked his uncle to say a few more words, but he was begging for his life just like his aunt. However, the boy didn't want to end his fun so soon. It was time to show them how suffering can be entertaining for those who inflict it. The boy needed to control himself. Even so, that feeling was really good. It had all been just a nightmare. He finally woke up. He was lying in a hospital bed. The school nurse approached him, confirming that the boy had woken up. So he confirmed that he was in the school infirmary and not a hospital. Placing her hand on the boy's chest, she stopped him from trying to get up, warning him that he should rest a little longer. He didn't know why he was there and felt that his head hurt a lot. Looking at his hand, he had a brief hallucination, which left him completely terrified. Seeing that he was agitated, the nurse warned that he really needed to rest. She asked him to try and calm down a little more, but he wanted to know what had happened at the bank and how his colleagues were, especially that well-drawn boy. And upon mentioning Kim's name, he realized things might have gotten complicated. Falling to the ground, deeply saddened, the nurse asked him to breathe, but the boy's memories were confused. He wanted to know where his friend was, and he asked again more emphatically, since his last memory was of attacking her. The nurse told him to calm down as his friend was already on her way to the infirmary. That made him realize that she might be alive. He needed to get out of there immediately. He had to check with his own eyes if she was okay. The nurse could only watch as the boy left. It would have been much better if he couldn't remember anything. His body was really worn out now. He couldn't imagine the trouble he had caused his colleagues by entering that state. He couldn't even control himself. His ability was very dangerous. On the street, a girl walked carrying shopping bags. From a distance, he could tell that it was Kim, the one he had been so worried about, confirming that she wasn't going to the infirmary because she was hurt and that he hadn't cut her neck. The girl found it strange to meet the recruit in the middle of the street. He fell to his knees, deeply relieved that he hadn't harmed her. But the girl didn't understand the reason for that reaction, especially in the middle of the street. To make things worse, since he was running, it must mean that his body had healed. The boy started crying uncontrollably, overwhelmed with relief. His colleague was worried. She didn't know if he was hurt and didn't understand why he was crying. She asked him to stop immediately, or people would think he was crying because he had been rejected. Shortly after that dreadful attack, the school was closed for a week. The attack was immediately reported as soon as the blonde boy managed to escape the bank. In total, 30 innocent people were invited to cease living in that event. All the students managed to escape alive. The news focused on the class that had managed to resist the dictator's attack with great interest in Kim's performance. She preferred fighting over giving interviews and knew it was better not to mention Jin Sun's involvement. After all, the reporters wouldn't believe her. It had been 3 days since he had been sleeping, and the girl was very worried. Remembering what had happened, she also had trouble believing it. The boy's attack had been focused on her horn. At first, she hadn't even understood what had happened. But the boy seemed to have deliberately attacked her horn. Immediately afterward, he lost consciousness. She didn't understand why he had fainted so suddenly, becoming instantly worried about the recruit's health, who had collapsed on the ground for no apparent reason. If he had stopped crying, he should stand up already. The boy was still deeply shaken by his memories. She told him that he hadn't hurt her at any point and that his ability was also under control. All of them were feeling insecure. But the poor boy was still extremely emotional. Kim could already imagine the nurse's expression upon seeing the boy run desperately into the streets. As soon as the school reopened, life also returned to normal. But their class was being seen differently because of what happened. Some students wished they had experienced it too. The protagonist still has difficulty accepting that he ended the lives of those people, even though they were criminals and were trying to kill him. He also thought he would be able to control his ability, but he was brutally wrong. It was a miracle that he lost consciousness, as he could have become an enormous danger. He would not let that happen again. He needed to find a way to prevent his ability from taking control. He needed the help of someone who would take him seriously, someone who had seen his ability, even if only for a brief moment. Someone had managed to push his ability to its limits through physical training. Stating that the protagonist had come to him, he reminded him that he had given him the week off. But the boy had something to ask. The young man already had an idea of what it might be. Getting down from the pull-up bar, he told him he could start telling his story, because now he wanted to know what it was. He wanted to know if the value of someone's soul was based on the ranking of their ability. That was so complex that the young man didn't understand it at first. Abilities are scaled through a universal classification. Powers and skills depend on the ranking. The young man thought the protagonist was asking if some souls were worth more than others. That was exactly what he wanted to know. Maybe the young man agreed with it. But to the protagonist's surprise, he said no. It is true that abilities vary among people, but that is not a criterion for determining whether some souls are worth more than others. That is not something that can be classified. It is not possible to rank human souls. The boy thought his friend would think differently, because you believe that abilities were fundamental in differentiating rankings. Indeed, they are different from one another, but they are not a parameter for determining which souls are worth more or less. He noticed that the protagonist was very confused and disturbed. He must have reached this conclusion on his own and came to him to confirm the hypothesis. In reality, he also did not agree with that statement, but he did not think his ability could be worth more than any other soul, because he was made to become an assassin. He used to believe that some souls were more valuable than others, that would define the purpose of his life. In his case, the purpose was to take the lives of others. That was why there was so much turmoil in the protagonist's heart. When that young man first saw him, he recommended that he never stop training, and he thought the protagonist was not following that advice. But he had been going to the gym frequently and always said that his muscles were sore. His training was not something that could be done casually. Even so, the protagonist always gave his best. He had a reason to dedicate himself so much. The higher his ability level, the greater his combat potential. And to overcome his problems, he decided to make his body stronger. Some of his ability was not exceptional, but he compensated for it with a well-trained body. He knew the protagonist would not train unless he truly wanted to. And now he knew why the boy had gone to the gym that day. His combat ability was far superior to his skill ability. He wanted to confirm that no soul was inherently better than another. It was through that belief that the boy sought to overcome his difficulties. Whether ranked high or not, he could not allow himself to be defeated by his own negative thoughts. That was why he had been paying attention to his colleague. The young man wanted to know if he had helped the protagonist in his search for an answer. His talent was Class B, but in combat, he was in a plus, showing the protagonist that it was possible to surpass his own limits. The young man was living proof of that kind of thinking. There was something else he wanted to know from his colleague as well. It was about the squad match. He had heard that was the protagonist's true nature. It was hard to believe he was an F rank because, in reality, his talent was of a superior category, and he was the one who had defeated the dictator inside the bank. The young man set the weight down on the bench press. There was no reason for him to doubt his colleague, as there was no advantage in lying about it. Very grateful, the protagonist was moved that he was being taken seriously. He did not want to be controlled by his talent. He had once thought he could control it somehow. But when he first struck with the knife, he completely lost the little control he had. After that, he became a wild animal. He does not want this to happen again in the future. He would like to know what his friend would do in his place. Got a healthy mind, he needs a healthy body, and that body can only be achieved through training. But the protagonist has already been doing that diligently, and nothing has changed so far. Those who cannot control their own abilities usually have the same problem. They are people incapable of loving themselves. Those who do not love themselves cannot accept the work they do for themselves. Since the protagonist has been making an effort, he should be proud of it. Frustrated, he said there's nothing to love, because all he has is someone who enjoys taking the lives of others, a killer. His friend asked if all his effort was to become that kind of person. Regardless of the problem, he should learn to love himself above all else. He is not a person who enjoys reaping the lives of others and making them suffer in the process. He has to love the part of himself that does everything possible within his reach to control his own desires. That is the person he should love. After being the target of a speech in Ojutsu, the protagonist was completely defeated. His friend said that one day he wished to be the best, but his ability was nowhere near his ambitions. No matter what he did, he was always far from the top, stuck in the valleys of his own life. At school, he never managed to reach the final rounds of the competitions he participated in. He felt weaker and more hopeless each time and blamed his own ability. Until one day, he started to think differently. Maybe he did not fully understand the potential of his own ability. He started using it and testing his own limits. He would strengthen what was strong and minimize his own weaknesses. He faced his talent like never before. Until one day, things changed. He was no longer the same resigned person he had once been. He became a fierce and powerful competitor because he succeeded in surpassing his own limits. And even now, in the present, he continues on this lifelong journey of overcoming his own barriers so that one day he can become the best. He wanted to know what his friend was going to do after this. The boy slowly removed his glasses, throwing the lenses to the ground, because now he was also determined to surpass his own limits. After abilities emerged, traditional weapons became obsolete as they were not capable of destroying these abilities. The same cannot be said for chemical weapons. Once things returned to normal, they could be attacked. Inside that room, the students were breathing toxic gas. The blonde boy did not understand the purpose of this kind of training. He banged desperately on the door, hoping someone would open it. One of the instructors said that the test was too intense. Even after the plague event, this was excessive. But the teacher disagreed. He ordered his students to sing the national anthem. Those who did so would receive extra points. Immediately, the protagonist started singing in a loud voice, while some of his colleagues tried desperately to open the door. Finally, something was unlocked. From the outside, no one could see who was inside that room. Some students had to be carried out, but the protagonist walked out without any signs of distress. He approached one of the instructors saying that his superiors had fallen ill and that he was now taking over their duties. Out of everyone in his squad, he was the only one who managed to remain standing. Due to the harmful effects of the gas, all the others had gotten sick. Thus, he was able to complete the report for his instructor. A figure moving through the shadows seemed to have found who they were looking for. For now, the protagonist was excelling in all evaluations. Even the physical assessment, he stood out among his class. He was completely dedicated and would push his body to its limits. Even in the camouflage class, the protagonist had been outstanding. No one had been able to find him, not even the instructors. According to the reports, he had been leading all the evaluations. It was a shame that someone so dedicated had an F-rank talent. The teacher said that the rest of the students were also performing above average, but that was still not enough. They needed better results. Because of this, the teacher was very concerned, as it was not that simple. There was a brigade paying close attention to the development of that school. They were against the allocation of government funds to that school. That level of performance would end up damaging their reputation. They needed to work harder to change this scenario. One solution that the man came up with was to start training earlier. The teacher wanted to know what kind of training was about to begin. Presenting the schedule, he said that the students would undergo high-intensity combat training. That way, they might be able to achieve some satisfactory results. The students now had to carry some boxes. Kim asked why the protagonist was carrying 2 boxes at the same time. He said he wanted to take the opportunity to train a little, but the girl knew that he always did that during lunch. Justifying himself, the protagonist said that this situation was different. Since his explanation didn't make sense, she decided to ignore it. His classmates could barely carry 1 box and were impressed that he could carry 2. Kim said that soon, he would get used to this kind of attention. He decided to look at his colleagues who were struggling. For him, people were staring much more than usual. Kim said the focus of attention was on him, not her. The boy was quite surprised after hearing that statement. He thought it might be his handsome appearance that was attracting those looks. Kim said she would completely ignore what he had just said. The protagonist found that response quite insensitive. Even so, the stares distracted him, and he ended up bumping into the blonde boy. That caused him to lose his balance slightly. He apologized, saying he wasn't looking ahead. He realized that he had bumped into the captain of his class. But after the incident with the dictator, he could no longer intimidate his colleague. He was terrified of him. He just continued walking, advising the boy to start looking where he was going. Noticing that the captain had changed, he wanted to know what had happened. Kim asked if he already knew why the other students were no longer bothering him. He assumed it was because they were walking together, but she said it was actually because the boy's behavior had changed. And apparently, he was an idiot for not realizing it sooner. Now the boy had more questions than answers. He wanted to know if his friend wasn't curious about his talent. Placing the box on the ground, she said she wasn't interested in that kind of thing. The protagonist revealed that he didn't mind telling her the whole truth. With a smile on her face, Kim warned him that it was good he didn't say that to other girls. Since it was her, she would let it slide, but if it had been another woman, she would have fallen for that bait. Realizing that he could tell another guy, he said he had already revealed the truth to Sungho. That immediately made his colleague furious because she wanted to be the first. He had better tell her everything right away, or she would beat him until he had to return to the infirmary. The one who was really frustrated with the recent events was the class captain, because during that last incident he feared for his life, and the dictator fled the bank as if he were desperate to save himself, running away from the protagonist as well. The boy didn't know how everything had been twisted like that. Until he was certain of everything, he wouldn't accept that that piece of trash was stronger than him. Since they were in public, the protagonist said he would tell her everything later. And once again, the girl warned him not to tell other women. Changing the subject, he wanted to know why they were carrying those boxes. Kim told him it was part of their training. They were going to learn guerrilla tactics. A young man was signaling for cars to stop. Behind him, the students were walking in a single file. They were all exhausted. The blonde boy didn't understand the necessity of all this. While the protagonist regretted not adding extra weight to his backpack, Kim told him the heat must be making him crazy, because he was always dragged to the gym against his will. Now that the weather was getting better, he was becoming obsessed with exercise, until she noticed that he had stopped walking. If Sungho were there with them, he would be carrying weights in each hand without even questioning it. A terrifying idea that the girl would never put into practice. The students were going to take a break in front of the bank where the incident had occurred. The protagonist noticed that his colleague seemed uneasy. She wanted to know if he was feeling okay about that situation. Pointing at the bank, he asked if she was referring to that. The girl felt like she was worrying unnecessarily. A person approached her asking if she was the famous Kim Sion. Without enthusiasm, she said yes. The people in that city thought she would be a great hero in the future and were impressed with her accomplishments so far. Politely, she thanked them for all the praise. Perhaps they had stopped in that place to do some positive publicity for the school. The students who were present during the incident are now once again in that place. Naturally, this would attract public attention. Since the school receives many complaints about its methodology, this is an opportunity to gain positive publicity. Even the owner of the shop next door is happy with him, even though they are blocking his display window. Perhaps the teachers have already taken care of that privately. A good opportunity to boost student morale and create positive promotion, without considering the stress that the students went through. It is disgusting that they are being exploited in this way. The teacher announced that they would start walking again. The protagonist noticed that his colleague had not rested, but she was irritated and did not respond politely. He took the opportunity to look at the bank once more. He would be lying if he said he felt fine as well, but he had already changed his way of thinking. He was the one in control of his life, not his talent. No soul is better than another. That is what he believes. On the phone, the principal stated that things were going as planned. It was great that he had chosen that route, even though it was longer. The students were already on their way. He was going to leave some words of encouragement for the students because that was the role of the battalion commander. He believed that the school would not be able to accomplish anything without him. Accelerating his car, he smiled, thinking he was irreplaceable. The teacher said that the trail they would take was very steep, so they would rest a little before departing. The girl called the protagonist. She was calling him a nuisance, and the boy wished he had a better nickname. Despite her bluntness, she offered him some chocolate, and the recruit eagerly accepted. While the students were gathered, the commander's car arrived. They did not recognize it immediately, but the vehicle parked near them. As a teacher ran to approach, the commander complained about the heat. The teacher presented himself with great diligence, and the commander went to his favorite student to see how she was doing. The girl said that the training was going well. That was exactly what he wanted to hear from the school's prodigy, but he did not know who was standing next to her. The protagonist then introduced himself. The commander did not remember this student. He said that during training, the boy should refer to him as commander, and the protagonist apologized. That act of treating his favorites better was something that greatly irritated the girl. The commander noticed that those two were far more relaxed compared to the other students. He asked the protagonist to show what was inside his backpack. The boy did not understand the request, but he needed to check what the students were carrying. He ordered the lieutenant to bring the list to him. It was clear that he wanted to find some flaw in the student's equipment. Perhaps he had customized the contents of his backpack, which would cause problems. Fortunately, all of his equipment was in order. That was not the result the commander wanted to find. Seeing that his backpack was not yet empty, he wanted to know what else he had brought for that training. The boy was about to reveal what he had hidden. He had brought some extra weights to exercise, totaling 20 kilograms. The commander asked if he knew what the training for that day was, and the boy gave the most perfect answer possible. Kenan was already getting irritated with the commander's effort to find some flaw in the boy. Very nervous, the lieutenant said they needed to take the squad to training immediately. That way, he managed to get the commander to leave. But the girl was not happy with anything that had happened. Soon, the students would reach their destination. Those people knew that Kim was the best in her class, and the girl could not wait to test herself against her. But they should really be paying attention to that boy named Jinsum. She knew her friend overestimated the boy with the dagger, but she had her doubts about his abilities. He was very fast and had good endurance. But there were limits for someone with a ranking as low as his. Maybe he was not the one they should be looking for. Her friend said the boy was worth it. The girl said that Jungho was exaggerating a lot. Without hesitation, he warned her that the boy was very important. He was so categorical that he left his friend surprised, as he also said that the protagonist was stronger than she imagined, capable of easily surpassing the entire class. The girl was startled by this statement and asked the captain to repeat it. It seems she still had not changed her perception of that boy, ignoring all the hard work he had put in. The problem is that he has only been training like this for 2 months. That is not enough time to reevaluate him. Because of this, the captain stated that she would have the opportunity to evaluate him herself eventually, but he gave her his word. The protagonist would be the star of this training. They ended up building a dormitory for the students, and the protagonist did not like its militarized style. The style was not to his liking. In total, there were 300 students in this training, and his number was the last one. A sound alert informed the students that they should gather at the education center. That voice was familiar. It was Sungho. The rumors were true. His colleagues were terrified because they did not know how they would compete with him. Meanwhile, the protagonist was filled with determination. They were all gathered at the designated place. Sungho would be their instructor this year and had some announcements to make before lunch. Room number 1 would be called Unit 1. Meanwhile, room number 10 would be called Unit 10. That was how he would refer to them during training. And as they suspected, the numbers assigned to them had been given by the school, representing their ranking on the student list. However, they would be graded fairly here, regardless of their original placement. This dynamic scoring would make up a large part of their final evaluation. Their performance in this training would directly influence their final school assessment. Since it was noon, they had to finish lunch by 1 p.m. and rest until 2 p.m. After that, they would be informed about the schedule. The students were still very hungry, but they had no other choice. Those who ate first left almost nothing for the last ones. One of them suggested that they should injure themselves on purpose so they could go back, but the nurse was there to take care of them. That was when the protagonist arrived at the room, inviting his colleagues to eat as well. There were many rations inside those bags. They never imagined that the protagonist would do something like that for them. When they asked where he got them, he said he had not stolen anything, but that it should be kept a secret. He had gone to his colleague, who was the instructor, and told him that he was hungry. He mentioned that he had heard about the inspection he had passed. The protagonist was ready to train, but he needed to eat first. The sergeant wanted to know how much food he needed. He was shocked to hear that the boy asked for food for 15 people. It was really hard to believe. Even so, he did as the protagonist asked. They had received that food from the teachers themselves. Seeing that his colleague would resist, the protagonist made sure to assert himself. The young man quickly recognized his own insignificance. The protagonist thanked him for his kindness, while the extra student cried in despair. His colleagues greatly appreciated the meal. That way, they would be ready to train. The protagonists had saved their lives because now they could give their best effort. that would be crucial for them to endure until the next meal. They said that because of this kindness, they would repay the favor one day. He asked them to make a promise, then, that they would not give up during the training and that they would strive to do their best. It seemed like the protagonist forgot that they belonged to Unit 10, the lowest-ranking students. He was fully aware of that. He assured them that their talent was not inferior to his own. That made them think deeply. Truly, Jin-sung had changed a lot. He was no longer the person they remembered. They wanted to be like him. That made his colleagues realize something. The protagonist would be the leader of that room. They would not give up in the middle of training because they were highly motivated. Finally, the first exercise began. The instructor asked the student to do 4 more repetitions. Thus, the students were being pushed hard during the workout. Some of the instructors quickly identified the protagonist. The girl noticed that the sergeant had a smile on his face. He could not hide the pride he felt, and the girl was even more surprised. It was not just the protagonist who had changed, everyone in his unit was highly motivated. She did not know what had happened. Finally, the training day had ended. The night watch schedule had also been posted. They had to check the board in front of the dorms. There was a message for student number 300. The protagonist presented himself with great diligence, because the sergeant wanted to know if that was all he had. The boy confidently replied that it was not. As he had mentioned before lunch, he would give extra credit to the students of Unit 10. That made all his colleagues highly motivated. They could not believe they had managed to do that. The protagonist was the first to take the night watch. He thought he had gone out too early to stand guard. Hidden in the night's shadows, his colleague was approaching. Her long blonde hair gives her away. She went there imagining that the protagonist would already be waiting for her. After saying that, she approached the protagonist. She apologized for making him wait so long. But the boy said they didn't have much to do in that place. Maybe they were put together on watch because they are the two extremes in the ranking. She just doesn't understand how he is in last place. But the boy said that after this training, things will change. She is impressed by his confidence. He assured her that next week he would earn a different badge. She still thinks she will be his superior in rank, but the boy said that a lot could happen. He might even become a surgeon, which made his colleague laugh genuinely. She squeezes her hands together, anxious. It would be great if that happened. He even found her words strange, asking her to repeat them, but the girl said it was nothing. At the dawn of another day, the students are very tired. It was too early for them to start exercising. While the blonde complained, the protagonist ran dedicated. He can't believe this is happening, because in that training, the protagonist is already 2 laps ahead of the last group. Really? He is exceptional. It's his platoon members who are mediocre. The sergeant reminded them that none of their companions had failed the previous day's training. The nurse said that none of them had needed to go to the infirmary either, which left the girl even more impressed by what was happening. They are running there as if nothing had happened, as if they were zombies. Zombie Squad, the sergeant really liked that name. In that day's ranking, the protagonist was leading the score, followed by his friend. His squad mates were also well ranked. They continue marching motivated. One of the instructors can't believe that those guys are real. It's not possible that Unit 10 is made up of the worst. The truth is, he is a little scared of these guys. When the protagonist tried to get his attention, the instructor ended up terrified. He wants to know what the student wants with him. Actually, the protagonist only has one question, and the instructor thought he was a normal person. Talking to him wouldn't be challenging, so he said he could ask anything. The protagonist wants to know what will happen if they finish that obstacle quickly. A little apprehensive, the instructor recommended that they not try to do that. The student wants to earn a higher score. The instructor said that if they complete the entire training, they will be sent to another training session, which will be authorized by Sungho himself. They would stay there until the rest of the students completed the obstacles. Since they would be the first, they could spend a lot of time with Sungho. But he and his colleagues became even more interested in that. The faster they finish, the more points they will earn and the more they will train. Definitely, the protagonist is the craziest of all of them. One of the students is terrified of that test. The instructor said he needs to get down quickly. Another wants to know if the obstacle was built correctly because they are going through it too fast. That entire squad had completed the obstacle course. His colleague is only doubtful because she wasn't there to see how it happened. Whatever number 300 says to do, all his colleagues obey. If he says to climb, they climb. When he says to jump, they jump. The boy recalled that number 300 was the one who participated in the squad battle, and he is the same one now encouraging his colleague. That was enough for him to find courage within his heart, descending that obstacle without any difficulty. Once on the ground, his whole group starts celebrating. The instructor asked his colleague if he had seen that because Unit 10 is moving on to another training, and they are very happy about this possibility. The current instructor would like to switch positions, but his colleague is not interested in that. On the 3rd day, they would exercise their talents. It was supposed to be done at another time of the day, but they chose a milder time due to the heat waves. After finishing the training, they could return to the dormitory and rest for the rest of the day. Even though the weather interfered, everything is going smoothly. The students might end up pushing themselves too hard. The purpose of this day is to teach them how to use their talents in combat. They usually use them without restrictions, but now they are already exhausted. This way, they will be able to explore an unknown potential. After that day, he is sure that some students will change the way they see themselves. He asked them to listen carefully because they will need to use their talents in that training. He pointed to some boulders that were there. They need to use everything. They have to destroy those rocks. Each student will try on one boulder and must put in a great effort. When they can no longer use their talent, their turn will be over. It's a challenge that may be impossible for some of them. They don't know how to apply their talents to it. Some may believe this is not a fair test. Many of them must already have some notion of what their own talents are. Some of those talent was made to be used against a person, not a rock. He begins to charge his power in front of the entire platoon. Immediately, he grabbed the boulder in front of him. With his strength, he managed to dig his fingers into the stone, something truly impressive to witness. He managed to lift the rock off the ground. a truly impressive feat. But he had not yet stopped demonstrating his ability. Throwing the boulder to the ground, he caused it to shatter completely. The surgeon did that without even breaking a sweat. The protagonist noticed that his talent had progressed even further. It's a talent that is almost reaching level A. He is not affected by the weight of the object while throwing it. Some students are already questioning whether the surgeon is even a real person. After demonstrating how to do it, he asked if the students had understood. In the absence of responses, he asked once again if they had understood. Then the students responded to him very frightened. He started calling the students. Number 1 would be the first to try. That number belongs to the girl with the goblin horn. With her sword in hand, she stands before the boulder, prepared to deliver a strike. Her evaluation begins immediately. She is using her family's secret techniques. Her cuts are precise and brutal. The defenseless boulder could do nothing. She sheaths her sword, very pleased with what she had accomplished. Her colleagues are impressed with her ability. Some believe she was the one who repelled the terrorists' attack, and others imagine that it must be a privilege to be born with power. Then, they call the next student. The boy uprooted a tree. He said they are always the same. One day, he will take one of these trees and shove it into a part of the boy's anatomy he won't like. He started striking the boulder with the tree, but the more he hit it, the more exhausted he became, without producing any results. He is patiently observed by the instructors. The girl identified with him since she has a similar ability. She blamed the tree, saying it was rotten, but the surgeon stated that he would take the characteristics of his individuality into account, proceeding to call the next student. As time passes, the rocks are being destroyed. Not all of them succeed in doing so, and finally, they reach the last person on the list. The protagonist faces the large boulder. Of all those present, he chose the largest one. Until now, no student in his unit had destroyed a boulder. It's possible that he won't succeed either, and a dagger appeared in his hands. Some of his colleagues began to lament. Maybe he really won't make it. Looking at the surgeon, he asked for permission. The protagonist is highly focused. His friend is as well, as he is rooting for his success. Closing his eyes, he began to invoke his true power. A red energy started rising up his entire arm. Those who know what that could mean became immediately frightened. The surgeon authorized the start of the test. The protagonist's dagger was already prepared. He began executing several cuts toward the boulder, which were enough to completely destroy it. He had to do all of that with his hand on his face to hide his sadistic smile. He just needs to contain himself a little longer. The instructor who witnessed it is struggling to believe what her eyes have seen. Time is almost up, and the protagonist is kneeling, nearly losing control. He knew this could happen, that he might struggle with his ability. The surgeon said he could ask for help at any time. The boy thanked him. He can now rely on others whenever he needs to deactivate his ability. It wasn't even fully activated. He needs to be able to turn off this power. The protagonist struggles to stay focused, while his colleagues don't understand what he is going through. Very pleased, the surgeon said he had successfully completed the test. Sweating heavily, the protagonist said he was only able to do it because he had help from his great friend. His partial ability is an A-level talent. The more parts of his body receive the power, the harder it is to suppress the initial urge to kill, and everything depends on his mental fortitude. And the movements of the limb under this power are erratic. They won't depend on his will. It wasn't perfect, but he managed to pass. Kim was quite worried about it. Before continuing to talk to him, the protagonist was warmly received by his companions. They toss him into the air, celebrating his victory. The girl is happy that her romantic interest has friends who admire him so much. Finally, night has fallen upon them, and the protagonist is knocking on someone's door. He was looking for the nurse. His team hasn't needed physical recovery until now, but there is a limit to natural recovery. While thinking that he needs the nurse's help, someone asked what he was doing there. It was the teacher passing through the hallway. He wants to know what the protagonist is doing at that hour of the night, as he could be punished for it. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a prepared answer. The teacher approached the student to check if he was aware of the punishment. No matter the reason, he shouldn't be there. Knowing he might be in trouble, he said he was aware of the consequences. That was when the teacher told him to be quiet because only those who get caught are punished. Concerned, he ordered him to go back to the dorm before he was discovered. But that excessive noise caused the door to open. The young man was intrigued by the protagonist's presence. Since he is the only student in the school with an F ranking in 2 areas, he started provoking him, thinking the student wanted to quit the training. Meanwhile, the friendly teacher recommended that he return to his dorm quickly. The young man said he had heard about what had happened recently and about the terrorist attack. Since they were all there, he would offer the student something to drink. He was already tired of eating frozen food. He knew some places in the area that could be interesting. There was a college gathering happening there. The young man said that there weren't many instructors in that environment, so the student could relax. He knew the training was tough, but a boy could afford to take it easy. The protagonist said the training was good for them, but he was annoyed because talking about training is easy when one does nothing. The other teacher tried to pull him away because it was almost time for roll call, and the young man wanted to know what had brought that F-ranking student there. He said he came to see the nurse. Knowing she was being sought out, she wanted to know if the student was injured. He was fine, but he wanted to know if she could help his unit with physical recovery. The other teacher believed Unit 10 must be in shambles, but upon checking the exercise scores, he was quite impressed. The student considered the worst in the school was leading the rankings. Finally, the protagonist realized that the teachers had not been checking the rankings for the last 3 days. Some began to suspect that a conspiracy was underway and that the student might have bribed the instructors. He said that even though he was someone's friend, his character would never allow him to accept bribes. But they found it hard to believe that the student was truly exceptional. The protagonist tried to defend his colleagues, saying that everything they had done was fair. He left, but those teachers were outraged, promising they would watch the next exam closely. Meanwhile, the teacher was leading the protagonist outside. That incident had deeply irritated him. Before leaving, he posed a hypothesis, and the arrogant teacher wanted to hear those words. The protagonist wanted to know what would happen if, by some miracle, everyone in Unit 10 ended up among the top 30, while the teachers were watching the tests. That was so surprising that they didn't even know how to react. They acknowledged that at the very least, he was a very funny guy. He should drop out of school and become a comedian. But the boy assured them that he was being completely serious. If that happened, they would perform another miracle by promoting all the students in his unit to corporal. If they failed, he would have to repeat the year. Leaving the room confidently, he asked the teachers to keep their word. That left the teachers uneasy, imagining that the protagonist might be in trouble. He apologized to the nurse for what he had caused since she was very worried. She should have gone to them sooner. The protagonist is focused on the bet they made as he now needs her help. She said she would help the students recover. The boy is sure that if they are in good condition, they will win. She really likes his confidence. Inside the dormitory, something unusual is happening. Some students are hitting the protagonist's colleagues because they think he is cheating, but his colleagues don't know where he went. And even while being beaten, they are defending his integrity. The humiliation session continues relentlessly. The protagonist cannot get angry. Fighting them is exactly what these idiots want. And from what he saw from the teachers, they wouldn't respond to his call. The boy needs to act quickly because his friends are being beaten. One of them ended up finding the protagonist. He warned his colleague to stay hidden. Feeling the concern they had for him, the protagonist fell into a crisis. Finally, the jerks found who they were looking for. He approached and introduced himself to them, asking what they were doing. He warned them that this was their chance to leave, but the jerk wanted to know what he was going to do, cried to the teachers. He knew the protagonist had connections with Sungho. It was unusual that the top-ranked student couldn't defend himself, being a complete fraud. He needed to contain the urge of his ability. Those guys thought he was cheating. They asked if he could prove anything, believing he was a cheater. The blonde boy said that for someone so tall, that guy was ridiculously dumb. If they wanted to get beaten up, they should wait for training the next day instead of making that mess. Amidst the conflict, the jerk's lackeys were encouraging him to act like a fool, putting those losers in their place. The problem was that the protagonist was nearly out of control, and he had much more to lose than to gain from that conflict. This was their chance to be respected as a group. He just needed to endure his anger because the nurse would soon arrive to treat his wounds. But the jerk wasn't going to let him leave so easily, and he used his ability to immobilize him, managing to completely restrain the boy. Now there wasn't much he could do. The protagonist said that guy wasn't a monster. He resembled a worm much more. That only made the jerk even more aggressive. He said there was a proper punishment for people who cheat. Maybe he would break some of his bones right there. The protagonist tried to suppress his murderous impulse. He was almost running out of air. His body was being squeezed tighter and tighter, and the jerk said he was nothing if he couldn't cheat. The protagonist was holding on until the guy got bored. He just needed to wait for the nurse. His companions were starting to get really worried. The bully knew they wouldn't try anything. However, his companions decided to react. That would only make things even more complicated, because now the jerk had the entertainment he was looking for. Repelling the attack from the protagonist's colleagues, he said the weak should know where they belong. That's what they had always done. They had learned to change because of the unit's leader. One of them was on the rooftop when everything happened. Because of his inferiority complex, he felt stupid and hopeless. Until he blocked that punch, he believed the protagonist was very weak. Other colleagues of his were also present that day. It was then that they realized they had been wrong. They had succumbed to the bully's coercion, while the protagonist had been strong enough to stop him. Not even he knew he had changed these guys' lives. The melancholic confession continued. They believed they were much better than they thought they were. But the jerk kept beating them. That's why he was going to make an example out of all of them. Finally, the protagonist realized he was wrong, because he had taught those guys never to give up. If he fought now, he could say goodbye to his promotion. But that was a title he wanted for himself. It wasn't what the zombie squad needed, because they had been trained to never give up. He was the one who had brought hope to all his comrades, and it was time to keep providing that hope. The jerk wanted to know what the protagonist was going to do with such a small dagger. He told his colleagues to pay close attention. If they relied on their talents to fight, they wouldn't be able to defeat a worm like that. At first, he was going to go easy on him, but the bully became furious at that remark. But the protagonist wasn't intimidated, exuding a menacing aura. Breaking free from him, he said that guy was just a disgusting worm. It doesn't take a high-ranked talent to crush worms. Now the bully was worried. He didn't know the protagonist was so strong. Advancing toward him, he said the jerk's legs were also very weak, delivering a cut to one of his thighs. Feeling pain, he curled up like a child. It was just a scratch, and the protagonist said he didn't even know how to react to the pain he was feeling. Terrified, he started apologizing repeatedly. Looking at him, the protagonist said the jerk had no resistance at all. As the protagonist got closer, the jerk tried to back away, and he took advantage of the fact that the guy's limbs were elastic to do something very amusing. Finally, he had finished his masterpiece. He said his colleagues could take him down using only brute force. Looking at the jerk, he still had one question to ask. If that example had been good enough for him. The guy couldn't answer because he was too scared. His fear was so overwhelming that he ended up fainting on his own, a result the protagonist hadn't been expecting. Now all that's left is to deal with that idiot's lackeys. He asked them to take him away from there because he couldn't stand looking at him. As soon as dawn broke, the students began practicing their exercises. And once again, the protagonist displayed his determination. The blonde boy couldn't understand where he got so much energy from, until he started paying attention to the other students. They weren't able to keep up with an F-class student. Maybe they really were trash. The instructors were also observing the run. The girl wanted to know how student number 7 was doing. The nurse had difficulty bringing him back to normal. The trauma was too great, and he wouldn't be able to return to training. She had also spent a lot of time taking care of Unit 10. They were going to have trouble with that day's training. Knowing this, the instructor became very worried. Sunwo called for student number 300 because there was something to discuss with him. Due to the incident the night before, he decided to deduct some of his points instead of expelling him. After the score reduction, he was back in last place. Having nothing to say to them, he dismissed them to go to the cafeteria. Unfortunately, there might not be anything the protagonist can do about this. His colleagues said it wasn't fair. They weren't the ones who started the fight. Student 300 was just defending them. The surgeon ordered them to be quiet and go to the cafeteria immediately, but they kept insisting on justifying what had happened. For refusing orders, he said he would deduct points from all of them. One of them had finally reached his limit. Continuing in that training made no sense at all. No matter how hard they tried, everyone still thought they were trash. Finally, the surgeon was about to say something, and the protagonist continued to behave obediently. He was the only one who did that. In a plank position, he did it to reflect on what he had done. His colleagues were very moved because he should have been angrier than all of them. Even so, he accepted the consequences. Soon, all of them were in a plank position. That night, the highest scoring exercise was going to take place. The protagonist saw a glimmer of hope in that. This would be their chance to prove themselves. The protagonist definitely wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. Time was passing very quickly that morning. If the students weren't dismissed soon, they wouldn't have time to eat breakfast. So he ordered them to stand up so they could go to the cafeteria immediately, as they would only have 20 minutes to eat. They just hoped there was still something left to eat. They would divide the portions equally, but they ended up running into the idiot professor. It seemed like those students hadn't eaten anything yet. He warned them that he would have preferred not to eat that at all. The meal was awful, which left the students quite discouraged. Knowing they had ended up in last place, he believed even more that they had been cheating. The protagonist said he was tired because he was really hungry. The professor knew that one of his students had been taken to the infirmary the night before. It was unfortunate that the jerk belonged to that professor's class, and he already knew who was responsible for sending his student to the infirmary. Unexpectedly, he was actually pleased with what had happened. It was even funny that someone ranked number 7 had been beaten up by the lowest ranked student in that training. If he was going to lie, he should at least do it more convincingly, something his student clearly didn't know how to do. That deeply offended the protagonist. The teachers were also going to train that morning to make things fairer. The kind professor intervened because breakfast time was almost over, so they said goodbye to the students, who needed to hurry because there wasn't much time left. Entering the cafeteria, the protagonist was overcome by a horrible feeling. The teachers didn't seem all that eager to train. Only one of them wasn't complaining. The idiot professor praised his colleague's performance. With the teachers there, the atmosphere was terrible. Their presence was ruining the entire experience for the students. Since the nurse was extremely busy, not all the students were able to attend, and Unit 10 was already at its absolute limit. Seeing them weakening was crushing the morale of all the other students. Now she realized she had underestimated these students' performance. They needed to deal with this ongoing disaster. The surgeon ordered the students to pay attention to his words. He knew that everyone wanted to conserve energy for that night's exam. The units would have to elect representatives for that afternoon's exercises. The winner would be granted rest time. Those who wanted to represent their units should step forward, something the protagonist did immediately. The kind professor did the same for the teachers, but ironically, he was stopped by the idiot professor. Given that, the kind professor wouldn't insist. Thus, all the representatives were gathered. Winning that challenge would be great, but if he overdoes it, he won't be able to compete at night. Looking at him, the idiot professor wished him good luck. The student who finished first could choose the next exercise. Those who couldn't keep up would be eliminated. He quickly realized that this exercise would be very intense. The surgeon would evaluate the student's execution. Finally, the test had begun. That professor was very fast. The students knew they needed to keep up the pace. In the first exercise, 4 of them were eliminated. Since he was the winner, the professor would choose the next exercise. He soon noticed that the protagonist was much faster than he had expected. As a result, 3 more students were eliminated. He didn't want to lose to someone from Class F. Even though he gave his best effort, he was still slower than the student. Kim knew that, thanks to the professor's presence, that test would last a long time. Losing on purpose, she didn't want to waste her energy on something meaningless. The professor wanted to know how long that student would last beside him. The two continued competing, and the professor was feeling exhaustion take over his body, because he couldn't surpass the student in any exercise. But he didn't want to lose to that boy. His goal now was to prevent him from resting. The exercise continued for a while longer. The professor had to decide whether to have a heart attack or give up. Recognizing that the protagonist was truly a monster, he collapsed unconscious on the ground. Thus, Unit 10 earned a rest for the remainder of the day. The rest of the students would continue training. His colleagues went to check if he was okay. He asked everyone to rest well. His legs were extremely fatigued from that exercise. The surgeon was about to make an announcement with a microphone. The final test, a trench battle, was about to begin. Some might say they were at a disadvantage, but that didn't exist in war. They wouldn't be able to choose the conditions under which they would fight. He expected the students to be able to manage adverse situations. Now he would explain how the test would be conducted. The commander had arrived just in time to see the conclusion of that test, and since it was the final stage, the commander would be in charge of the evaluation. After hearing this announcement, Sungwoo approached the commander to speak with him. He had already been authorized to lead that training, but they had finally reached the last stage, and the commander believed he should lead it. Knowing he couldn't change the situation, he withdrew from leadership, handing over the entire evaluation plan to the commander, receiving praise for it. Indeed, the planning was phenomenal. The commander had made a mistake in choosing him, but it was far too complicated. He would do it in a simpler and more efficient way. He said the students had dedicated themselves a lot up to that point. Finally, they had reached the last session. He wished them to do their best, because now he was going to explain the rules. The combat would alternate between using abilities and not using abilities. The commander would be the one to decide when that happened. Anyone who fell outside the arena would lose. Defeat could also come through surrender. or if a student lost consciousness during the battle. These were the only rules they had to follow. The sergeant wanted to know how he would decide the order in which the units would compete. Speaking to the students, he said he had forgotten an important detail. All of them would participate in this battle. They would be individually evaluated in a massive battle royale. The one who survived the longest would score the most points, earning points for each opponent they eliminated. The nurse wanted to know how he would use the safety bracelets. He had forgotten about that too. He knew the students had received them from the nurse. When the user became too injured, the bracelet would absorb the damage until it broke. Normally, they would be eliminated at that point, but if the students wished to continue fighting, he would allow it. Truly, the commander was a complete degenerate. His rules were improvised and dangerous. The protagonist saw that he had no choice. He would have to stay in the fight to earn enough points. He had managed to control his ability the day before, but weakened. He might not be able to do it again. The commander knew that everyone was quite surprised, but the students needed to stay calm. Looking at his watch, he saw that the timing was perfect. The match would start in 2 minutes, and the students would begin the fight with their abilities activated. They wouldn't even have time to adapt to all that mud. The rules were also poorly structured. The protagonist looked at his friend. It was possible to see the disappointment in his eyes. Finally, the test began. The students started organizing themselves for battle. The blonde-haired boy was already being targeted by some of his colleagues. Being chased, he started running away. They needed to take him down while there was nothing he could use his ability on. But those losers weren't intimidating. They only made the place stink even more. They couldn't believe he had managed to use his ability on that beam. Holding it in his hands, he said they had underestimated him greatly. Realizing they would be eliminated immediately, they started running. But they weren't fast enough. The blonde boy didn't forgive them. There was too much drama in that arena. Kim wanted to know if those people weren't going to fight as well. She knew she was being cornered until the ability-based combat ended. If that was their strategy, she already knew what needed to be done. So she took the initiative in combat. The protagonist's colleagues knew that the commander favored students with powerful abilities. That was far from what his colleague had planned. If it had been better organized, they could have scored a lot of points. Those rules favored students with strong abilities, just as they were thinking that their thoughts were interrupted. Some colleagues were saying that Unit 10 should abandon the test. It was time for them to prepare for battle. It was obvious they would be the first targets since they were seen as the weakest. The protagonist asked his friends to hold on until the ability-free fight began. Watching from above, the commander liked what he saw. The sergeant pointed out that the students hadn't even warmed up for this. That training session shouldn't have been focused on ability usage. Approaching the boy, the professor said that the battalion commander was absolute, but he acknowledged the sergeant's efforts as he was also the director and had a duty to be understanding. That professor was a real bootlicker, endorsing everything the director said. He thought it might be time to give the students a break. He announced that in 30 seconds, abilities would no longer be allowed in combat. They just needed to hold on a little longer. It sparked a glimmer of hope in the protagonist. On the other side, Kim was facing about 30 people. She greatly appreciated her colleagues' understanding, charging against them using her abilities. In front of her, even the best of the students seemed mediocre. The blonde boy knew he needed to defeat a few more students before the combat dynamics changed, so he started being much more aggressive, hitting the extras with all his strength. Seeing that some students were standing out, the director wanted to keep the battle going at that pace. Knowing this, the sergeant tried to intervene, but the commander said he was always too hasty. He announced that abilities should be deactivated immediately. Some students were quite unhappy about it. Fighting without abilities was a waste of energy. After that moment of tension, the protagonist's battalion had managed to hold on. But they were very weakened and didn't know if they could last until the end. The students needed to plan very carefully what to do next. Some weren't so confident because they depended heavily on their abilities. They had to wait until they could use their abilities again. Some decided to form temporary truces, but they ended up being caught off guard. The others didn't know what was happening because they were being ambushed in the middle of the arena. While their teammates had been doing nothing, they had been negotiating with the other units. It was unexpected that they were now fighting each other. One of them said they would regret what they were doing. They had been waiting for this moment, but now they didn't know what to do. The zombie squad was at its absolute limit. They wouldn't last until the next ability phase. And the protagonist didn't know what to do to hold on a little longer, staying silent, trying to think of a strategy, until one of his colleagues called out to him. They knew everything their captain had done up to that point, and now there was only one thing left to do. They wanted the captain to lose control and show the commander how arrogant he was. It was time for the zombie squad to charge against the others. His colleagues started getting scared because they thought they were exhausted. This talk of saving energy didn't exist now. They were going to grab the first person they found. The girl tried to flee terrified, but she was going to be caught by the zombies, who charged furiously through the arena. The protagonist was moved by his colleagues' efforts. Faced with that, the blonde-haired boy thought they were all idiots, immediately getting provoked by Kim. He ordered the girl to stay away from him, only to realize he had been surrounded. He didn't like at all that she had brought several colleagues with her. He realized she had done it on purpose. The girl knew that her captain had eliminated enough people to secure a good score. While the other colleagues imagined that they might have formed an alliance, this could mean the end of the test. She decided that she wouldn't do anything else because she was too tired. The professor tried to communicate with the commander, but he wasn't even paying attention to the fight. When he learned that his favorite students were being subdued, he became very worried. He didn't know how that was happening, but it was just as the sergeant had predicted. The director didn't understand those words. Using abilities, those two could defeat many people, but without them, it was difficult to overcome those who had the numerical advantage. Their colleagues had teamed up to take them down in their moment of weakness. In a fight without abilities, those two became targets for all the other students. The director realized that this was an opportunity for those two to refine their skills. Since the reporters hadn't arrived yet, the students couldn't be eliminated, but the best candidates were being taken out quickly. That was making the commander increasingly furious. The sergeant saw that Kim could still fight, but she seemed to have given up to make things easier for the protagonist. The commander had believed that only the best would remain until the end, which was why he had asked the reporters to arrive late. He needed to change the course of that test immediately. The fight would change in 30 seconds. They would be able to use their abilities again. With that change, the students needed to be prepared. The one who was most grateful was the protagonist. He thought he was changing his colleagues, but it was they who had changed him. Some guys approached him because they knew he was a friend of the sergeant. They said he didn't stand a chance against them in an ability-based fight. Since he was very tired, he thought he might lose control. But this kind of adversity was what would make him even better. They didn't understand why the boy seemed to be talking to himself. Seeing that he had been surrounded, one of his colleagues warned them. That boy, when he was alone, was extremely dangerous. He had seen him fight the previous day and knew he was more dangerous than they could imagine. He had tried to make him waste his energy defending his colleagues to sabotage him during the fight and ended up witnessing something incredible. Finally, they could use their abilities again. The jerks were feeling quite confident, believing they would overwhelm the protagonist. But the first of them had already received a well-placed facial massage. The precise hit was enough to put him to sleep involuntarily. The others couldn't even process what had happened because they were about to get beaten too. The sound of blows echoed through the arena. Another fool had been knocked out. Seeing that, they started getting scared because the sound of the boys' strikes was terrifying. Some decided to attack. The guy with the baton tried to hit the protagonist's head. With surprising speed, he passed through all of them. They realized that wasn't even an attack. Thinking he was trying to escape, they decided to chase him, only to discover that their weapons had been destroyed in the process. The protagonist was running out of patience, revealing his knife to them. With a cold and threatening gaze, he ordered everyone to leave. Terrified, some of them began to surrender. One of the boys was scared by what he was seeing, because he knew that the protagonist represented a deadly threat. He remained standing, not losing control of himself. One of the students started demanding the promise that the guy had made to contain the strongest candidates. He said he was keeping his promise and that student 300 shouldn't be considered one of the strongest. They started arguing because that boy had led all the training sessions. His girlfriend believed that in an ability-based fight, it could surpass that boy. But the guy knew what he had seen the night before. He told her that the protagonist was truly dangerous. While they were talking, someone approached them. The protagonist asked them to stop gossiping and come face him. But his presence had become too threatening. Even though he was afraid, the guy decided to attack him. He had a whip, which was a B-ranked ability. But that wasn't enough to scare the protagonist. Talking to his own hand, he reminded it that they shouldn't take anyone's life. Seeing him talk to himself, the student became even more frightened. His whip was incapable of hitting that person, and now he was getting really scared. He tried executing multiple attacks against the protagonist, who defended against all of them. That shouldn't have been possible, and the protagonist lamented that this was all he had to show. Realizing he was getting too excited, he reminded himself that he needed to stay in control. With one hand on his face, he tried to hold himself back at all costs. The girl noticed that her opponent hadn't even broken a sweat, yet he was able to block all the attacks. Her boyfriend started calling for help, but they were too afraid of being hit by that whip. Even though he didn't know the name of that student, the commander knew that the boy with the whip was highly ranked. The instructors noticed that the protagonist's progress was accelerating. The girl was about to speak with the sergeant. She realized that he wasn't surprised at all. That could only mean one thing. Meanwhile, the protagonist was running out of patience dealing with that whip. It was up to him to get closer to his opponent. His girlfriend decided to stand in the way using the Shield of Love. It was a B-ranked ability that became stronger when protecting people the user loved. She was confident that she would be able to block those attacks. All it took for the protagonist was a single blow. The shield was completely destroyed. The girl could hardly believe that her defense had failed. Being grabbed roughly by the face, she was thrown straight at her boyfriend. That only made her angrier. There was no way a small dagger could have done all that. Noticing that the bracelet on her arm had been broken, even though the shield had absorbed part of the impact, her bracelet still shattered. Realizing that their lives had been in real danger, they decided to surrender. The boy signaled their surrender, while his girlfriend thought her ability was too weak. The two of them were leaving the combat arena. The protagonist felt that it was becoming easier to control his ability. That might have something to do with its name change. Seeing that the couple had given up, their colleagues were furious. The protagonist said they didn't have much time, so they should hurry. Even the commander was irritated that the students couldn't defeat a mere F rank. Since they had the numerical advantage, they believed they could win. Seeing their similarity, he assumed they were twins. His threatening gaze analyzed their abilities. The first one had a C-ranked ability. That attack was far too slow to hit the protagonist. However, he was caught off guard when mud splashed onto his face. He didn't like getting dirt in his eye. The other boy had an interesting ability, a rod capable of extending, a talent rank at 100. He was about to surprise the protagonist from behind, since he was too busy trying to clean his face. Even so, he managed to deflect the rod's trajectory with his dagger. The boy could hardly believe that even with his back turned, his target had defended against the attack. Turning to him, he said that rod was pretty cool. Then he pulled it with all his strength, dragging its wielder along with it. It was time for the protagonist to test that ability. Before he realized it, the rod was heading straight for the other twin's face. He barely managed to dodge a violent hit, but to do so, he had to toss the iron beam he was carrying into the air. As it fell, the massive piece of steel created a huge mess. The protagonist said he would borrow that rod, but its owner wasn't going to let him have it easily. That was exactly what the protagonist wanted. With one hand, he started swinging the boy around non-stop, until he was too exhausted to hold on and fell into the mud. Thus, the two brothers were defeated. The protagonist wished that fight had lasted a little longer. However, there were still plenty of people left to entertain him since he didn't know when the director would change the combat rules. The students were now worried because they hadn't expected the protagonist to surprise them like that. The kind professor had no idea about his students' potential, but he knew that the boy had been working hard. He ended up not appreciating his efforts, all because he was an F rank. That was never going to change. He thought the boy would be transferred soon. Maybe he had improved due to his own strength or hard work, but he regretted not seeing it sooner. He remembered the questions the boy used to ask. His job as a teacher was to contribute to his students' growth, but even when the boy opened up to him, he hadn't taken him seriously. That made him feel deeply regretful. Crying with emotion, he wished he could apologize to his student, while the commander was furious, not understanding why the professor was so moved. The professor desperately started cheering for his student, and the commander ordered him to be removed from the area. Not knowing why he was being taken away, the annoying professor said it was an order from the director. The commander didn't understand how things had ended up this way. All of the top-ranked students had already been eliminated, and now Class F was stealing all the attention. They needed to take him down before the reporters arrived. He was thinking of ways to sabotage the students' progress. No matter how well prepared he was, the commander decided that abilities would no longer be allowed. Are you sure he won't withstand this? The protagonist remembered that there was supposed to be a 30-second warning, but he knew he would be sabotaged. One of his colleagues removed the metal bar that was there, revealing that it was very thin. That would only make it easier to destroy that wall. The cracks were growing larger and larger, spreading across the entire wall, until it was completely broken. His colleagues assumed he did all that to blind them with sunlight and escape, but escaping wasn't an option for him. He wouldn't abandon that arena. The ones who would be ejected from there were his opponents. The mud was flowing through the hole. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. The inspector knew that the entire building had been recently constructed. More than 100 people had been thrown outside. All the protagonists remained inside. There were so many students left for him to have fun with. Since he had already taken off his boots, he wasn't being slowed down by waterlogged footwear. Even so, the commander couldn't understand what was happening. Originally, that exam was supposed to encourage teamwork, but the individual scoring system had made them prioritize their own safety. The false sense of security and numbers had clouded everyone's judgment, and the director's arbitrary interventions were only increasing the chaos. Not to mention that one of the well-ranked students had decided to target the protagonist. Since the scoring was individual, focusing on the protagonist had proven to be a huge mistake. Now they were discovering that his combat ability wasn't that of an ordinary class. That training could have been much worse, but thanks to the commander's interference, the students were learning a valuable lesson. Those who remained in the arena were afraid of the protagonist. He started to waver because he was exhausted. This was their chance to do something. Several students threw themselves at him. They needed to push him out. If they succeeded, he would lose. It was 5 against 1, and he was severely weakened. The others started calling for help as well. Everyone was focused on eliminating the protagonist. Seeing this, the director began to celebrate. Finally, the reporters were arriving. The protagonist hadn't been eliminated yet, but soon he would be outside the arena. Answering his phone, he ordered the reporters to enter immediately so they could witness the ability-based combat. Announcing to the students, he told them they could now use their powers. He was eager to witness the rest of the battle. He just didn't expect that the protagonist was still inside the arena. That made him realize the magnitude of his mistake. The students were no longer able to restrain the protagonist. Faced with imminent danger, they began losing the coordination they once had. The protagonist felt that the pressure on him had decreased significantly. If his enemies had worked together like his squad did, he would have been eliminated already. Seeing that he was rising again, the students resumed their attempts to hold him down. His right hand alone wasn't enough anymore. He needed to increase his power output. With that, he managed to free himself from all of them, but he was getting dangerously close to losing control. He told them they were terrible at teamwork. Seeing the protagonist's success only made the director more frustrated, and now the problem had reached him directly, because the reporters were there to witness the test. Their chief greeted the director, who said he was honored by the opportunity. He had come to see just how powerful these students were and intended to showcase it to the world. Even as he greeted the reporters, the director tried to hide how uncomfortable he was and suggested they go have some coffee. But the reporter was distracted by the ongoing battle. He wished he had seen it from the start, but knew not to distract the students with cameras. Truly, the director cared about his pupils. They had been doing an excellent job filming the remainder of the evaluation. He also noticed that the instructors were extremely focused. He immediately approached Sumno, as he had interviewed him once before. He wanted to know if there was any student worth focusing on at that moment. Sumno praised all of his colleagues, and before he could recommend someone, the director interrupted him. He claimed that all the best students had already been eliminated. The reporter wanted to know how that had happened. The director was trying to stall for time until the protagonist was eliminated. He said that those who had been eliminated needed to learn to rely less on their abilities. Despite the improvisation and borrowing words from the surgeon, the reporter really liked what he said. One of the cameramen called the reporter over to look at a student. They might have a headline in their hands, so he abandoned the director, watching as a boy effortlessly dodged every attack. There was nothing that could reach his body. The students began arguing that someone needed to approach the protagonist to resolve the situation. The reporter wanted to know who that boy was. He had to be at least Class A. Faced with the director's hesitation, the professor said that the boy was an F class. To the reporter, that had to be a joke, but the professor insisted that he wasn't joking. All of that was the result of that student's hard work. Once again, the director tried to hinder the protagonist's progress. The director told them to keep their eyes on Jin-sung, claiming he was phenomenal. The reporter wanted to know even more about this mysterious student, and the commander no longer knew how to sabotage him. Meanwhile, the protagonist remained extremely dedicated, but he didn't know how much longer he could hold out. He continued defending against every attack. For some reason, even though he had expanded his abilities domain, it wasn't difficult for him to control this urge to take lives. Some of the other students felt something very strange, a sudden sensation that that person had become incredibly dangerous. The protagonist was able to intimidate them without doing anything. Looking at his hand, he saw that his dagger was different. It had begun to glow intensely, and now its blade had changed color, taking on a deep crimson hue. The blood-sucking dagger was a D-tier item, but with a combat rating of B, it absorbed the target's blood and allowed its wielder to control the target's movements. It was indeed a very interesting item. As long as he could satisfy the minimum conditions for its use, he could continue fighting. Not only had he mastered his ability, but he had also enhanced it. It had truly been a productive day. He asked if his friends could see his progress. He also wished Sungo had been there to witness it. In fact, Kim was watching the evaluation from the sidelines. Cheering for him, she urged him to take them all down immediately, something he wouldn't hesitate to obey. The menacing energy of his ability began to terrify everyone, and the protagonist was completely focused on the attack. In the blink of an eye, he managed to defeat several opponents. Their bracelets fell to the ground, completely destroyed. They had been cut down despite wearing their bracelets. Terrified, they began surrendering. That weapon was perfect for a situation like this. From above, the director believed he was witnessing an absolute nightmare. The reporter saw that a single person was fighting against 60. Approaching him, Sungo mentioned that if they counted the students present before the reporters arrived, Jin-sung had easily eliminated more than 150 students, something the reporter found hard to believe. And that wasn't all yet. By the time the battle ended, he would have eliminated approximately 200 students. Finally, night had fallen. A man opened the door to the meeting room, only to find the dictator, whose face was a picture of tragedy. He remarked that it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. He knew this dictator very well. Wasting no time, he wanted to know what had brought him there, because if it were up to him, he would end his life right now. The dictator said there was no need to be so aggressive. They used to be friends after all. They began discussing their past, but the man told the dictator to stop spouting nonsense. He warned that he didn't need to plan an escape from an old man like him. What he needed was an excuse to contact him. On that ship, Purina would soon sink. That day, he had almost been defeated for good. But he needed to be somewhere else early in the morning. He knew that many of the dictator's men had perished because of him. He mentioned that during his last visit to Korea, he had found something very interesting. He had learned that his old friend was training children, so he went to see what was happening and got beaten up by one of them. Hearing that, the man was deeply intrigued. The dictator was blunt. He had fled from a child. If he hadn't, he might not have lived to tell the tale. Those words carried weight, even for his old friend. He had heard about the Beck attack, but he hadn't known that part of the story, where the dictator had been cornered and forced to flee. Now he needed to know who was responsible for that. Seeing the man's reaction, the dictator started laughing, realizing that even he hadn't heard this part of the story. He knew his old friend was incapable of lying. He had thought the boy was a secret weapon, but he was so secret that even he didn't know about him. Now he wanted to know who this weapon really was. If even he didn't know, then the dictator would have to make the first move. He had called him there to talk, but his ignorance was an unexpected surprise. The girl remarked that it had taken him quite a long time to wake up. Next time, she would like to be informed in advance so she could be prepared. Weak and exhausted, he recognized his dear friend. Passing his hand over her face, he imagined he was dreaming. Squeezing her cheek, he said she was very soft to the touch. But the girl ended up getting very irritated by the comment. After giving him a few slaps, she asked if he had finally woken up. He doesn't remember much, but he is sure he was in the middle of the evaluation. She doesn't believe that. After eliminating everyone, he started jumping around the arena, asking if she had seen all of that. He is quite sure that's not how things happened. She told him that as soon as he got out of the mud, he fainted from exhaustion. Weak like that, it will be hard for him to become her husband. He can't believe that right after waking up, he is already being threatened. He wouldn't marry her, but the girl promised she would treat him very well. She wants to know if he is still drowsy. The truth is, the boy finds her too beautiful, almost like a dream. He just wishes she wouldn't tease him so much. Since he was already awake, she could hand him his ranking badge. The boy was happy to learn that he was no longer a recruit. Soon, he would receive his certificate. He asked what it was for and discovered that he was the first place in guerrilla training. She was surprised by the boy's inner reaction, thinking he would be happier. It doesn't make sense for him to be recognized as a senior recruit. Despite the effort, he said he had made a bet with the Class 6 instructor. If he and his colleagues ranked well, they would all be promoted to corporal. She can't believe he worked so hard because of such a silly bet. The boy tried to explain, but she wouldn't let him. All of his colleagues had been promoted to corporal, only he wasn't. And there was even more news. Thanks to him, the nurse was very busy. You better thank her. Shocked, he hadn't imagined he had caused so many problems for her. The girl suggested they go thank her later. If he got scared, he could hold her hand. The boy said he could do it alone, but the girl insisted on accompanying him. Since it wasn't her fault, he needed to do it alone. And once again, his cheeks were squished. The girl wanted to know why he didn't want her company, but he didn't see the point in it. Apologizing, the instructor said that the battalion commander was not present at the moment. The bald man warned that they still didn't have a proper system in place. He was also a battalion commander and had contacted the school in advance, being received by a subordinate officer. Apologizing, he said that at the moment, he was acting as an instructor. The boy smiled as he couldn't expect much from a school that had only recently been militarized. It could never compare to their institution. battalion. The instructor knew they were competitors of the 998th Brigade. Since Korea's militarization, several schools had emerged to produce obedient soldiers. They were made up of teachers with extensive military experience. The bald man wanted to know when the principal of that school would present himself to him. Stating that he had stopped calling him commander, this could only have been done on purpose. He also said that the principal would arrive soon. Seeing the instructor's expression, the bald man assumed he still had something to say. The instructor said he was being disrespectful, and since he was from another battalion, he ended up apologizing. He had gone there to make a declaration of war, but ended up getting ahead of himself. Surely the instructor must have heard, as this was nothing new. Apparently, the commander's concern was real. They had some very talented students, but they might not have heard the latest news about that school. The bald man assumed they were talking about the boy who won the guerrilla training, the Class F assassin. If that was the case, he was already aware. But he said it made no sense at all, as the boy wouldn't last long in that school. Even lies need to be, to some extent, coherent. The instructor realized he truly wasn't up to date on the details. Finally, the principal arrived, apologizing for the delay. The two greeted each other, but now he called him commander. Leaving the room, the instructor said that was far too exhausting. His eyes caught something interesting. That was the second round of attempts to join the school club, and someone was saying something among their exhausted peers. The protagonist wanted to know what Sungwoo thought of it. All of his colleagues were worn out. He said there was no need to ask. All members of the zombie squad would be welcome in his club. That was definitely not the answer they were expecting, but the protagonist was very happy. Then they all celebrated. The cool instructor had high expectations for this charismatic student. He hoped he could prove to those arrogant people that they were very wrong. He learned that they ended up reaching an agreement. Now they just need the commander's approval, confirming the simulated terrorism operation between the schools. Even though the circumstances are advantageous for the competitor, he cannot refuse. The bald man said he would return to his battalion. Now the principal is deep in thought. That situation was far too humiliating. Someone is reviewing the recording of the last evaluation. It is the reporter doing this because he was very impressed. Definitely, this story in his hands will end up going viral. He looks at his notes, attentive. The problem is that there were people who wouldn't want this to be exposed, and even the video couldn't be made public. The government is applying a lot of pressure to keep this hidden. Convincing the public with just photos and text is no longer enough. People will just say it is being exaggerated. No one will be inclined to believe that headline, that an F-rank boy managed to defeat 200 people alone. If he read an article about the same topic, he wouldn't believe it either. The question remains as to why they want to keep his powers a secret. Perhaps it's to preserve future talents. But that's not it. Or they would have intervened during Kim's interviews after the terrorist attack. The reporter started thinking about the situation the school is in. Remembering the terrorist group gave him a spark of creativity. The people involved in the bank event must have been recorded. His hypothesis was completely correct. But before it could be revealed, he was interrupted by someone. It was that guy who had hot news about 2 interesting schools. For the reporter, that was a great opportunity. At the end of the day, the protagonist was praising his colleagues' efforts. Everyone was very happy. They had never exercised so much before, and after being promoted, they were no longer victims of bullying. They learned that the exercises that day were just Sungho's warm-up, which made them realize there was a long road ahead. One of them said they still hadn't seen the protagonist's wife. The boy explained that Kim herself had asked to be called that. She had been waiting for them, but left early upon learning they would be training a bit more. His friend started saying he should treat his wife better. Besides being very beautiful, she was also very strong. He was a lucky guy. But this situation only made him even more embarrassed. Noticing that someone was standing before him, the man with the scar had appeared. He wanted to know if the student was Jin-sung. The protagonist hadn't even noticed his arrival, and his colleagues were quite impressed. He apologized for scaring everyone. The boy said there was no need for that since he was Officer Lee Shin. He was flattered to be recognized, and the protagonist said there was no one in Korea who didn't know who he was. He asked if the people with the boy were his friends. They said Jin-sung was their leader, and the officer noted that the boys were very enthusiastic. Since he liked the energy of his subordinates, they said it was all thanks to their great leader. If it wasn't a problem for them, he would like to speak with their leader in private, and the boys said they were already on their way out. He also asked them not to tell anyone about this, and they promised to keep it a secret, greatly appreciating their cooperation. With that kind of energy, they had a bright future ahead. Now that they were alone, he apologized for the intrusion. The protagonist didn't know why the combat chief wanted to talk to him. He had watched a recording when the protagonist was fighting his colleagues and wanted to meet him in person. The protagonist said he was just an ordinary student, not worth someone important like the officer coming to see him. With great seriousness, the officer asked if the protagonist believed that some souls were worth more than others. An unusual question. He didn't know why he had asked that. Apologizing for the sudden question, he revealed that he was the one responsible for militarizing that school. It might seem cruel, but his goal was to find great potential, like that of this student. He still had high expectations for Sergeant Sungho, but things were complicated. The protagonist revealed that if it weren't for that sergeant's effort, he and his friends wouldn't be there. That was exactly what he wanted, to have students inspired by him. But only one person had followed in his footsteps. He said this while resting his hand on the protagonist's shoulder, because he was the person he was talking about. And after meeting him in person, he was convinced of this fact. This boy was the secret weapon the dictator had spoken about. He was very surprised by the recording he had seen. Maybe he has found the potential he has been searching for. But he still doesn't feel anything about it, and the recording didn't show the power capable of surpassing his enemy, the dictator. He told the boy that he got lost in his thoughts, wondering if Iljong had lied to him. That made him feel a little confused. Ending the conversation, he thanked the boy for giving him his attention. He went on his way right after that. But looking at the boy, he wished that he would keep winning. The protagonist asked who he was supposed to win against, and the officer said he would soon find out, wishing him a safe trip home. But the boy was very confused. The sergeant continued training hard. Looking at the clock, he saw that it was still 11 o'clock. He was taking much less time to reach his limit. Thanks to the addition of the zombie squad, he had been pushing himself even harder with the exercises. It had been a while since he had trained so intensely. Truly, Jin-sung was an admirable boy. If he was going to be seen as an example by them, he would need to push himself even more. On his way home, he came across something strange. It looked like some thugs were committing a crime. The girl begged them to let her go. They wanted to do some despicable things to her. Approaching them, the sergeant ordered them to stop. He said that was the only warning he would give. But the delinquents weren't intimidated and tried to intimidate him instead. Before they could finish speaking, the sergeant was already using his ability, and he managed to grab one of their bodies. The delinquent realized he was in serious trouble. Having one of his hands crushed, he began to writhe in pain. The girl immediately recognized Sergeant Sung-ho. He said he could handle him and advised her to walk along a busier avenue. The girl left thanking the boy. Another thug tried to stop her from escaping, but the sergeant managed to immobilize the guy in a gentle way. The others, who were still unharmed, tried to threaten him but were too scared to do anything. The boy said he had already warned them about this. Throwing the bodies of those he had in his hands at the others, he left them all defeated. He told them they could stop acting because he knew their goal was to lure him into that alley. After that, some shadows began to reveal themselves. They hadn't expected the boy to notice everything so quickly. He hadn't even thought about hiding his energy. It had been a while since he last met Kang Jin-ho. The boy welcomed him with a smile. Now the two were staring at each other. He said the pebble in his shoe had managed to grow a little. The sergeant asked why they were doing this. He had been with his friends and decided to talk to a handsome student. The sergeant knew they were from the rival school, and Kang started looking at him deeply, wanting to know how he had figured that out. He was suspicious of the girl who, even while wearing his school uniform, called him sergeant. It hadn't been long since they were militarized, and the students weren't used to that yet. That girl would have called him something else but not sergeant. Kang had hoped his colleagues' acting would be better. Besides that, the way Kang treated his companions was evidence of it. The boy apologized for their poor acting. The sergeant knew that the schools were going to have a joint training session, and if there were students using military terms in that area, they had to be from the 988th. Kang said he had understood everything correctly and had grown a lot, but he was going to make him remember the glory days. The chubby guy asked if that was really Sung-ho. The boy confirmed and asked who the fat guy was. He was about to reveal his identity but got too excited. Kang said his name was Kik-Kik. The boy didn't like that because his name was Dong-ho. The sergeant wanted to know what he wanted, and the fat guy said it was nothing special. He just wanted a challenge against him. Kang ordered the chubby guy to take him down, something he was willing to do. The sergeant didn't like being underestimated, while Kang warned that the little pebble wouldn't stand a chance against that giant guy. He immediately started using his ability, and the chubby guy got a little scared, being immediately grabbed by the sergeant. He said the guy did have impressive strength, but he had already been warned, because he wasn't the only one who could gain weight. Immediately, the sergeant realized something was wrong. As soon as the protagonist arrived at school, the students wouldn't stop murmuring. Approaching his colleague, he asked what had happened. Apparently, he still didn't know anything. The news had spread that morning and the boy started to feel anxious. She touched one of her colleagues, asking her to show them as well. She was surprised that he didn't know about this yet, considering he belonged to the same club as that person. The protagonist wanted to know what happened to Sung-ho, and it was best if he saw it for himself. He was shocked by that video. His colleague was inside an alley and started fighting with a very fat boy. The ground beneath them began to crack. Sung-ho wasn't able to throw the obese guy to the ground. He was being crushed by the weight of that creature. The protagonist kept watching the video until the obese guy fell on top of the sergeant. He got up right after that, revealing that Sung-ho had been seriously injured. It was impressive that the sergeant had been defeated, but they still needed to find out who those people were. The girl said it was the Special Education Brigade of the 998th, the militarized school that would be conducting joint training with them in 2 weeks. With all the students gathered, they were about to start the meeting, as they already knew what happened to Sung-ho. The 9 students in that room were the best in each class. The older ones had been tasked with devising a strategy, but they also wanted to hear from their peers. The protagonist wanted to know what Sung-ho had said so far, but they couldn't enter the infirmary yet. Visiting him was a bit complicated at the moment, but it was better that way. That left the protagonist feeling sad. They couldn't believe the boy had been defeated in such a way. Some wanted revenge right away. They also wanted to know what they could do until the sergeant recovered. He wouldn't be able to participate for a while, so he had called that meeting to discuss their strategy. The boy no one knew believed he should be the new leader. The blonde one hoped he hadn't come just to see other students fighting. Kim also wasn't willing to blindly follow the older students, as they didn't seem very smart. That greatly offended one of them. He knew the girl was the famous White Jade Goblin. She confirmed it, saying that unlike him, at least she was famous. That left the boy extremely offended, until the master of ceremonies asked them to stop, or she would have to report them to the teachers. Their colleagues calmed down again. She asked the younger ones to stop provoking as well. First, she would share the information she received from the school itself. Inside each of the camps, there would be a container with a button inside. The group that pressed the opponent's button first would win. Their school had approximately 900 students. The problem was that their opponent, the 998th school, had over 3,000 students, an overwhelming numerical advantage. They didn't know how they were supposed to win. She asked the newcomers to stay calm because she hadn't finished explaining yet. Even though they had a numerical advantage, her side had a defensive advantage, which would balance things out. And if they resisted for 5 hours, they would win the challenge. In other words, if their defense was strong, they would win. Now she would talk about the boy who defeated the sergeant, Dongho. There wasn't much information about him, but from the video, it was clear that he could manipulate his weight. There were no other relevant details about him. The protagonist realized that this was the worst ability his friend could face. He was right. Sungho grabbed the obese guy, but wasn't able to throw him to the ground. That could be a real danger to them. Deep in thought, the protagonist believed that his friend hadn't lost just because of that. The other boy in the video was Kang Jino. He was one of the top students at the rival school. He had spent some time in Australia before transferring back. In middle school, he participated in several competitions. He had competed against Sungho and won every time. The protagonist wanted to know more about this guy's ability. From some notes they had gathered, he became stronger when he got angry. That was a very similar ability to the one the protagonist had. Kang had already defeated their sergeant in the past, and now he had been beaten by the obese guy. The 998th school was using the recordings to manipulate public opinion, creating a positive image of themselves and claiming that Sungho was weak. That made the protagonist burn with anger. They had located the empty room where the fight had been filmed. That could only mean one thing: everything had been planned. That was all the information they had for now. The problem was that they couldn't prove it was a trap, as the media would focus on the sensationalist aspect. It didn't take long for the protagonist to realize that his friend might have been provoked. A background student asked him to calm down and not get worked up every time his boyfriend's name was mentioned. Another boy realized that he was the newcomer named Jin-sung. He had wanted to meet him for a long time. Sergeant Sungho relies too much on surprise attacks. After hearing that, the protagonist became irritated. He advised the boy to pay attention to what he said from now on. But the boy believed he was right and that the video was proof of it, claiming that the sergeant's ability was overrated. Those words made the protagonist even angrier. The boy said he didn't need to listen to the protagonist because he was a corporal and his talent was rank B. Little by little, the protagonist was getting more and more irritated, and the boy continued provoking him as his rank and ability were superior. Meanwhile, the protagonist kept asking for the name and rank of that guy, until he finally realized what was happening. The aura around the protagonist had completely changed. In a threatening manner, he demanded that the idiot state his name and rank immediately. But he could barely answer as he was paralyzed by fear. The protagonist said he was very stubborn, and that he should remain a little shit because that was what he was good for. Looking at the other background character, he recognized that the topic made him sensitive, and he thanked him for being understanding about it. The boy, who was also scared, said it was normal to get heated sometimes. After that intimidation, the meeting had completely changed. The protagonist wanted to know if Sungho had prepared any strategy. He had planned a formation for each of the paths, but hadn't gone beyond that stage. One of the boys thought that strategy was risky. They could be invaded from the sides, but the side roads were very narrow. That didn't reduce the risk as they could still be attacked from those paths. The protagonist started thinking about his friend's strategy. He believed the enemy would attack through the center, based on the friendly match proposed by the other school. He believed their opponents expected them to be passive and focus only on defense. They wanted to destroy the school's public reputation. He suggested they change the strategy and concentrate their forces in the center, spreading the least amount to the sides. That made the other boy even more scared, because he believed the side path was essential for their defense. The girl also agreed with her colleague on that point. The protagonist's idea was very risky, and indeed, common sense was on their side. But thinking about the information in the video, he realized that Kang liked to humiliate people. It was impossible to fight him using common sense. He suggested that the sergeant protect the button. One of his colleagues warned that if they lost this way, their reputation would be ruined. The girl wanted to know if he believed the sergeant would be defeated again, which he didn't believe. He should be placed in the rear because he was the strongest fighter they had. The more he spoke, the less his words made sense. Even so, some of his colleagues started to agree with him. Kim made it clear that she didn't agree with the part about him being the strongest, but she also agreed with the strategy. The purpose of that meeting was to share the strategy. They would meet a few more times to refine the plan. Planning wasn't exactly the focus of these guys. One boy said they just needed to listen to what he had to say. The boy who had been intimidated approached the protagonist. He wanted to know what that clown wanted from him. He believed the boy had come just to say what he couldn't in front of the others. The girl quickly intervened. The protagonist said the boy needed to learn a lesson. She only asked that they not hurt each other. The background character laughed and said that the protagonist was just a recruit. Unlike him, one day he would be the best student in that place. The protagonist had to hold himself back because the background character was really asking to get what he deserved. Outside, he allowed the protagonist to attack first. He started analyzing the boy before the fight. His eyes could track the target's trajectory, identifying his power and limitations. Agreeing to the advantage, the protagonist decided to strike first. With a dagger in hand, he had already closed the distance to the boy, who was impressed by his speed. But that wasn't enough, because he had already managed to identify the trajectory of the attack. He was very surprised by the combination of movements, because that student could change his movements very quickly. The protagonist noticed something interesting, and changed the position of his dagger. The background character was still able to see all the movements. Even so, he ended up getting hit in the face. He had to create distance because he was in danger. That opponent was truly dangerous and didn't even need a knife to prove it. He needed to focus intensely to understand what was happening. The protagonist suggested that they increase the speed, returning to attack the background character with great dedication. This time, the boy would focus on the flow of energy to avoid the attacks. Unexpectedly, he was faced with multiple possibilities. He wasn't able to keep up with everything and was caught off guard. He should have already been able to read his opponent. The protagonist said that he was the one who started this fight, so he better not ask for compensation for it. Only then did the boy realize that his clothes were completely torn. The background character had said he would become the best student, but people who don't even bother to train their own bodies will never be better than him. And he asked if the bird-brained corporal understood that. The students were on a field exercise. They had no choice but to try. They had failed to convince the older students in the meeting and opted for a defensive strategy, dividing the classes among the three paths. The freshmen would hold off the attackers, while the veterans would advance against the other school. Since they didn't have a numerical advantage, splitting their forces seemed like the best option. The real problem was Kang. He had a feeling that the guy would head straight for the main force. He was sure Kang wanted to defeat Sumgo once again. He knew that the zombie squad wouldn't be enough to defend that lake. The protagonist was caught off guard by the voice of someone he had just met. It was the bird-brained corporal, introducing himself for duty. He didn't know what this guy had misunderstood. He said he had been very immature, shouldn't have believed false rumors, and apologized for his behavior. The protagonist wasn't even aware of those rumors. Apparently, people were spreading that he used his connections with Summo to gain favor, and that he had bribed reporters and teachers for it. He couldn't believe people would actually fall for something so absurd. But what the bird brain had witnessed personally shattered those rumors, and he ended up feeling inspired by him. The protagonist's colleagues wanted to know who this new guy was. The boy said he was the new member of the famous zombie squad, who were excited about the addition of a freshman. The protagonist continued being completely ignored, so he decided to speak with the bird-brained corporal. To belong to the group, he had to join the weightlifting club, whose leader was Sumho, someone he despised. The bird-brained corporal said he was ashamed of his past and hoped to have the opportunity to redeem himself. Looking at him, the protagonist wanted to know if the boy could follow orders during that training. He said that all the freshmen would follow his commands. This could actually contribute to the training's outcome. He said the bird-brained corporal would be a temporary addition. He was quite happy with that, affirming that he would be useful. Now maybe they had a chance. Sumho was protecting the container that held the button. His eyes were highly focused, and the energy surrounding him was also filled with determination. The students were communicating within the battlefield. Their rival school was really well organized, but they were having trouble getting in touch with one of their divisions. It could be the result of someone's abilities. The boy suspected that the problem wasn't with the equipment, until he heard a voice on the other end. He asked who was on the other side. The boy introduced himself as a student from the other school. His name was Jinsung. That name sounded familiar. Someone said he was the Class F assassin, the boy who had defeated 200 students alone. They started wondering what had happened to that division. Over the radio, they started hearing several screams saying they were being attacked by zombies. That was quite terrifying to hear. They kept listening to the transmission. The students were calling for reinforcements. Since they needed to assess the situation, one of them asked for additional teams to be sent. They continued communicating through the radio. They learned that one of the teams was retreating. The target had someone with explosive-related abilities. They weren't aware of anything like that. On the battlefield, there were several twisted metal pieces. The blonde boy was grateful that the trash had all gathered, because now it was time for him to have some fun too. Any object he extracted could be used as a tool, regardless of its weight. The girl hurled a rebar at her opponents, who were terrified of what could happen. Getting hit by that would be too dangerous. It was a guaranteed trip to the infirmary. The boy was having a great time. Those scobells could be used as weapons through his ability. He was upset about being the only non-veteran in that team, but seeing his opponents running away made him feel amazing. He was also curious to see what she could do with her ability. Showing off his armor, he said it was time to show the boy what he was capable of. The shining armor boosted the morale of his companions. If its user believed they could block the attack, it wouldn't take any damage. Immediately, he began to energize his allies. On the other side, they saw the enemy attack squad approaching. They needed to be prepared. They were soon caught off guard by the glowing armor, which wouldn't stop shining. The girl was already subduing some opponents. More and more students were pushing through enemy lines. Some of them needed to stay in the back line to support their teammates. The girl ordered squad number 1 to form up, because they were about to show those cowards what they were really made of. Finally, they managed to force that enemy platoon to retreat to their base. They also needed to grab more equipment to continue advancing. While she was speaking, a boy appeared behind her. He said he couldn't believe those idiots had already run away. He knew the girl belonged to the team of his rival, the one who ended up in the hospital. He told them to bring Sumgo to the battlefield. His punch was so powerful that the girl was sent flying. Her friends were very worried, but she said her armor could withstand it. Kang felt like he was going to have moments of joy and fun. He was just as violent as the reports had said. He asked if she was dating anyone because she was a very beautiful girl, but she would never give a chance to someone who flirted as badly as he did. Once again, he asked for a chance. If she kept rejecting him like that, his ears would rot. She warned her soldiers that it was time for revenge. Kang said they were all useless, and that they should just bring Sumho already. If there was one thing he hated, it was weak people pretending to be strong. His presence was truly overwhelming. His ability transformed his rage into power. The boy said that the smoke was capable of burning skin. The girl warned them to be careful of the smoke that wouldn't stop spreading. Seeing that the smoke was dangerous for them, he became even more furious. Then, he made it disappear. Some students began to think that he might be weakened, and they immediately advanced against him, because they couldn't let him buy time to release the smoke again. Kang said he was extremely irritated with those pieces of trash. With his hands, he managed to grab 2 of them, throwing their bodies to the ground. That was enough to injure the students. Not even the safety bracelet could prevent them from taking damage. But the girl was agile and managed to dodge the smoke and get close to the boy. Once again, he asked her for a chance to go out with him. The girl was already out of patience. He said she should have accepted while he was still being polite, but her armor began to shine intensely, completely blinding the arrogant fool. That gave her time to rescue her comrades. That only made him even angrier, and the girl began to feel more concerned. He suggested that he would beat them until they stopped breathing. To withstand his attacks, she had to create a protective barrier. That idiot's strikes were indeed powerful. He couldn't understand how that barrier could be so resistant. Even so, the uncontrollable brute managed to defeat all of them. She needed to hold him off until the injured could be evacuated. He was waiting for his opponent to do something because he wanted someone to show up already. The girl said he didn't deserve their captain's time. That only made him even more unhinged. Finally, she was informed that the wounded had been removed. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for to escape. But then something unexpected happened. He wasn't wasting time with her. The girl hadn't realized her legs were in that condition. Since her legs were trapped up to her knees, the boy was eager to find out what would happen if he struck her from the side. She did everything she could to keep resisting his assaults. Since she was trapped, she wouldn't be able to defend herself the same way. Her defense began to crack, and the boy realized that it wasn't indestructible. He said everyone had left her behind. Now he could find out what would be faster, breaking her shield or burying her in the ground. He made these comments just to try and scare her. Being ignored only made him angrier. Only then did he realize she hadn't been left alone. He had to dodge a massive boulder that came crashing down toward him. A voice told his ally to get out of there as well. Several boulders were being launched through the air. That enraged Kang even more, because he had to avoid those rocks as they could actually hurt him too. As they fled, objects continued falling from the sky. Thanks to the blonde boy, she was able to escape. He had thrown everything within his reach as the situation seemed urgent. That caused him to get seriously hurt. Knowing that his participation was crucial, she asked him to rest for a while. The boy knew he was the treasure of that place. As soon as he lost consciousness, she said he would be perfect if he could just control his own attitude. Her colleague asked if she was ignoring that on purpose. That path had been blocked. They needed to consider regrouping on another route now, but their enemies could clear the obstruction. Since the situation had changed, they needed to rethink their strategy. She said that Kang managed to escape. He had probably taken one of the other paths. The guy was looking for Sungho. Once he discovered that he wasn't on the front line, there would only be one place left to check. Both she and the protagonist knew he would head for the center. The bird-brained corporal thought their side would be attacked, but that wasn't how this person acted. And the center was the closest place to the rear line. The bird-brained corporal wanted to know what they would do now since he was sure reinforcements would soon arrive to attack. Faced with this problem, the protagonist started thinking. He asked if the bird-brained corporal could lead the freshmen. They needed to act now to resolve this stalemate. The boy asked if the chief and the zombie squad were heading for the center. He would do it, as long as the bird-brained corporal could hold that position. He was still a little apprehensive, but he said that by leading his colleagues, he would do his best. The boy had seemed irresponsible before, but he was adapting quickly. Kim continued defending her position. Everyone realized that the outcome would depend on the defense of the center. They needed to get there before Kang did. The students from the rival school were already very exhausted. They were relying on the fat guy's strength, but he was already worn out. Every time he tried to increase his weight, that crazy girl with the sword tried to cut him down. They started getting scared, wondering what Kang would do to them. The problem was that the girl had already defeated 200 students completely alone. And of course she would do that. She was the White Jade Goblin. Terrified, they thought about running away immediately. That was when Kang appeared to ask what they were planning to do. Finally, that bastard had shown up. She hadn't expected him to be so fast. He was surprised to recognize the girl, the prodigy of Hyundai. That was what his rival had also said. He didn't hesitate to charge at her, thinking she was nothing more than a pathetic existence, surprising her with a strike, which she properly blocked with her sword. Kim wouldn't let herself be intimidated, even though she was pushed back by that attack. Now she could feel that his combat ability was also at level A. Since she had no choice, she would have to use that other ability. It was better to try than to regret it later. It was incredible. This guy couldn't see a beautiful woman in armor without immediately flirting with her. Truly a caged beast. He said he had destroyed the other girl's armor with his bare hands. Kim knew exactly who he was talking about. Even though the armors looked similar, they were completely different. The boy believed he would destroy hers as well. Kim said he had been warned. He was impressed by what was happening, because the attack was strong enough to negate his power. He realized that she defended with the cape and attacked with the sword. The girl said she hadn't asked for his opinion on what was obvious. He acknowledged her talent, which only made him even angrier. Furious, he said she was extremely impertinent and was willing to take her down, launching a devastating attack. She knew that the smoke took up space because it had mass. If she dodged, the people behind her could get hurt. She wouldn't let that happen. Using her cape, she managed to stop the attack from advancing. That attack definitely wouldn't work against her. The guy who flirted terribly became even more furious, charging at his opponent completely out of control. He tried to hit her in every possible way but couldn't. The girl knew that he was fueled by his own rage. As long as he was angry, he would be able to keep attacking. Her options were to either calm down that brute or defeat him in a single strike. He realized that the girl had multiplied, being caught off guard by her attack. It seemed like he had already forgotten he was fighting a goblin. Enraged, he said that wasn't fair. Seeing that the fat guy tried to help, he asked where the slide was. He learned that they couldn't install it now. He then coerced the fat guy into obeying. He warned that he would contact the other team. The girl wanted to know which team that was. Then her eyes caught something. The canyon was far from them and she couldn't understand what was being planned in that place. Until the fragments of stone began to levitate. Someone capable of manipulating matter was using the terrain as a strategic advantage for a surprise attack. Because of that, they had to retreat to avoid losing the battle. The troops advanced quickly because a slide had been constructed. She couldn't afford to be distracted as Kang was still there. The girl started using her clones again, but he said it was already too late to try that strategy. He could sense that his opponent was exhausted. That armor must require a lot of energy. The girl had to decide whether to fight or destroy the slide. She was confident that she could defeat him, but it was visible on her face that she was already drained and wouldn't last more than a few minutes. Knowing this, she decided she would finish him off once and for all. But something unexpected was happening. The zombie squad was preventing the students from advancing. She was overjoyed by what her almost boyfriend was doing. Kang said they were just a bunch of useless weaklings. Filled with rage, she ordered him to watch his mouth when talking about the one who would be her husband. Kang was startled to see that the girl had gotten angry over that comment. He was beginning to calm down. He had gone easy on her because he thought she was very beautiful. But now that he knew she was in love with someone else, he realized he had made a mistake. So it was time to end this fight. Activating level 3 of his ability, his kicks became even more powerful. She also felt that sudden change. The energy that was once hot was now as cold as ice. She couldn't even notice the boy's movements. Barely, she managed to shield herself with her cape. She was able to notice that his attack pattern had changed once again. He was stronger and faster. Kim had to gain some distance to rethink her strategy, while the boy declared that he would finish her off quickly. The two began exchanging numerous blows. Kang warned that defending with her cape or sword was completely useless. That forced the girl to retreat even more. She knew she needed to perfect that armor, but her friends no longer needed her. Kang warned that he wouldn't allow her to surrender. With her sword in hand, she asked him what he thought was happening now. The armor had completely disappeared, and the blade she carried had grown even larger. The great light could be seen from all over that battlefield. The boy realized that she wanted to end everything with a single strike. He wouldn't fall for such a foolish strategy. She told him he was even dumber than she had imagined, revealing to him that she could still make clones. Now Kang was truly scared. That girl still had tricks up her sleeve. Now he understood where all her confidence came from. Kim asked him to stand still and receive that attack, please. Multiple slashes were flying toward the boy, and a massive explosion occurred due to the destruction. That move left Kim completely exhausted. Some of her comrades began celebrating, but she hadn't finished off the enemy with that attack. Even she couldn't believe it. If he had blocked the attack, the other students behind him wouldn't have been affected. He didn't care about his own team. They believed he had jumped off the cliff before being hit. The boys were certain that the protagonist wouldn't have acted that way. Hearing this, Kim wanted to know where her future husband was. Now safe, Kang acknowledged that he had barely escaped. It was time to continue advancing as planned. He didn't understand why the fat guy was still there, as he should have moved ahead already. Waiting for his arrival was the protagonist, who didn't want the match to end without them facing each other. It didn't take long for the two to start fighting. Kang knew that he was from Class F. He assumed he was there to take revenge for his friend. The answer to that was a bit unclear. Seeing that Kang wouldn't stop talking, he asked if he was getting tired because if that was the case, he would let him catch his breath. Once again, the arrogant fool became deeply enraged. The drone wouldn't come there to film the battle. He could lie and say an accident happened, thus saving his life. Even in the face of that threat, the protagonist suggested that he try. Something Kang definitely would try, but in practice, charging at his opponent mercilessly. But the boy's strikes weren't capable of harming the protagonist. He was about to surprise him with a kick. But that attack had also been blocked. Faced with such strength, the protagonist was not impressed at all. That only made Kang even more frustrated. Something the protagonist wanted to make that guy use his full power. After hearing those words, Kang said the boy would deeply regret it. He ordered the fat uncle to get out of there because he was about to activate level 4 of his ability. It could only be used with permission. He would explain everything later because that worm was far too resilient. Knowing what could happen, the fat guy started evacuating the area. The protagonist said that if they wanted to run, they could use the stairs. They knew that would take them to the rear of their formation. The protagonist warned that if they weren't going to flee, they could stay and fight as well. Knowing what awaited them, they decided to climb the stairs. Kang said it was too late for the boy to leave there alive. His eyes began to glow dangerously, and he screamed as if he had lost control. At level 4, he was consumed by madness, and his development accelerated at an alarming rate. The energy of his power started engulfing the entire area. Targets that were not as emotionally intense as the user were not affected by the smoke. The user would have no memory of what he did at level 4. The protagonist waited for the transformation to finish, only to be immediately surprised by his opponent, who could now deliver precise and violent attacks. But the dagger was able to withstand them, and the protagonist dodged the first strike. Yet he could feel that his enemy had become much more powerful. Being surprised once again, he noticed that the boy was also much faster. He needed to dodge that attack. The force was so immense that the ground was destroyed. Even so, the protagonist was not hit. Kang remained completely out of control, unleashing that mysterious smoke against his target. It managed to immobilize the opponent, who wouldn't be able to evade the next strike. The devastating impact occurred between them, creating a massive trail of destruction. Smoke with such density was truly unusual. If Kang had used that against Kim, the protagonist wasn't sure if she could have won. While he was thinking, his enemy had already approached. Knowing that Kang liked to humiliate people, he was sure Kang wouldn't want to fight like this without remembering anything. However, Kang had found someone on whom he could test all his abilities. Revealing part of his own power, Kang hesitated for a moment. The protagonist began to smile menacingly, because now an even more dangerous creature had emerged, and he had found someone with whom he could unleash his full potential. The fat guy knew they had to warn that their comrade was using level 4. What was strange was that the other boy had no reinforcements at all and still allowed them to pass through the stairs. As soon as they reached the rear, they encountered someone. It was Sunho, who hadn't heard anything about the failure in his team's defense. Finding your strongest warrior that was not ideal. It could mean they had walked into an ambush. But he made sure to clarify that he was completely alone. It was up to them whether to believe him or not. Not to mention, he had been waiting to meet the fat guy again. The squad confirmed that Sungho was entirely alone in that place, which was a relief for the fat guy who believed he could defeat him. Immediately, the surgeon activated his ability, but he didn't attack the fat guy first. Instead, he took out his companions. Even so, the fat guy believed he would win against the sergeant. He said that the boy with the dagger should have been there instead. The sergeant knew who the boy with the dagger was and became intrigued. All the fat guy had to do was defeat him, but Sungho was grateful for what his friend had done. He looked back as that massive figure advanced toward him. His ability allowed him to increase his weight up to 20 times. He managed to grab the sergeant, but he was completely shocked by what happened next. Ever since his last defeat, he had been wondering where he had gone wrong. Many thoughts had crossed his mind, and the answer was not in his opponent, because everything he had considered up until now had just been excuses. The truth was, he simply wasn't strong enough. The sergeant managed to lift the obese fighter, who was utterly terrified by that display of strength. Sungho was deeply determined. His eyes shone brightly. When he slammed the fat guy into the ground, it looked as if an asteroid had collided with Earth. Meanwhile, the protagonist was having an incredible time, because now he could finally test his full potential. His goal was still to gain complete control over himself, but in this particular situation, that wouldn't be possible. He furiously charged at his victim. The impact between them was astonishing. Kang was thrown straight into the rocky wall. Because he was overpowered, he became even more furious. Screaming like a wild, uncontrollable beast, the protagonist knew he wasn't capable of doing that. If he kept holding back, he wouldn't be able to take that person's life. The two charged at each other again. They were on a collision course. Moving quickly, they exchanged multiple blows in that place, until Kang decided to gain an advantage by increasing his height. His body was already covered in numerous cuts. From above, he started exhaling even more of that mysterious smoke. But the protagonist could dodge it easily, and he began climbing the wall to reach his target. He was about to catch Kang by surprise. Even though his opponent was strong, it wasn't enough to impress him. The two clashed violently once again. The protagonist's desire wasn't just to win, it was to take that life. The power of both fighters was truly monstrous. Kang couldn't withstand that last attack and fell to the ground. As he tried to get up, he was met by the protagonist, who was no longer interested in fighting as he considered him too weak. Kang took some time to process that information. As the protagonist approached his fallen opponent, he asked what he was doing, saying he shouldn't run away. He wanted to see more of that pink smoke, because it was time to end this once and for all. With his dagger, he was about to finish off that boy, who did everything he could to preserve his life, completely terrified. The powerful strike kicked up a large cloud of dust, but the attack wasn't fatal. The protagonist made sure to strike the ground instead. Just barely, he managed to prevent something worse from happening. If he hadn't restrained his strength, Kang would have left that place crippled. Kang's ability had also ended, and he didn't remember anything at all. Looking at his body, he couldn't understand why he was injured or why his ability had been deactivated. The protagonist told him he was lucky not to remember anything. He had heard that Kang had defeated Sungho in the past, and he couldn't wait to give this guy a beating too, but he realized that the experience was frustrating. Kang was furious at being compared to his rival, but he was incapable of feeling anger, as his body was still trembling in fear. He didn't understand why he was shaking so much, and the protagonist told him that even if his mind didn't remember, his body certainly did. With that, they had finished their business, and the protagonist told him to return to his base. Even after hearing and experiencing all of that, Kang retreated full of doubts. He warned that one day the protagonist would regret this. The truth was that regretting what he had done was highly unlikely. Kang was almost at the end of that path, and he came face to face with his old rival, because it was him who was going to defeat him for real. Kang wanted to know what had happened to the fat guy on his team, but what had happened needed no explanation. He could see it with his own eyes. He couldn't believe the fat guy had been defeated like that. His opponent must have used some kind of trick. Some of it didn't need any tricks. Today he was stronger because he hadn't trained himself to failure. Kang, who always talked too much, tried to belittle his opponent. That was why his left arm was now completely injured. And in the end, he was nothing and would remain nothing. Sungho acknowledged that fighting him would be a bit difficult. Seeing the boy taking off his clothes, he became quite concerned. He saw that he was carrying a weighted vest. Kang warned that it wouldn't make any difference, but he was very surprised to see how heavy it actually was. Since both were already badly injured, the fight between them would be evenly matched. Kang was about to throw more insults, but the sergeant wanted to start hitting him immediately. Now he realized that he had been caught off guard, being brutally slammed into the ground. Regaining his footing, he continued cursing his opponent. This time, he would use the strength of his legs, ready to finish the sergeant once and for all. The force of their clash was brutal. Sungho said there was something he had been curious about. He wanted to know why he wasn't attacked that day in the alley, and he finally realized something interesting. Over the past 3 years, he had gotten stronger, but the same couldn't be said for Kang. That remark made Kang extremely angry, releasing that aggressive pink energy. But it wasn't enough to make the sergeant afraid, even though he was brutally hurled away, crashing against the rocky wall. He said that his enemy was fighting without thinking, and that was his biggest mistake in this fight. He knew that Kang was capable of fighting with his head. After dodging the attack, he grabbed Kang once again, throwing his body against the rocky wall. Since he was already injured, that impact proved to be brutal. Thanks to his black belt in judo, he could use his opponent's strength to his own advantage. That fight had come to an end because his opponent was pathetic. Knowing that he was being washed, he asked Jinsung to reveal himself already. Jinsung hadn't realized he had been discovered. The sergeant knew the boy had been watching Kang. It seemed that the protagonist's plan had worked. But in his ideal plan, Sungho was supposed to be the opponent. Since he was injured, he wasn't going to try that. His arm was dislocated, and according to the combat rules, he couldn't compete. If Kank had still been wearing his bracelet, he would have let him go. Now he could retreat from there, hoping that his friend would finish the fight for them. Saluting, he said he had no choice but assured them that he would return soon. The zombie squad continued advancing through enemy lines. They were completely unstoppable. The enemies couldn't hold out against them. It was becoming very difficult to keep fighting. Before he could plan his strategy, he was caught off guard. The protagonist wanted to know what they planned to do with his squad. His arrival on the battlefield made his friends very excited. On the other hand, he couldn't believe the zombie squad had lasted this long. They had struggled after Kim left that place. Only a few minutes remained before they could win by time. The protagonist wasn't sure if he could reach the other side. His friends could hardly believe he wanted to attempt it. If he had more time, it wouldn't be difficult, but with less than half an hour, it would be extremely complicated. If he could control his ability better, he would have an advantage, but he still needed to refine it. He needed to control his body better. He thought about enhancing his legs to gain more speed. But improving his arms to fight more effectively was also interesting, until he realized that what he truly needed was the ability to think more clearly and analyze the battle. So, what he really needed were his eyes. The user could analyze the target's weaknesses and determine the easiest route to victory. The opposing team noticed that they had stopped advancing. Since time was running out, it didn't make sense for them to keep pushing forward. They also wouldn't be able to turn the tide of the battle. While they were distracted, the protagonist was approaching. Coming in alone like that was complete madness. They soon realized that this person was truly terrifying. Two men were drinking tea with great patience. The old man wanted to know what his friend had decided. The young man said he would certainly win. The weapon Jin Sung wielded was a sword. He would never lose to that. Admiring his confidence, the old man thought that was exactly what he needed to see in order to entrust his granddaughter to him. It was unacceptable for her to keep walking beside someone mediocre like him. The young man assured the elder that he wouldn't have to worry about that matter anymore. While they were talking, the protagonist had already secured victory. Even with the limited time, he had made it to the end. The young man declared that from then on, he would be responsible for taking care of the old man's granddaughter. To ensure you don't miss the next part, subscribe and activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tov's channel.